Protagonist Royce has been confined to a hospital bed for 5 years. He's been working hard to survive since he was a child, but one day his pathetic life was shattered by a doctor's death sentence, and now he can't even move a finger. The only thing left of his miserable life was reading a stupid comic book about a powerful dragon who brings entire empires to their knees. But suddenly his pulse began to drop, his eyes began to close, and the realization dawned: this wretched torture would finally end. But a sharp blow cut across his eyes, and at that very moment, someone's hands were already lifting him up. The protagonist looked at his reflection and was stunned. Reality didn't fit, because he had been reincarnated as a dragon, and his dear father was that same over-the-top monster from the comic. And then it dawned on him: in this comic, he was just meat, supposed to die at the very beginning. But now he knew the whole plot and firmly decided that he would not live another miserable, limited life. Then Royce reached for the book, to understand how everything in this world worked. Planting himself on an open volume, he studies the text with fierce concentration. He recalls that the year Yahello went berserk is a key event and decides it must matter. Reasoning that Yahello lost his child before going berserk, he concludes that finding that year will reveal when he himself is meant to die. The answer shocks him when he finds the date 3589 AC. He instantly understands that this is the year his death is scheduled. He hurriedly starts calculating the time remaining. Since the current year is 3090 AC, he works out that the fatal event lies between ages 498 and 499. That means he is destined to die 1 year before adulthood, still a child. He slams the book in denial and rejects that conclusion outright. Instead, he vows that for the next 499 years he will survive no matter what. His resolve hardens into a furious promise to fight life itself if necessary. That dramatic oath is interrupted by noise elsewhere in the mansion. At mealtime, he is happily devouring blue slime soup when the commotion continues around him. His caretaker pauses, confused by the noise while serving him. Unbothered, Louis cheerfully demands another bowl. The caretaker agrees at once, indulging him. He sets down a huge serving and tells Louis to eat as much as he wants. Before Louis can focus on the food, a strange flying insect-like construct enters the room. The creature lands on his bowl and nearly reaches his mouth with the slime. It clings to the spoonful that was about to be eaten. The caretaker reacts in horror and shouts for Louis to stop. He lunges across the table, knocking things aside to keep Louis from swallowing it. After snatching the creature away, he stares at it in alarm, trying to understand what just happened. He steadies himself and tells Louis he almost got into serious trouble. He explains that the bug is an artificial creature his father is researching and that adult dragons are safe from it, though a child might not be. When he adds that it is highly poisonous, Louis is horrified. The caretaker laughs it off, saying Louis should be fine since he did not actually eat it. Louis, still shaken, realizes he needs to pay much closer attention if death can come this suddenly. A little later, he wanders through the hall still thinking about survival. Trying to stay calm, he walks while reading, unaware of the danger around him. One of the armored guards suddenly activates, its eyes glowing red. The halberd-bearing automaton swings straight at the distracted child. Louis notices too late that something is wrong behind him. The blade comes down with lethal force. He freezes in terror as death seems certain again. The caretaker rushes in and grabs Louis out of the weapon's path at the last instant. With his free hand, he catches the halberd and stops the strike. His eyes flare with power as he prepares a counterattack. Dark violet energy surges from him and engulfs the rogue armor. The construct explodes under his attack. Once the danger is gone, he immediately checks whether Louis is hurt. Puzzled because the trap should not have targeted Louis, he calls the incident strange while Louis realizes he has nearly died twice in one day. A few days pass without further incidents, and Louis becomes convinced that something is actively trying to kill him. Even so, he is taken outside and delights in the beautiful world beyond the mansion. A towering mountain leaves him awestruck by its sheer scale. His caretaker explains that the peak is called the left fawn of the earth. He adds that it is one of the 2 gigantic mountains at the continent's edge and famous for sheltering many mysterious races. Louis compares it to the mountains from his old world and marvels at how much grander reality feels than books. His attention shifts when a bright blue butterfly flutters nearby. He chases it playfully while his caretaker watches with fond amusement. For a brief moment, Louis forgets his fear and simply enjoys the butterfly. Then the sky suddenly darkens with storm clouds. A bolt of lightning crashes directly toward him. The strike leaves him smoking and stunned, unable to believe what just happened. His caretaker sprints toward him in panic, calling his name. Before he can reach safety, a second bolt slams down on Louis. As he hangs there charred and twitching, Louis finally understands that the story itself seems to be targeting him. The storm crackles again overhead, preparing yet another strike. Louis rages at fate and the script for trying so hard to kill him. His caretaker catches the limp little dragon and cries out in despair. Later, back in bed, Louis trembles from the memory of the attack. He admits to himself that he truly almost died. Replaying the scene, he fixates on the absurdity of lightning striking the same spot 3 times. The image of his scorched body makes the pattern impossible to dismiss as coincidence. He concludes that such repeated attacks in so little time can only mean deliberate narrative pressure. At last he states the truth plainly: the script wants him dead. What he cannot understand is why it has started trying to kill him already. His destined death should still be 498 years away and at human hands, not by random accidents. He wonders if his determination to survive is what triggered the script's hostility. That leads to a worse thought. Perhaps the original story only begins once he dies. But if that is true, he cannot explain how the baby dragon in the webtoon survived for 500 years in the first place. The contradiction leaves him frustrated and overwhelmed. After a long silence, he forces himself to stop spiraling. He plants a paw down decisively and chooses action over confusion. There is no time to keep brooding when he needs a way to protect himself. He decides he must find something that can save him from this death mark. With that in mind, he runs off calling for his father. His father turns at the unexpected cry of Daddy, visibly delighted to hear it. As he pets Louis affectionately, Louis urgently asks whether there is any equipment at home that can protect him. His father says there is, but Louis is far too young to use such things. He explains that powerful equipment requires attribute power and considerable training to wield. To him, Louis is still just a child who can wait a few hundred years before learning. Louis flatly refuses to wait and demands to start learning now. His father is stunned by the intensity of that request. Louis doubles down, insisting he wants to learn immediately. The father can only stare in disbelief at how serious he is. He tries to object again by saying Louis is still too young. Louis counters with innocent logic, asking if being little is the only reason he cannot learn. His father awkwardly explains that dragons normally begin after infancy. Louis's shining eyes make it clear he has found an opening. Unable to resist that earnest look, the father finally gives in and agrees to teach him. Louis explodes with joy and pushes to begin at once. His father says there is somewhere they must visit before any training can start. He raises a finger as if introducing an important rule. He explains that when a dragon child first seeks to discover his own attributes, he must go before the elders. Louis is baffled by the sudden mention of elders. Even so, he eagerly follows his father outside, calling for him with excitement. His father laughs and indulges the enthusiasm. Louis then asks the practical question of how they are supposed to reach the elders. His father answers simply that they will fly. Dark purple power begins swirling around him as he prepares the journey. Louis braces himself against the rushing magic. Watching the vortex form, he suddenly realizes what is about to happen. He recognizes the spell as dragon transformation. In an instant, his father becomes a massive armored dragon towering over him. Louis is thrilled to finally see a real dragon in full form. The transformed father lowers a hand and invites Louis to climb on. Louis scrambles onto the offered palm, trying to look brave. His father tells him to hold on tight. Then the great dragon launches upward. As the ground drops away, Louis panics at the terrifying height. His father keeps climbing through the sky with effortless speed. Clinging desperately, Louis asks how high they are going. His father laughs and says they are still far from their destination. The dragon shoots even higher, leaving a white trail behind. Looking down at the world below, Louis wonders if they are about to break through the atmosphere and enter space. His father reassures him that they are almost there. Ahead of them, a radiant structure appears suspended in the star-filled sky. Louis can only stare and whisper that it looks like a goddess. His father explains that this is the sacred land of use, the dragons. He names the floating sanctuary Silverflower Castle. They descend and land before the immense white castle. Up close, Louis is overwhelmed by how much larger and grander it feels. His father returns to human form and leads him inside. They enter a grand chamber where the dragon elders sit around a central platform. A majestic white elder named Sandra, leader of the 13, acknowledges their arrival. Geneloser formally introduces himself as the son of Pamuz, while Louis nervously offers a timid greeting. Another elder, Bardus, notices the child and praises him, though Louis instantly recognizes him as an enemy from the story. Geneloser then addresses one elder as father, startling Louis. Pamuz, one of the 13 elders, notes that 623 years have passed since they last met and complains that he should have been allowed to see his grandson sooner. Geneloser defends himself by saying Louis was only born a month ago, making such a visit unreasonable. Pamuz grumbles but cannot really argue with that. When Louis timidly approaches, Pamuz studies him more closely. Louis notices something familiar in the elder's features. The resemblance becomes unmistakable as Pamuz looks back at him. Louis stares upward, piecing it together. Then he blurts out Grandpa in odd, affectionate confusion. The word hits Pamuz like a direct strike to the heart. Overjoyed, Pamuz immediately claims the title and boasts proudly about his handsome grandson. The other elders remark that Pamuz has longed for a grandchild for ages and is utterly smitten with his first one. Sandra brings the meeting back on track by asking whether they truly intend to determine Louis's attributes this early, and Geneloser explains that Louis himself asked to learn. Pamuz crows that such eagerness proves the boy takes after his grandfather, earning an exasperated rebuke from the others. With a weary sigh at Pamuz's antics, Sandra instructs Louis to step into the center. A nervous hatchling is brought before his father, who gently tells him to stay still because the coming test is routine. In a grand chamber ringed by dragon elders, the tiny dragon is placed at the center for his attribute appraisal. Though trying to look composed beneath the glowing device overhead, the child can barely hide his tension. With the ceremony underway, the white elder formally begins the examination. One dragon after another channels power into the ritual, starting with darker abstract energies. The remaining elders add their own elemental and conceptual forces until the circle is complete. Colored beams descend together on the hatchling as the appraisal activates in full. The child is dazzled by the spectacle before being guided to focus on the invocation. The white elder instructs him to close his eyes and call for the lifelong companion tied to his nature. He obeys with effort, concentrating despite his nerves. In a symbolic inner space, countless attribute signs appear before him, and one beckons him forward. His consciousness is drawn toward the chosen sign as the ritual responds. The white elder is startled when the first revealed attribute turns out to be time, an abstract power. Lewis's father instantly recognizes how extraordinary that result is. Thrilled, he recalls that abstract attributes surpass ordinary elemental ones and proudly declares his son a genius. Another elder checks the next result, and is caught off guard by a second rare attribute. The blue elder erupts in pride when that second power proves to be strength, making Lewis a dual attribute prodigy. The purple elder notes that such dual bursts are already uncommon among dragons, then senses yet another revelation. The white elder is shaken again when the third attribute appears as space, making Lewis a triple attribute anomaly. They compare him to the only two triple attribute dragons in history, legendary figures of overwhelming destiny and ruin. The elders remember that the dragon race has produced only those two triple attribute beings across its long history. They conclude that this child may be fated to carve out an entirely new chapter for dragonkind. Before they can settle, a fourth sign emerges and the elders realize Lewis also possesses a mental attribute. The sudden surge of four powers overwhelms the tiny dragon in the middle of the ritual. Even his father is forced to shield himself from the burst as the room flares with energy. Lewis ends up surrounded by the four abstract symbols, barely controlling the storm he has awakened. Trying to calm himself, he awkwardly gathers the floating powers close like unruly pets. He notices the elders staring at him strangely and senses that his result has gone far beyond normal. Their collective silence and fixed gazes make it clear that everyone is stunned by what he has become. Clutching his new symbols, Lewis can only ask why they are all looking at him like that. His father is too shocked to answer coherently at first. Later, Lewis sits alone and starts seriously thinking through the implications of what the appraisal revealed. He reviews the impossible truth that he possesses four abstract attributes: time, space, strength, and mental. Realizing such power could overturn the original story he remembers, he wonders whether he can survive the chaos it will attract. He suspects the plot has already changed because of his talent, and fears enemies may become even more desperate to kill him. That makes his gift feel hollow unless he can live long enough to mature and use it. For a moment the weight of that danger leaves him grim and speechless. Then he rallies himself by deciding that the same talent causing danger can also become his best chance to survive. He resolves to train hard, reminding himself that unlike the original Lewis, he has knowledge and initiative on his side. Because he remembers his previous life and the crisis ahead, he decides to exploit every advantage available. He first considers mastering magic that manipulates attributes directly. He also weighs a martial art that develops both body and attributes together, unsure which path is safer. Rather than choose, he begins to wonder if his monstrous talent lets him pursue both at once. Encouraged by his dragon body, abundant mana, and four attributes, he convinces himself that with enough effort it might be possible. Fired up, he opens the books and decides to begin training immediately. Before he can get far, his father arrives with a lavish bowl of attribute-rich food, saying Lewis has waited long enough. Smiling warmly, the father announces that it is time for his son to eat. Lewis's determination instantly wavers as the feast awakens his appetite. He rationalizes that even a long journey starts with a meal and begins reviewing the ingredients by attribute. The spread includes wind and thunder foods as well, though he notes that such concentrated energy would be dangerous to ordinary beings. He recalls that dragons can safely convert natural mana through their dragon hearts, which is why they can consume such a feast. Accepting that growth requires fuel, he decides he must eat heavily and mature as fast as possible. He stuffs himself so enthusiastically that he falls asleep mid-bite in front of the bowl. Watching him nod off, his father fondly concludes that the little one must be exhausted. Lewis is tucked into bed, sleeping peacefully with his rabbit doll beside him. As the room quiets, a small dark purple distortion appears above the sleeping child. The distortion condenses into a focused point as if preparing an attack. It spits out a fork-shaped projectile toward the bed. The fork fully materializes and drops with lethal speed. It plunges downward hard enough to stab into the floor. The weapon misses Lewis by a hair, embedding itself near the bed instead of in him. A shadowy mass then slips through the room toward the sleeping hatchling. The intruder moves silently through the chamber, unseen by the child. Outside, the isolated residence remains calm, hiding the danger within. When Lewis wakes later, he remembers only that he had been snacking before somehow falling asleep. His father calls him to get up and eat again, as if nothing unusual happened. Still groggy, Lewis climbs down from bed with his rabbit doll in hand. He suddenly loses balance and pitches forward for no clear reason. He lands face first in a clumsy heap, stunned by the random accident. Then he notices the fork standing upright where he nearly fell and realizes how close he came to impaling himself. Horrified, He recognizes this as yet another absurd death flag that almost killed him. As he laments how nonsensical his life has become, he notices the rabbit doll has been damaged. Seeing Toto broken shocks him far more than the near-death itself. Because the doll is the only thing he can really confide in, he decides to ask his father to repair it. At breakfast, his father immediately assumes Louis was heartbroken over Toto breaking. He tenderly promises that Papa will fix the doll perfectly. That word choice startles Louis, who is still not used to such openly affectionate parenting. He also realizes he somehow ended up back in bed again without remembering when. As his father calls him to eat, Louis notices Toto has already been repaired and can only answer awkwardly. Uneasy, he tells his father that something about his condition feels off. His father panics at once and fears Louis has been injured somewhere. Louis admits he cannot tell whether he is in pain, only that his memory is fuzzy and he keeps getting sleepy. The father pauses, thinking through the symptoms. He calmly explains that this is not injury but the approach of Louis's first sleeping phase. He says dragons undergo 2 long growth sleeps, and Louis's frequent drowsiness means the first one is near. Alarmed, Louis asks how long that sleep will last. The answer hits him like lightning when his father estimates roughly 100 years. Louis instantly connects that to his recent assassination attempts and realizes sleeping now would leave him helpless. He explodes in protest, convinced that a century of sleep is practically a death sentence. His father is left staring as Louis spirals into a full panic. Desperate, Louis ties a cloth around his head like a warrior preparing for battle. He resolves to devise a strategy to stay awake for as long as possible. His first rules are to avoid eating, avoid bathing, and avoid unnecessary movement so nothing makes him drowsier. He even bans himself from going near the bed because merely seeing it feels dangerous. With grim determination, he commits to staying awake no matter what. Despite that resolve, he soon staggers through the halls half asleep. He tries to keep moving and thinking, but exhaustion keeps dragging him down. His father chases after him with food, insisting that Louis needs nourishment. Louis resists while his father begs him to take just 1 spoonful. He escapes down the corridor as his father calls after him in alarm. After hiding in the library, Louis congratulates himself for narrowly avoiding being fed. He reminds himself that he cannot relax until he finds a true way to resist sleep. Searching for help, he opens a book that lists simple methods for staying awake. But reading itself immediately starts lulling him towards sleep. He slaps his cheeks and fights back, refusing to drift off so easily. Even so, his body keeps sagging under the weight of overwhelming drowsiness. He desperately shakes himself and screams inwardly for his mind to stay alert. Then he notices the cruel irony that the anti-sleep book itself warns against reading books. A sudden shout of his name jolts him awake before he fully blacks out. His father appears and gently asks whether he slept well. Louis immediately denies it, insisting he only dozed for a moment. His father congratulates him anyway, leaving Louis confused. The reason is devastating. While Louis thought he had merely nodded off, 100 years have passed, and it is now his 100th birthday. The truth is confirmed with the blunt announcement that a century has gone by. Much later, his father enters the room again calling for Louis. He brings another snack, only to realize something is wrong when there is no response. He finds Louis asleep on the floor amid stacks of books, having lost the battle against drowsiness. With amused affection, the father notes that his son fell asleep while reading that cute little guide. He lifts the sleeping Louis carefully and carries him back to bed. Though he regrets that Louis did not eat more before sleeping, he decides it cannot be helped now. Since the child is already fully asleep, the father can only hope the long slumber ends safely. He strokes Louis's head, says good night, and promises to see him tomorrow, even though tomorrow for Louis is far away. Afterward, the father returns to his desk and continues his lonely vigil. A sudden disturbance interrupts him and instantly puts him on edge. He rushes out demanding to know what happened. He discovers part of the room collapsing near the sleeping Louis and panics for his son. Even while sleep-talking nonsense, Louis seems unharmed, and his father frantically checks him for injuries. Seeing no sign of an external breach, the father realizes the danger came from within the structure itself. He is told that even the noble Periton wood legs of the furniture snapped for no apparent reason. Amid the wreckage, he stays beside Louis, shielding him from the debris. As years pass, mysterious accidents keep occurring around the sleeping child as if fate itself is trying to kill him. The pattern becomes impossible to ignore, with disasters striking in ways that look like deliberate murder attempts. Again and again Louis comes terrifyingly close to death while remaining asleep through it all. Unable to understand the cause, his father begins constructing magical safeguards by every means available. He sacrifices his own lifespan without hesitation, caring only that Louis remains protected. For 60 years he endures sleepless vigilance, counting every threat until the total reaches 4,120 incidents. Standing amid the aftermath of yet another crisis, he wonders whether someone is truly trying to assassinate his son. Yet the world has long forgotten dragons, and only a few outsiders even know they exist, making the attacks hard to explain. Since nearby beings would never harm a hatchling, he is left wondering whether all these attempts are somehow mere coincidences. Still unable to answer that question, he patrols the dark halls in tense uncertainty. His vigilance pays off when armored intruders are suddenly torn apart by the purple safeguards he set around the residence. The father steps into the room as the defensive magic swirls around him, confirming that this time the threat is real. His expression hardens with fury as he realizes mindless creatures dared target Lewis directly. More armed attackers gather beyond the doorway, surrounding the chamber despite the fallen bodies. The purple barrier surges through the corridor, hemming the invaders in. They charge anyway, only to be met by the father's overwhelming power. He raises a hand and condenses a dark spatial force to erase them. The attackers are shredded and swallowed by the violent purple void. The darkness expands through the corridor, consuming the remaining soldiers without mercy. What remains is only a shrinking pocket of blackness around the last terrified intruders as the father's counterattack closes in. Dark spatial power erupts and tears through the attacking knights before they can touch him. The purple blades multiply into a storm that completely overwhelms the ambush. The long-haired dragon man steels himself, already sensing this bloodshed was unavoidable. When the smoke clears and the corridor is filled with fallen guards, he bitterly accepts that it could not be helped. A great dragon tells him that true geniuses are always forced to endure repeated trials. He is warned that many hardships still await Lewis in the future. The dragon compares Lewis's fate to the tragedy that befell the first Dragon King. Horrified, the father realizes Lewis may be targeted simply because his talent is too overwhelming. He rejects that possibility outright and refuses to accept such a fate. Defying destiny itself, he vows to protect Lewis from anything that threatens him. Back in the present, the story shifts to the quiet estate where Lewis now lives. A tiny white dragon named Lois studies his reflection and wonders about himself. He inspects his face more closely, trying to see whether anything has changed. After a moment of self-appraisal, he wonders if he has grown up even a little. His pride collapses when he remembers that after sleeping for 100 years he has barely grown at all. The lost century suddenly feels painfully real, and he laments how much of his life vanished unnoticed. Then he realizes with surprise that despite all that time passing, he is still alive. That thought brings back memories of how dangerous his waking life used to be. He remembers being on the verge of death almost every day whenever he was awake. So he concludes that hibernation may have been the only time he was ever truly safe. He falls silent, trying to make sense of that strange consolation. In the end, he decides the reason matters less than the simple fact that he survived. His father cheerfully calls him downstairs for dinner, and Lois answers at once. Seeing his father's tired face, Lois wonders if age is finally catching up to him. Remembering his own disasters and constant near-death experiences, he concludes that he really has lived a tragic life. Still, he resolves to behave better from now on and be an obedient hatchling. He runs after his father with childish affection, calling for him to wait. The two head down the hall together, with Lois already complaining that he is hungry. Lois tells his father to rest more, and the father laughs it off even as the concern lingers between them. Elsewhere on the mountain estate, Lewis trains alone beneath a tree in the bright open field. The old tree stands as his target while he practices in secret. The white-haired boy raises a wooden sword and commits to a full strike. His swing lands with far more force than expected. The impact explodes outward, blasting the tree apart and startling even him. The broken wooden blade tumbles into the grass, proving how much power he accidentally put into it. As he catches his breath, a servant calls out to him from nearby. Lewis pauses and turns toward the voice. He looks back to find someone urgently calling for Master Lewis. The call repeats, pulling his attention fully away from training. He faces the newcomer, calm but curious. A towel is offered to him with nervous formality. Lewis accepts it, only mildly surprised by the awkward delivery. The one beneath the towel is revealed to be a tiny fairy maid hovering in front of him. The fairy excitedly praises him for adapting to human form so naturally and declares that he truly is of the holy dragon bloodline. Lewis, unimpressed by the flattery, asks what she actually wants. He tells Finn to stop calling him master, especially after 100 years have already passed. Finn refuses, insisting that he is genuinely her master. She explains that for fairies, serving superior dragons is considered a great honor. That makes Lewis reconsider her devotion from a different angle. He recalls that sometime after his first hibernation, a strange gift had been prepared for him. While reading in the manor, his attention had been drawn to something unusual nearby. A large ribbon box sat in the room, quietly waiting to be opened. Hearing movement from inside, he realized the gift was somehow alive. The box began to shake and groan as if something trapped inside was struggling for air. A panicked voice from within begged for oxygen, turning the situation absurd. Lois was so shocked by the living present that he could only stare in disbelief. When the lid opened, a tiny winged figure burst out wildly and crashed into him. He flailed in confusion as the fairy ricocheted away. The fairy dropped to the floor in a daze while Lois watched, stunned. Not understanding what fairies were, he mistook her for some kind of giant insect. Acting on that assumption, he poked her with a stick to test whether the strange creature was dangerous. Finn, humiliated and trembling, could only ask what kind of treatment this was. Then she suddenly recognized that the one tormenting her was the holy baby dragon she had been sent to serve. She hurriedly composed herself and tried to regain dignity. Introducing herself as Finn of the Starlight Fairy royalty, she grandly announced that she would bring him pleasure in the future. Lois responded by silently lifting her like an object, too baffled to react properly. Finn had to awkwardly ask him to put her down before continuing. Once released, Lois asked what she meant by bringing him pleasure. With theatrical suspense, Finn prepared to reveal the answer. She proudly unveiled a special gift supposedly prepared just for the holy baby dragon. The gift turned out to be an enormous disguise wardrobe filled with outfits. Finn boasted that it included both male and female clothing because fairies were effectively genderless. She kept escalating the sales pitch with demon, angel, and limited edition costume options. Then she declared that the best part of the set was still yet to come. Posing dramatically, she revealed that the true centerpiece was herself, a perfect model who could wear any outfit. Lois realized in horror that the present was basically a living dollhouse set. He asked in disbelief whether he was supposed to use her as a living toy. Finn enthusiastically praised him for understanding immediately, taking his horror as approval. Her excitement only made the misunderstanding worse. Lois rejected the idea so violently that he sent her flying into the wardrobe. Later he asked his father why such a bizarre gift had been given, and learned it was considered the most desired present among hatchlings. Even so, he found the idea of treating a living being like a doll disturbing and decided he would send her back. Finn broke down in desperate tears and begged not to be thrown away. She argued that becoming a dragon's little companion was a path to honor, citing the first fairy king as proof. After days of pleading, she was finally allowed to stay as a subordinate instead of being discarded. Back in the present, Lewis reflects that Finn is 800 years old, knowledgeable, and unexpectedly useful in daily life. He brushes off her question and says he is going back to studying after finishing his exercise. He notes that Finn's spatial talent lets her store and retrieve things from subspaces like a personal drawer system. To help him, Finn opens one of those spaces and pulls out the book he needs. Lewis thanks her and announces he will continue studying advanced mana separation and manifestation. Finn casually sets up an entire tea table from subspace while he watches, impressed by how natural it is for her. He decides he should get used to this kind of magical convenience sooner rather than later. So Lewis studies outdoors while Finn hovers nearby and serves tea and desserts. Suddenly the sky darkens and the familiar signs of another lightning strike gather overhead. Lewis sighs because after only a few peaceful days, the deadly lightning has returned again. The storm condenses into a violent bolt aimed directly at him. The lightning tears downward with overwhelming force. Finn cries out in alarm, fearing he is about to be hit. Instead, Lewis reaches up calmly and draws the lightning into his hand. A bracelet-like device on his wrist begins absorbing the charge. He smiles, recognizing that his preparation is finally paying off. Having endured hundreds of strikes already, he realizes this is the breakthrough he has been waiting for. Finn identifies the device as a thunder elemental stone. She explains that it is a low-grade unstable attribute stone that fills as it absorbs lightning, though stronger power flows through it less efficiently. Seeing it fully charged, Lewis decides he needs to swap it out before the next strike. As he removes it, another bolt descends immediately and Finn panics. She screams for him just as the danger closes in. Lewis instantly casts a spatial barrier and blocks the lightning with a distortion field. Finn is stunned that he produced a spatial distortion field on reflex. She realizes he just used an advanced spell bordering on Tier 1 magic, far beyond what she expected. Even for a mana-blessed dragon, his growth is absurdly fast. Finn becomes ecstatic, already imagining the legendary tales she will one day tell the fairy clans about him. Lewis, meanwhile, is simply relieved that his study of spatial shields can now prevent those constant near-death incidents. He judges that his spatial attribute is close to Tier 1, while space and time remain Tier 3 and mind lags behind at Tier 5. Because survival forced him to focus almost entirely on spatial magic, he realizes his other attributes have been neglected. Even so, he finally sees a path forward and believes he can survive this life after all. Renewed with confidence, he decides to start training again from this new point. He immediately asks Finn for the next book, and she answers with her usual eager obedience. Later, the scene shifts to the family dining room. While eating, Lewis notices his father preparing to leave and asks where he is going. His father explains that he must go to Silver Flower Castle because Elder Curtiture is retiring this month. Lewis recognizes the elder as one of his grandfather's old friends, while his father seems awkward about the subject. Lewis insists that his grandfather's friends count as his own grandfathers too, leaving his father no room to argue. Still, he asks why his father personally has to go just because the elder is retiring. The answer is that his father has been assigned to succeed Elder Curtiture in that position. Lewis proudly praises his father's strength, and the father happily basks in the compliment. Lewis reflects that his father has grown as well, recently reaching Tier 0 in the rare dark attribute after a long plateau. That achievement is extraordinary even among dragons, especially at his father's relatively young age of 4,000. In the original story, that level of power was enough to make his father the final boss. He remembers that Geneloser, the berserker who ravaged the continent, possessed dark and magic as his two main attributes. Those powers eventually turned Geneloser into a blackened dragon feared as a second coming of the devil. Lewis swears that this timeline will be different because he has spent 150 years training to prevent that fate. His father hesitantly tries to tell him something more serious. Lewis prompts him to stop stalling and say it plainly. The father admits that once he leaves, he may not be home for quite a while. He explains that parents of hatchlings are normally not chosen for this post, but there is no one else capable enough this time. Worse, the succession process that is usually long will still require a full 10 years, which shocks Louis. Seeing Louis go quiet, the father worries he has upset him. Instead, Louis lights up because 10 years sounds incredibly short to him. He cheerfully explains that he expected the process to take centuries, so a mere decade feels brief. Already planning ahead, he says he will use that time to accelerate his studies, even moving into lawlessness theory. His father collapses into a gloomy heap, clearly having expected a tearful farewell instead. Louis dryly asks whether his father had really hoped he would cry and beg him not to go. The father dodges the embarrassment by asking if Louis wants anything else to eat. He retreats to fetch more snacks, still unable to process his son's reaction. Louis mutters that he is not a child anymore, only for the narration to bluntly disagree. Soon after, the father departs for Silverflower Castle, leaving Louis before the towering fortress. Even at the moment of departure, the father keeps listing practical instructions about meals, medicine, and emergencies. Exasperated, Louis finally shouts that he will be fine and begs his father to stop repeating himself. He insists that being alone for 10 years is nothing, but the giant dragon's flat response makes it clear that to everyone else, he is still very much a kid. A dragon guardian hands Louis a paired communication stone meant for keeping in touch. Louis learns the stones can be energized to transmit messages over distance, though not infinitely far. He immediately fixates on its value, imagining it as an expensive treasure. Louis asks if it will let them talk even when the dragon is away at Silverflower Castle, and the dragon hesitates. The dragon falls silent, realizing a problem with Louis's assumption. Admitting the range is limited, the dragon concedes it will not reach as far as Silverflower Castle. Louis deflates, consoling himself that even smart people make mistakes. Trying to reassure him, the dragon urges Louis not to worry and to focus on his own projects while they're apart. The dragon prepares to leave, telling Louis he can use anything in the dragon's room if needed. As it takes off, the dragon fusses like a caretaker, reminding Louis to read if bored and to eat properly. From the sky, the dragon warns Louis not to leave the city because it is dangerous outside. Watching it go, Louis grudgingly acknowledges the dragon is tougher than he looks. Elsewhere, Louis's father battles through danger, shielding someone as debris falls. He reflects that he has protected Louis from countless threats for roughly a century. He accepts that Louis's anxiety is understandable given the constant danger around them. Back at home, Louis realizes he will be on his own for a while and smiles at the freedom. He celebrates that the castle is effectively his to run while the dragon is gone. Later, Louis's confidence sours as he sits alone with a book, remembering how he once expected peace. A tiny winged maid named Finn suddenly screams for Louis to save her. Shadowy pranksters close in on Finn, and she panics as they find her. Finn begs them to stay back, terrified as the threat looms. A hand snatches Finn midair, confirming she has been caught. Two shadowy figures laugh while Finn cries out to Master Louis for help. Louis intervenes and grabs Finn away from them, startling everyone. Holding Finn in his fist, Louis demands to know why the intruders are here. The shadowy pair freeze, suddenly wary of Louis's presence. Two energetic children burst in calling for Louis, eager to play. They complain loudly about their father, and insist they do not want to be stuck with him, overwhelming Louis. Louis tries to calm the situation, forcing them to speak one at a time. Connie, the older twin, explains their papa went to Silverflower Castle and left them alone. Con, the younger twin, adds their papa said he would be back in 10 years, so they assumed Louis would be worried too. They claim they came to check if Louis was bored, while Louis mutters that they are troublemakers. Louis tells them to get out, and the twins react with hurt indignation at his harshness. Louis notes these neighboring peak troublemakers are fraternal twin dragons born 10,000 years apart. He recalls being insecure about not growing taller, and his father oddly introduced the twins to him. At first Louis found their silver hair and chubby cheeks cute, and they played together a few times. But the twins began showing up uninvited and wrecking the place, ruining Louis's plan to practice alone. Louis laments that his father set him up for this ongoing nuisance. The twins insist they only wanted to play with Louis, but now accuse him of being mean. Con proudly reveals he even brought a toy this time, pulling out a strange weapon. Louis is startled as the weapon is thrust toward him. He catches it, and the twins look shocked by how seriously he takes it. Louis recognizes the object as something significant and dangerous. He demands to know where they got it, his tone turning cold. The twins hesitate, suddenly unsure how to answer. The weapon's embedded magic circle glows ominously, hinting it is active. They admit they took it from their papa's storage room, as if it were no big deal. Louis presses whether they had Uncle Carlos's permission, clearly expecting the answer is no. Their silence confirms they snuck in, and Louis sees at their recklessness. Louis identifies it as a magic sword with a spatial attribute stone, far more powerful than he is. He notices the magic circle reacting, realizing something is about to happen. The circle brightens into a complex spell pattern, confirming it is not inert. Louis suspects it should do something, but Finn guesses it is broken and non-functional. Finn admits she cannot fully read it because it is a very high-level spell. Still, she recognizes it as a subspace-type weapon, and the complexity suggests an enormous space effect. Louis's greed resurfaces as he decides to test it anyway. Ignoring caution, he announces he will try it himself while the twins cheer him on. He convinces himself that a dragon's treasure trove weapon must hide incredible loot inside its space. Hours pass with Lewis experimenting while the twins collapse from boredom. The twins complain the testing is taking forever, and they are sick of waiting. At last something changes, and their attention snaps back in excitement. Lewis triumphantly declares he fixed it, and that it is working, urging a test. He decides to push elemental power into it first, preparing to activate the spell. Dark purple energy swirls around Lewis's hands as the weapon begins drawing power. Lewis realizes the energy output is far beyond expectations and wonders what is sealed within. The spell destabilizes into a violent surge, and Lewis panics as it spirals out of control. A vortex forms in the library, sucking in darkness and debris as the portal opens. Lewis recoils, realizing this is not a simple subspace but something far worse. The vortex expands overhead, forcing Lewis and the twins to shield themselves. Lewis tries to stop it, but the pull overwhelms his control. A blinding burst erupts, engulfing all three children in the portal's discharge. The library is left empty and shimmering with residual magic as the portal collapses. They reappear in a freezing blue ice cave, far from home. A purple flare pops in the cave, marking the portal's last echo. The three tumble through the air and slam down hard onto the icy ground. Dazed, Lewis tries to orient himself amid the cold and ringing silence. He looks around in shock, realizing they have been transported somewhere unknown. All three scream as they continue falling and crashing in the chaotic landing. They hit with a final heavy impact, scattering snow and ice. Finn checks on everyone while the twins groan and Lewis coughs, battered but alive. Lewis asks where they are, finally grasping the scale of the accident. The cave's eerie emptiness answers him with only cold wind and darkness. Lewis confirms they are in a cave, clutching the weapon like evidence of his mistake. The broken weapon crackles, and Lewis realizes it may have shattered during activation. A burst of purple sparks erupts from the damaged stone, confirming it is unstable. Everyone stares in stunned silence at the ruined artifact and the consequences. Khan wails that Lewis broke his sword, turning the blame outward. Lewis corrects him nervously, insisting it was an attribute stone, not just a toy sword. Khan escalates the complaint, screaming that Lewis broke his attribute stone. Lewis asks Connie if she knows whose weapon it originally was, searching for clues. Connie says she heard it belonged to her great-grandmother, and Lewis asks if she was a spatial mage. Connie admits she knows little beyond the family rumor, leaving Lewis without answers. Lewis realizes he is cornered and needs to understand the artifact's purpose to use it properly. Finn spots something deeper in the cave and urgently calls Lewis over. They see a sword-like object embedded on a distant icy platform, suggesting a landmark or relic. Lewis examines the broken hilt in his hand, trying to interpret what it has become. Finn concludes it is not a subspace trove at all but likely an interdimensional gate linking two places. Lewis curses himself for being blinded by treasure fantasies and for acting complacently. He starts walking to scout while the twins ask where he is going, worried now. Lewis says he must figure out their location so they can find a way home. He orders the twins to follow, taking reluctant command of the group. Together they move through the ice tunnel, with Finn hovering close behind Lewis. Lewis's footsteps crunch on ice, emphasizing how exposed and unprepared they are. They reach a blocked passage, and the twins fearfully note the obstacle. Lewis decides to force a way out using spatial power, confident he can break through. He forms a glowing cube of purple energy in his hands and hurls it forward. The cube detonates against the ice wall, cracking it with a grid-like spatial fracture. The barrier explodes into shards, and Lewis ducks from the blast and falling debris. As the dust settles, all three shield their eyes from the glare and drifting ice. The twins marvel at the snow and cold beyond, while Lewis realizes they have emerged into a wintry world. Lewis climbs out toward the opening as the others call after him, confused by his urgency. The group gathers behind him, demanding to know what is happening. Finn asks what went wrong, sensing Lewis has recognized something terrifying. Lewis identifies the towering peak ahead as Earth's right fang, a notorious mountain. The twins bicker over left versus right, missing the seriousness of Lewis's discovery. Finn explains Earth's right fang sits at the easternmost edge of the winter continent, implying they are extremely far away. Lewis finishes the thought bluntly, admitting they are completely screwed. The mountain looms over them as snow whips around, underscoring their isolation. Lewis recalls this world is called Evan, divided into 4 continents with stable year-round climates. He remembers the spring continent is mild and temperate all year. He remembers the summer continent is tropical and scorching. He remembers the autumn continent is cool and sunny, long blessed with abundant harvests. He remembers the winter continent is brutally cold with bitter winds and constant snow. He recalls the Genelosers' home in the Nakshi mountain range lies at the westernmost tip of the spring continent. Lewis concludes they are at the exact opposite end of the world, on the far eastern edge of the winter continent. He forces a strained smile, already calculating the grim logistics. Lewis breaks into hysterical laughter while the others stare, unsettled by his reaction. He thinks reincarnation was manageable, but this new crisis feels impossible to overcome. He spirals, reminding himself he is constantly threatened and the outside world is deadly, and he never meant to leave home. A new fear hits him as he realizes people might notice he vanished from the castle. He imagines the Dragon Guardians' rage at losing Lewis, raising the stakes of getting back quickly. Lewis worries the dragon could go berserk, making their disappearance even more dangerous. Lewis remembers the communication stone and sees it as their only lifeline. He pulls out the stone, hoping it can reach someone who can help, but he realizes the stone cannot bridge this kind of distance, and he collapses in despair as the twins ask what he is doing. Desperate, Lewis asks Finn whether crossing the East Sea is possible as an alternative route. Finn immediately rejects the idea, insisting it is impossible. She explains the East Sea is a demonic sea left by the worst evil dragons, separating winter from spring. It is a place where demons lurk, so dangerous that even adult dragons avoid it. Finn adds that even someone chosen by the 4 elements could not cross it at their age. Lewis pretends he was only asking, masking his panic with a tired sigh. He asks how long it would take to cross the continent to the left Fong, and Finn estimates about 10 years on foot. Lewis repeats 10 years and calculates that if they hurry, they might return before his father comes back. He snaps at the twins to listen, trying to impose discipline on the situation. Lewis bluntly tells them they are in serious trouble, finally making them pay attention. He explains they are at Earth's right Fong on the winter continent, and that walking home would take 10 years. Connie naively suggests they should just fly instead of walking. Lewis shoots the idea down, sarcastically asking if she wants to be kidnapped, implying flying would attract predators. He decides they cannot fly and must travel like humans, accepting a 10-year trek. Con anxiously asks what happens if they fail to make it back within 10 years. Lewis worries that if they are not home when their fathers return in 10 years, the search for them will be catastrophic. The twins freeze in alarm, realizing his implication could be serious. Lewis imagines their pursuers scorching the whole continent just to find them, escalating everyone's panic. The twins stare blankly as Lewis spirals, unable to follow his dramatic logic. One twin asks why anyone would go that far, and Lewis reminds himself their enemies are not human. He adds that those beings would also beat them mercilessly, making the danger feel immediate. His threats turn absurd as he claims they might even deny them snacks and toys for a century, shocking the twins anyway. Lewis deadpans that the twins value snacks and toys over the continent's safety, while they wail in despair. He refocuses the group on the real goal, get home before their dads return, and declares himself in charge. The twins instantly challenge his authority, clamoring to be the leader instead and crowding him. Lewis argues leadership belongs to the smartest dragons and pressures them to admit he is smarter. They protest that Lewis is younger than them, insisting age should decide. Lewis sputters that he is taller and points out the girl twin is only a month older anyway, undermining their argument. He finally claims leadership simply because he said it first, and the twins judge him childish. Their bickering turns into a noisy scuffle as Finn watches in weary silence. Finn sighs that they still have a long journey ahead, already exhausted by their antics. The snowy mountains loom around them, emphasizing how far they must travel. They settle into roles, Lewis as leader, Finn as support, and the twins labeled the burden. Lewis announces they have what they need and orders them to move out, and the twins reluctantly salute him as captain. Dark clouds gather overhead, catching Lewis's attention as the weather shifts. Lewis notes it has been a while since this happened, pulling out a familiar device as the twins light up with excitement. The twins excitedly ask if Lewis is about to get struck by lightning again and hug him, wanting the same thrill. Lewis realizes they were never taught that being struck by lightning is dangerous, and tries to correct them. Resigned, Lewis tells them to at least hold on tight and not let go of him. The storm intensifies and Lewis notices the incoming lightning seems bigger than usual. The twins eagerly brace for it, while Lewis tries to see what exactly is coming. The three squeeze together, shouting through the wind as the strike approaches. A sudden lull makes them blink in confusion as the expected hit doesn't land on them. Lewis is stunned that the lightning missed for the first time, sensing something is wrong. He hears a new rumbling sound and turns, trying to identify the threat. Lewis's face tightens as he realizes the noise is rapidly closing in. A massive avalanche erupts nearby, and Lewis and Finn react in disbelief at the sudden disaster. Lewis screams at the misaimed lightning for triggering this, as the avalanche sweeps them away. The twins treat the ride like fun, cheering at the huge amount of snow while Lewis is dragged along. Lewis shouts for the burden team to transform immediately, trying to survive the slide. The avalanche roars onward, burying the landscape as they struggle within it. Lewis spots something alarming ahead, his shock cutting through the chaos. Finn cries out to Lewis, sensing their leader is in trouble. Lewis curses as his magic flares under pressure, preparing an emergency response. He casts a defensive spell labeled Disconnection, forming a glowing barrier amid the rushing snow. The barrier encapsulates them like a floating cube, carrying them through the avalanche's torrent. Lewis and Finn tumble inside the cube, disoriented by the violent motion. The twins laugh and enjoy the spinning ride, oblivious to how close they are to dying. The avalanche finally crashes into a forested area, blasting snow across the trees. The snow settles into a quiet, blanketed forest, the immediate danger passing. Lewis bursts out of the snow with Finn perched on his head, gasping for air. Shaken, Lewis admits he thought they were going to die this time, while the twins pop up behind him. The twins excitedly call it fun and beg Lewis to do it again, completely missing the point. Lewis turns away, seething at their recklessness and lack of fear. He snaps at them, and the twins recoil as he finally vents his frustration. Lewis begs them to grow up, while Finn droops in embarrassment at the chaos. Lewis then asks the practical question of where the avalanche actually carried them. He reasons the avalanche buried the roads, leaving them without landmarks or direction. Finn agrees that is why they cannot recognize their location, calling Lewis back to focus. The twins ignore the concern and play in the deep snow, calling it a pool of snow. One twin dives headfirst into the snow like it is water, turning survival into a game. The other twin watches the legs vanish and reacts with delighted surprise. She decides she wants to dive too, sparkling with excitement. She leaps with arms raised, fully committing to the stunt. She disappears into the snow with only her hands briefly visible above the surface. Lewis rubs his head, exhausted by their endless antics. He tells Finn to take it easy and climb out because they still have a long way to go. The snow's surface trembles ominously, hinting something beneath is shifting. Lewis stomps toward the spot, accusing them of pranking him and demanding they stop. He orders them to come out already, unaware the ground is giving way. The snow collapses and Lewis drops suddenly, screaming as he falls through. He grabs Finn mid-fall, yanking the fairy along to keep her from being left behind. Finn panics and begs the twins to fly Lewis up, while Lewis complains they act like it is easy. They plunge down a deep icy shaft, shrinking into the distance as the hole swallows them. Lewis flails and screams while falling, still clutching Finn tightly. He begs for the fall to stop, bracing for impact as the walls blur past. The shaft opens into a darker void below, and Lewis realizes they are dropping into something far deeper. They continue spiraling down the ice tunnel, the descent accelerating. Finn warns Lewis to look out, sensing a deadly drop ahead. Lewis spots a cliff-like break in the tunnel and panics at the sudden plunge. He tumbles over jagged ice formations, barely avoiding being impaled. Still falling, Lewis urgently orders the twins to transform now to save them. Lewis's eyes widen as he feels the moment of impact approaching. The twins finally respond by transforming into small white dragons, calling out to Lewis as they reach him. In dragon form, they grab Lewis's legs and stabilize him, preventing a fatal crash. Back in control, the twins celebrate how fun it was, while Lewis watches in disbelief. Lewis admits to Finn that he is starting to respect the twins, and Finn reluctantly agrees. Lewis tries to return to the urgent question of their location. They find themselves in a vast icy corridor filled with ancient stonework, and Lewis asks where they are. Finn observes this is not a natural cave but a man-made corridor, implying something significant. Lewis agrees but feels unsettled, as if he has been here before. He stares at a glowing crystal fixture and wonders why this place feels familiar despite being his first time. Finn asks what they should do now, and Lewis suggests moving cautiously so they do not stray farther from an exit. The twins immediately sprint off claiming they found the exit, and Lewis yells for them to slow down. As Lewis warns them about ignoring their captain, something makes everyone pause. Lewis, confused, asks why they have stopped and are just standing there. The twins call Lewis over, drawing his attention down the corridor. The girl twin points at strange shapes ahead and asks what they are. Lewis, unsettled, asks what she means, not yet seeing the threat clearly. They stare into a dark archway as faint movement and presence gather beyond it. A hulking figure with a massive axe emerges with red eyes, flanked by more armored shapes. A low growl and the glint of ice-crusted teeth confirm the enemies are not human. The leader's red eye flares as he advances, radiating menace like a herald of winter. Lewis recoils in shock, recognizing the danger but not yet understanding it. The group faces the approaching force together as the enemy closes in from the darkness. Lewis asks what these creatures are, dread rising in his voice. Finn peeks from behind Lewis and warns there is more than one of them, far more. A crowd of red-eyed armored undead fills the corridor, surrounding them with silent pressure. Heavy footsteps echo as the enemy line advances, tightening the noose. A massive armored presence steps forward, making the children look tiny by comparison. Close up, the undead soldiers' glowing eyes and snarling mouths confirm they are monsters. One twin wonders if they are humans, and Lewis snaps that humans do not have glowing red eyes. Lewis senses something even worse among them and asks what that is. He recognizes the axe-wielding commander as the Winter General, a legendary threat. A narration explains that before the webtoon story began, the heroic King Valencia saved the world. Afterward, even in the afterlife, the overworked Winter General was said to appear here, foreshadowing this encounter. The place is identified as the ice tomb of the great hero king, confirming they have fallen into a famous ruin. Lewis notes the hero king's tomb is far from home and calls their arrival an eerie coincidence. He realizes that if this is the hero king's tomb, then the webtoon's key item might be here too. Finn urgently calls Lewis back to the present danger, snapping him out of his thoughts. The undead surge forward aggressively, weapons raised, making it clear they intend to kill. Lewis orders the twins to transform into Khan and Connie, and they eagerly agree while drawing blades. Lewis smirks and decides they will eliminate the attackers rather than flee. The twins charge into battle with swords, while Lewis stands behind them ready to support. One twin leaps into the enemy formation, striking first to break their line. The boy twin swings with crackling lightning, bringing magical force into the fight. He declares he will go first and rushes an undead soldier head-on. His electrified blade collides with an enemy weapon in a blinding clash. The impact sends sparks and fragments flying as the enemy's defense begins to fail. A vertical lightning strike splits an undead soldier apart, destroying it in one decisive blow. The lightning continues through the armor, finishing the kill with a violent burst. The destroyed soldier detonates into icy debris, showing the twins' attacks are lethal. The girl twin complains she wanted to go first even as an undead swings at her from behind. She turns with cold focus, shifting from playful to deadly serious. She unleashes a sweeping electrified slash that hurls an axe-wielding undead away. An explosion blooms behind her as she walks forward calmly, confident in the result. Lewis evaluates their performance as Finn cheers, admitting the twins are doing better than expected. Watching them carve through enemies, Lewis concludes they are not just playing and their strength matches a second-tier samurai. He decides he no longer minds having them at his side, accepting them as real allies. To end the fight faster, Lewis prepares a new spell, summoning a temporal crystal's power. Lewis casts Temporal Law to slow time, sending glowing chains of slow time outward. The temporal chains wrap around multiple undead, binding their movements and freezing their attacks mid-swing. An undead struggles in panic as the time binding constricts and drags at its weapon. The chains tighten around a double-headed axe, immobilizing it and leaving the wielder helpless. The twins notice the enemies are moving slower and realize Lewis enchanted their weapons with the temporal crystal. Seizing the advantage, the boy twin proposes using this opening to finish them off. Both twins launch a coordinated assault, aiming to wipe out the slowed horde in one push. An undead roars as the temporal bindings disrupt its grip, unable to defend properly. The girl twin spins into a powerful double sword strike, cutting through the slowed enemy's guard. She laughs with fierce exhilaration, fully enjoying the fight now that she has the upper hand. The boy twin follows with another lightning-charged slash, sending bodies flying as the line collapses. A chain of explosions erupts through the corridor as multiple undead are destroyed in rapid succession. The boy twin marvels that the enemies are popping like popcorn, amazed at how easily they are falling now. The twins continue their synchronized charge, blades extended toward the remaining stunned soldiers. One surviving undead trembles and whimpers under the temporal chains, realizing it is next. The twins finish off the last enemy in the corridor, confident the fight is finally over. A violent surge of energy erupts from the defeated foe as it dies, hinting the dungeon is still active. The blast detonates across the icy hall, shaking the ruins with a thunderous impact. When the smoke clears, shattered weapons and debris litter the floor, and the twins stare at the aftermath. The boy twin, Khan, is surprised the whole ordeal ended so quickly. The girl twin, Connie, is unimpressed and complains that it was boring. Their white-haired guide Lewis appears with a fairy attendant and congratulates the twins for clearing it. Lewis smirks, already plotting what to do next. He proposes they try something more exciting than a simple warm-up. The twins tilt their heads, confused by what Lewis has in mind. Lewis casually has tea poured as if this is all a leisurely game. He sips calmly, unbothered by the danger around them. Enjoying himself, Lewis praises the tea while his fairy serves him mid-dungeon. The fairy maid nervously thanks him, trying to keep up appearances. Her unease shows as she senses Lewis is about to escalate things. The corridor suddenly erupts with new traps and hazards, forcing the twins to sprint and leap through chaos. Khan grins, thrilled by the sudden danger and calling it fun. Connie shouts to Lewis that this is exciting, charging forward with her blades. Lewis warns Khan that arrows are firing from the right and orders him to dodge. Khan acknowledges and twists away as arrows streak past him. Connie warns Connie's brother about a blade trap on the left as she vaults through the gauntlet. A massive boulder trap thunders into the passage, threatening to crush them. The twins slash together and shatter the boulder into flying rubble. With the traps quieting, the twins report to Lewis that nothing else is moving. Watching, the fairy realizes the twins wiped out traps and monster guards in one sweep, reminding herself dragons are still dragons even when young. Lewis agrees the run is basically finished and prepares to move on. The fairy asks Lewis where exactly they are, unsettled by the place. Lewis answers plainly that this location is the Hero King's tomb. The fairy panics at the implication that they are at the resting place of Hero King Valencia. Lewis confirms it is indeed where Valencia was buried. He explains the tomb is built like a dungeon full of monsters and traps to repel anyone who would disturb the king. Lewis adds that overcoming the passages and obstacles leads to the tomb's heart. He promises that at the center, a sweet treasure reward awaits. He further explains the tomb was designed as an early adventure cache to provide starter equipment to a party. Lewis sums it up as a beginner's dungeon. He notes no one seems to have visited it yet, implying the loot is untouched. Greedily, Lewis declares all the treasures will be his, startling the twins. He urges the twins on, saying they are almost at the end and should get ready. The group sets off together toward the final chamber. They enter a vast ice cavern whose depth and darkness swallow the path ahead. Lewis steps onto the slick frozen ground, leading them deeper. The twins and fairy pause in awe at the enormous cavern opening before them. The fairy whispers that the chamber is far bigger than she expected. Connie points ahead and warns Lewis that something huge and ugly is waiting. Lewis replies that he already saw it and isn't surprised. He identifies the final boss as 10 giants, matching the original scenario. Lewis remarks that it is just like the original, then turns his attention to the next step. He spots a sealed door and concludes the treasure must be right behind it. Lewis addresses the twins, preparing to give them instructions. The twins' expressions harden as a dangerous aura rises, sensing the boss approaching. Lewis praises them as a great pair and notes they are not intimidated by giant enemies. He reflects that dragons are destined to rise to the top the moment they take flight. In that moment, the young dragons bare their teeth, looking down on foes beneath them. Lewis points out the giants closing in behind the twins, as if to prove his point. The twins laugh it off, boasting that Lewis is the best for bringing them here. Lewis agrees to finish it and gathers power, determined to end the fight. A giant raises its axe to strike as the twins rush to engage. The giant roars, swinging with murderous force. The twins carve through the giant in a coordinated, lightning-fast slash. The giant collapses under the blow, its strength draining away. Lewis forms a glowing spell in his palm, readying a decisive technique. He triggers a skill called Burst, unleashing compressed power. The spell detonates into the giant's body, cracking it with violent energy. A blinding explosion consumes the battlefield, wiping out the threat in an instant. As the remaining giants fall, the twins bicker mid-fight about who gets the kills while Lewis calls for more slow-time support. The fairy, shaken and impressed, admits Lewis is amazing despite her nerves. The twins celebrate, saying the battle was fun and already thinking about resting afterward. Lewis chuckles and shifts focus to the real prize, insisting they check their reward now. The party gathers before the towering double doors that should lead to the treasure. Connie urges Lewis excitedly to open the door. Khan joins in, impatiently pushing Lewis to hurry. Lewis agrees with a confident grin and starts opening it. The doors part, and a bright golden light spills out into the ice hall. Lewis steps forward with arms spread as the twins and fairy peer in, stunned. Inside, a massive treasure chamber stretches out, piled high with gold and relics. Khan screams with joy, amazed there is more treasure than even his father's storage room. He dives headfirst into the gold, unable to contain himself. Connie and the fairy follow more cautiously, overwhelmed by the sheer wealth. The fairy calls Lewis over, having noticed something important among the horde. Lewis walks toward the treasure, while the fairy anxiously asks if he is listening. Lewis stops, his expression turning serious as he senses something off. He recognizes a figure encased in ice, Hero King Valencia himself. The frozen king's face is visible behind the ice, eerily preserved. The fairy confirms in disbelief that the frozen man is Valencia. The name Hero King Valencia hangs heavy as they stare at the sealed figure. The fairy realizes with horror that despite the years, Valencia is still alive inside the ice. Lewis is startled, not expecting this twist. He notices glowing ancient script etched nearby and tries to make sense of it. Lewis identifies it as an ancient winter language, suggesting a sealed message or spell. The inscription recounts a creation myth where beings of light and darkness were born as good and evil. It continues that chaos followed until a boundary emerged to separate good from evil. The story says Earth was created and earthly beings arose from both sources. It describes the exalted beings of good and evil, oblivious to the world below, clashing above. Their struggle to dominate each other caused suffering for all other beings on Earth. Eventually the oppressed rose up, with dragons leading humans and half-breeds against the exalted beings. After a long struggle, the victors scattered across the continents of the Four Seasons, and over time people forgot the old conflict and the dragon's vigilance. The tale lingers on the shadow of a dragon, implying the threat never truly vanished. It says Valencia warned that the dragons who sacrificed for peace would return to the world again, and with them, the exalted beings of good and evil would also return. The message ends with Valencia asking the last generation who heard of that war to pass down the story and then leaving the burden to the future. Lewis reels, realizing this demonic war was not part of the original world he knew. Furious at the author of this reality, Lewis curses them for dumping such a task on him. He forces himself to refocus, deciding the immediate danger matters more than the mystery. Among the treasure, Lewis discovers a black tome and identifies it as the Book of Lawlessness of Hero King Valencia. The book's aura suggests it contains Valencia's unorthodox genius and the path to reaching Tier 0 in a human body. He understands it holds Valencia's life's accomplishments, and that in the original story, swordsman Kendrick became the strongest human. Lewis declares that compared to this book, all other treasures are worthless. He pauses, weighing the consequences of taking it. Still unwilling to leave riches behind, Lewis decides they should take some of the gold too. He starts stuffing valuables into a bag, humming to himself as he loots. As he gathers treasure, the frozen Valencia looms in the background, silently present. A close look shows cracks spreading through the ice around Valencia, as if the seal is weakening. The ice fractures further, signaling imminent awakening. Lewis senses the change and turns, alarmed. He watches the ice tremble and realizes something is about to happen. With a sharp crack, the ice prison splits open around Valencia. A burst of freezing power erupts outward, forcing Lewis to shield himself from the shockwave. Lewis stammers that this is ridiculous, struggling to accept the situation. A heavy impact shakes the chamber as Valencia's presence asserts itself. Valencia shifts within the broken ice, fully stirring. Lewis realizes in disbelief that the Hero King is awake. Valencia opens an eye, cold and focused, confirming he is conscious. Lewis groans, bracing for the worst as fear sets in. He blurts that this development was never in the original story he expected. Valencia raises a hand, signaling control and judgment. With glowing red eyes, Valencia declares the treasure is not Lewis's property and challenges his greed. The twins panic and demand Lewis explain what that terrifying figure is. Lewis answers grimly that it is Valencia, the hero king. The twins are stunned that the legendary king is standing before them. Lewis warns them Valencia was a Tier 0 warrior, meaning they cannot handle him now. Desperate, Lewis suggests the twins transform into dragons as their only chance. The twins and Lewis freeze in shock, realizing transformation may not be possible, or enough. Valencia's killing intent surges as he declares that for the greedy, only death awaits. He lifts his sword overhead, eyes narrowed, preparing an execution strike. Valencia unleashes a towering blade of energy that crashes down like a guillotine. Lewis panics and tries to retreat, but terror locks him in place. He realizes he needs to run, yet his legs refuse to move under Valencia's pressure. Lewis recognizes this paralysis as the oppressive effect of a Tier 0 warrior. Connie trembles, horrified and helpless as the attack approaches. Khan cowers and shields his head, overwhelmed by fear. Lewis snaps at himself to stop being ridiculous and fight back. He rages that he did not train this hard just to die here, clutching the book as he charges. Lewis forces his body forward through the crushing aura, breaking his fear with sheer will. He commits to the clash, shouting as he throws everything into a counterattack. Valencia's sweeping energy strike collides with Lewis's desperate power, sparks and lightning exploding between them. Lewis screams that he wants to live and hurls himself through the deadly arc. A violent impact erupts as Valencia's blow meets resistance at close range. The collision tears through the air, the force ripping past Valencia's armor in a blinding flash. Lewis, battered but conscious, answers himself with shaky resolve that he will survive. A final surge of energy erupts upward, leaving the outcome hanging in a roaring pillar of light. A devastating sword strike detonates through the icy tomb, sending a pillar of force and shards flying. The fairy maid is hurled away by the blast, screaming as she tumbles across broken ice. The ground and frozen structures crack and splinter, signaling the tomb is coming apart. Dazed and in pain, the fairy maid struggles to get up and regain her bearings. A massive fissure tears open nearby, making it clear the attack nearly split the whole cavern. The fairy maid panics, reaching out as she realizes how close they came to disaster. Seeing the enormous trench, she cries out for her master Lewis in terror. Lewis staggers up, convinced he should be dead, and blurts out his shock at surviving. Ice fragments whip past as Lewis shields himself, still reeling from the near-fatal strike. He steadies himself and looks around, confused by what just happened. Lewis checks his body in disbelief, realizing he is somehow still alive. The fairy maid rushes to him and clings to his face, relieved he survived, while Lewis insists he is fine. Lewis, still shaken, asks how he could have lived through that attack. A sudden realization hits Lewis as his eyes widen at what he's piecing together. He spots the armored hero king in the enormous slash line carved through the ice, stunned by the evidence. One of the twins points out the scene to Lewis, drawing attention to the terrifying aftermath. Above them, the ceiling splits further, widening into a dangerous opening as debris rains down. Lewis grasps the scale of the hero king's power, recognizing a blade strong enough to cleave a cave roof. He watches the hero king across the shattered ground, unsettled by the man's presence and restraint. The hero king himself seems astonished that a single human could cause such destruction. He notices something off about his own arm and pauses, as if interrupted mid-action. Lewis realizes the hero king redirected his killing slash at the last moment, sparing them. The hero king's grip tightens as he forcibly halts his own strike, stopping the fatal follow-through. The redirected blade schemes away, carving harmlessly across the ground instead of through Lewis and the others. The hero king looms over them, the air swirling with residual power as Lewis and the fairy freeze in shock. The hero king murmurs about protecting young dragons, revealing his intent wasn't simply slaughter. Lewis, confused, repeats the implication that the hero king was trying to protect them. The hero king begins to crumble away and urges them to leave and be careful before vanishing. Lewis calls after him, demanding to know what he just said and why he's disappearing. The collapsing ceiling breaks loose in huge chunks, accelerating the tomb's destruction. The fairy maid warns Lewis they must flee immediately because the tomb is collapsing. Lewis hesitates, torn between questions and survival as debris continues to fall. A violent shockwave and crumbling ice surge through the chamber, forcing the moment to a breaking point. Lewis starts to move, realizing too late that staying means being buried alive. A massive ice slab crashes down near Lewis, narrowly missing him. The twins cling to each other and scream that they are going to die as the cave rains destruction. Lewis snaps himself into action, insisting this is not the time to panic. A white dragon surges forward through swirling purple energy, taking charge of the escape. The dragon barks an urgent command for everyone to get up and move now. The dragon launches ahead with two smaller dragons, ordering the others not to be left behind. The fairy maid lunges after the dragon, calling desperately for Lewis to follow. A huge falling ice block threatens the fleeing dragon as the collapse continues overhead. The dragon is struck hard in the chest, crying out as the impact knocks it off course. In desperation, the dragon unleashes a spell called Reality Split, blasting the obstruction with violent force. The spell detonates, shattering ice into fragments and opening a path through the collapsing structure. Purple energy coils around tumbling eyes as the blast clears space for escape. The ceiling tears open into a starry void-like gap, revealing the tomb is breaking into something unnatural. The dragon roars in urgency, pushing everyone to commit to the escape route. They burst through the opening as the tomb's ice shell ruptures behind them. Outside, the snowy mountains echo with distant rumbling as the collapse continues beneath the surface. A thick cloud of snow and dust billows outward, spreading across the landscape like an avalanche. The eruption intensifies, blasting snow upward in a towering plume. The dragons are thrown by the force of the blast, tumbling through the air. Breathing hard, the dragon admits it thought it was going to die in that escape. Lewis reflects that the Hero King had been about to kill them, and demands to know why it changed. He concludes the Hero King stopped himself, and that without that restraint they would all be dead. The dragon wonders why the Hero King held back when he had said he would deal with intruders. Lewis keeps thinking about the Hero King's unfinished warning and what it meant. Unable to solve it, the dragon decides to focus on the fact that they survived. The dragon reveals it also got what it came for, producing a mysterious black book covered in arcane symbols. The fairy maid points out the twins are struggling emotionally after the ordeal. The twins hover shakily in the cold air, admitting the experience terrified them. With the book secured, the dragon suggests they find somewhere safe to rest. The snowy wilderness stretches empty around them, emphasizing how isolated they are. Lewis collapses into the snow, relieved and declaring they're going to survive after all. He hears crying and looks around, confused by the sudden sobbing. The twins sit in the snow bawling, overwhelmed by fear and exhaustion. Lewis notes he was just as surprised as they were, but their youth makes the shock hit harder. Lewis offers the girl twin a small pouch of pills to help her recover. He tells both twins to stop crying and take a pill each because they're out of mana. Still sniffling, the twins obediently accept the pills despite their lingering tears. Lewis admits he is completely out of mana too and that he has never pushed himself this hard since reincarnating. Exhausted beyond pride, Lewis declares it's time to rest, and everyone slumps down. The twins sit by Lewis as he lies face down in the snow, all of them drifting toward sleep. They end up sleeping piled together, the twins clinging to Lewis for comfort. The fairy maid smiles gently and encourages Lewis to get some rest. Night blankets the mountains as the group sleeps in the open snowfield under a star-filled sky. Morning arrives over the bright, frozen landscape as their journey resumes. The twins run ahead across the snow, leaving quick footprints as they regain energy. They laugh and shout about the snow, delighted and carefree again while Lewis trails behind. The twins start a playful snowball fight, and Lewis remarks that non-stop snow is getting boring. The fairy maid is baffled that after everything, the twins are still bursting with energy. Lewis dryly agrees, amused despite himself. Scanning the area, Lewis realizes they've reached a deserted region with no houses or villages in sight. The fairy maid asks why they have not encountered monsters, and Lewis explains the winter continent actually has the most monsters. He adds that the cold causes food shortages, so monsters often hunt humans for sustenance. Lewis asks why they saw none on the way down, and the fairy maid suggests it's because Lewis is with them. She reasons that with 3 dragons nearby, no monster is bold enough to approach. Lewis decides that means they can stop hiding their aura for now, easing their precautions. The fairy maid suddenly calls Lewis's attention to something ahead. One twin points excitedly at a distant column of smoke rising from the snow. The twins cheer to investigate, and Lewis agrees to go with them. As they approach, Lewis's expression darkens as he senses something is wrong. They crest a rise and see a village engulfed in flames and smoke, leaving them stunned. The fairy maid concludes the village must have been attacked. She asks Lewis what they should do, anxious and unsure. Lewis decides they must go down to check, hoping there might be survivors. In the village, bodies and wreckage lie scattered among burning buildings, confirming a massacre. Lewis walks through the ruined street in grim silence, taking in the devastation. He identifies it as a monster attack after seeing a slain beast among the dead. The fairy maid returns to Lewis and asks if she found anything useful. She reports she does not think there are any survivors. The twins also find nothing and complain they are hungry, their mood shifting from play to need. Lewis agrees it has been a long day and tells them to take a pill and leave this place. Lewis hears approaching hoofbeats and turns, alarmed by the sudden arrival. A mounted patrol with soldiers rides into the ruined village, catching Lewis off guard. Lewis quickly grabs the boy twin to pull him out of sight before they are noticed. He yanks the girl twin along as well, forcing both to move quietly despite their confusion. Lewis drags the twins down behind cover, keeping them low as they scramble to hide. The patrol advances through the wreckage, their presence close enough to expose the hidden group. The twins whisper questions about why they are hiding, assuming Lewis is scared of humans again. Lewis insists he is not afraid, but warns that his deadly situations tend to attract random trouble. The twins ask what he means, and Lewis urgently orders them to hide their aura as people approach. The patrol passes by, and Lewis silently begs they keep moving without discovering him. A soldier formally reports to the patrol's leader, indicating an official investigation. The soldier confirms monsters attacked the village and that there appear to be no survivors. The leader, a stern noble, decides he will report directly to the Archduke himself. He approaches a carriage and informs someone inside that he will go down and see the scene personally. The carriage door opens, signaling a high-ranking arrival. The Archduke of Camberg steps out, imposing and authoritative as he takes control. Someone questions whether he truly needs to see it himself, given his condition. A woman declares she is the Archduke's wife and insists it is her duty to comfort the souls harmed in her lands. The Archduke yields to her resolve, agreeing to her wish despite concern. The Archduchess steps down from the carriage, moving toward the devastated village. The Archduchess of Camberg is revealed in full, composed but determined to face the tragedy. She surveys the carnage of dead villagers and slain beasts amid smoldering ruins. She kneels beside a child's body, overcome by grief as she confronts the loss up close. The Archduchess falters and coughs, and attendants panic at her sudden weakness. She insists she is fine, but the Archduke urges her to go inside and rest. She challenges him, asking if he is trying to make her feel uncomfortable by stopping her. The Archduke sighs that even after 10 years together he cannot beat her stubbornness. Smiling, she teases that the one who loves more usually loses, softening the tension between them. She asks again whether there truly are no survivors, and the report confirms there are none. The Archduke notes monsters are usually less active this season, yet they began rampaging yesterday for unknown reasons. He struggles to describe the cause, sensing something beyond ordinary monster behavior. He concludes the monsters seem to be fleeing, as if chased by a superior being. The Archduke blames himself for mobilizing the village and says it would not have happened otherwise, but she reassures him not to be too hard on himself. Hearing this, Louis realizes with horror that the village's destruction may have been caused by their presence. Guilt hits Louis hard as he admits his conscience feels like it's being pierced. A sinister aura suddenly coils through the street, startling the soldiers as something approaches. Louis freezes in shock while the twins yawn obliviously, unaware of the danger closing in. The patrol leader demands to know who is hiding and threatens to cut them down if they do not come out. Louis panics internally at being dragged into yet another crisis, even as the order to come out is repeated. The leader draws his blade and advances, ready to destroy the hiding place if necessary. He escalates the threat, promising to cut the entire structure down if they refuse to reveal themselves. Louis debates what to do, realizing he cannot keep hiding forever. A grim voice tells Louis it warned him, declaring that whatever happens next is now Louis's responsibility. The patrol leader lunges with a powerful slash, committing to violence. The blade's shockwave tears through the air toward the hiding spot, shredding debris in its path. The strike smashes the wooden cover apart in an explosive burst, forcing Louis and the others into the open. A sudden blast sends Louis and debris flying as chaos erupts in the snowy village. A fairy maid is hurled through the air, screaming as the shockwave tosses her helplessly. She crashes hard into rubble, tumbling across the ground near the wreckage. Onlookers stare at the smoking destruction, stunned by the unexpected violence. An older man turns in disbelief, struggling to process what just happened. Louis and 2 other children appear amid the dust, shocking everyone who thought no kids survived. The adults realize with horror that there were surviving children after all. Louis seizes on the discovery as the key to their next move. He instantly turns on the waterworks, wailing loudly to sell their pitiful act. The other 2 kids blankly call for Louis, unsure what he is doing. Louis urges them to cry too and keep up the performance. The twins catch on at once, getting an idea to match his scheme. They burst into convincing sobs, crying for their mother to draw sympathy. The Grand Duchess watches with a cold, pitying look at the children's display. The twins cling to the Grand Duchess and sob about how terrifying it was, forcing her attention. Louis is unsettled that the twins are so good at acting and may be outplaying him. The Grand Duke steps in and asks Louis if these 3 are the only survivors. Louis tearfully confirms they are the only ones left. The Grand Duke softens and acknowledges Louis has endured a lot. A subordinate nervously addresses the Grand Duke with too familiar wording, then corrects himself. The Grand Duchess asks to bring the children back to the castle under their protection. The Grand Duke reluctantly agrees, saying it cannot be helped. He orders his men to take the children back to the castle and prepare for what comes next. Louis is surprised to learn he is being taken along rather than left behind. Guards grab Louis by the arms and haul him toward the carriage despite his confusion. The carriage departs down the road, leaving the ruined village behind. From the side, the fairy maid watches the carriage go, realizing she has been separated from Louis. She calls out for Master Louis, alarmed that she cannot follow. At the castle, hot water pours into a bath, signaling a sudden shift to comfort and care. Louis sinks into the bath, simmering with frustration at the indignity of it all. He reflects that he expected their pitiful act to work, but the twins' acting was too convincing and changed everything. He admits he misjudged the Grand Duke and Duchess as genuinely good people, and now must adapt. Louis decides to observe quietly and wait for an opportunity, until someone calls his name. The twins splash around happily in the bath, dragging Louis into their noisy play. A sudden splash hits Louis squarely, leaving him stunned and drenched. The twins laugh at Louis, teasing him that his hair looks funny. Louis forces a small smile, relieved the twins can still act carefree after what happened. The twins gush over Louis's looks, making him self-conscious. Maids fawn over the children and ask to be called Big Sister, while Louis grumbles at the commotion. The bath time ends and the children are told to change clothes and go eat. Daylight filters through the castle window as the scene transitions to calmer routines. During a meal, The Grand Duchess is informed that the children have arrived. The cleaned-up children appear in fine clothes, and the Grand Duchess is amazed at how different they look. She warmly invites them to eat quickly, assuming they must be hungry. The twins light up at the sight of real food, their excitement overflowing. They devour the feast with abandon while the Grand Duchess watches fondly. Louis wonders why the twins adapt so quickly to every new situation. He thinks they may need to leave soon, but hesitates because Finn is still missing. Louis anxiously asks himself where Finn could be right now. Far away in the snowy mountains, a bright streak of light races across the night sky. Finn tracks the carriage's route and resolves to return to Louis as fast as possible. She curses her capture by snow eagles, believing it cost her precious time with Louis. Finn pushes herself onward, begging Louis to wait just a little longer. She speeds toward the castle like a comet, determined to reunite. Night settles over the castle corridors, quiet and dim. Louis walks alone through the dark hall, restless and thinking. He overhears the Grand Duke insisting they cannot keep the children forever. Louis listens as someone protests, unable to accept that conclusion. The Grand Duchess admits the children make her hear their late child Rinna's voice, and the Grand Duke tries to comfort her. The Grand Duke argues it is wrong to project their deceased child onto these children and urges her to stop. He tells her to let go of Rinnu, even though it hurts. The Grand Duchess lashes out that a mother cannot simply forget her child. Louis realizes the Grand Duchess recently lost a child, explaining her unusual kindness toward them. A sudden slap lands, punctuating the couple's grief and conflict. Louis jolts at the sound, startled by how intense things have become. Back in his room, Louis sits alone, turning the overheard argument over in his mind. He wonders why they would even consider adopting strangers as heirs so soon after their loss. He recalls the Grand Duke's status as a royal family member who rules the Winter Continent, making any adoption politically enormous. Louis recognizes that being adopted by such a Grand Duke would instantly make him a key figure in the country. He concludes the proposal must have been extremely difficult for the Grand Duke's wife, given her grief. Louis thinks leaving before things get complicated would be best, yet the couple's pain makes him uneasy. He wishes Finn were here so he could talk through what to do next. Louis senses something and looks up, confused by a sudden presence. Finn slams into the window from outside, startling everyone with her abrupt arrival. Louis rushes forward and catches Finn as she cries out for her master. He scolds Finn for disappearing so long, and she apologizes profusely. Louis orders Finn to stay close from now on, and she promises she will. The twins notice Finn's return and excitedly greet her. Finn happily reunites with the twins, relieved they are safe together again. Night deepens outside the castle window as the group regathers. Finn suggests that now they are reunited, they can leave again. Louis agrees in principle but says he is thinking of staying a bit longer. Finn questions why they cannot just go immediately. Louis explains the Grand Duke and Duchess have been kind and recently lost their child, so vanishing suddenly would feel wrong. Finn falls silent, considering Louis's reasoning. Louis adds they are not in urgent danger and can use the time to gather information about the Winter Continent. Finn admits Louis's rare affection makes her want to serve him even more devotedly. She proposes a way to ease Louis's unease and handle the situation. Louis asks what she has in mind, intrigued. Finn explains Dragon's value first encounters, and the Grand Duke and Duchess are Louis's first major acquaintances here. She suggests leaving a simple gift for them before departing. Finn implies the couple's problem of lacking a child could be solved if they create one. Louis objects that having a child is not something that can be done easily. He suddenly pauses as a new idea clicks into place. Louis reasons they do not need to give the couple a baby now, only buy time until the couple has their own child and then disappear. He praises Finn's suggestion as a good idea, and she modestly downplays it. Louis decides it is time to prepare for the next step of their plan. The Grand Duchess sits alone on a balcony, lost in thought. She quietly drinks tea, her expression distant and tired. A maid calls to her, drawing her attention back to the present. The twins run up and ask the Grand Duchess to play with them, lifting her mood. She agrees warmly and offers them cookies, and they happily accept. Louis watches from a distance, pleased as the Grand Duchess laughs with the twins. He privately decides to trust the twins to keep the Grand Duchess occupied. Meanwhile, the Grand Duke discusses official matters with his men and orders them to handle an issue accordingly. He continues reviewing the soldiers' training schedule, focused on duty. Louis approaches with an innocent smile, presenting himself as harmless. The Grand Duke and his aides notice Louis standing there, waiting to be addressed. The Grand Duke asks Louis if he needs something. Louis answers that his friends are currently playing with the Grand Duchess. The Grand Duke asks why Louis is not afraid of him, and Louis admits he is not. The Grand Duke notes, most children fear him and avoid him, making Louis unusual. He is reminded of someone from the past, and the comparison lingers. The Grand Duke lets out a small, softened laugh at the memory. He gently pulls Louis closer, unexpectedly affectionate. Louis asks to play with the Grand Duke, and the Grand Duke agrees. The Grand Duke invites Louis to see his study, and Louis eagerly goes along. The aides are moved, realizing it has been a long time since the Grand Duke smiled like that. Louis sweetly praises the twins as precious gems, reinforcing the warm atmosphere. Behind the smile, Louis calculates silently, his thoughts turning darker and more strategic. In the study, Louis sits with the twins and Finn nearby, preparing to move the plan forward. Louis asks the twins whether they successfully completed their assigned mission. The twins salute and report they drank tea and ate cookies with the Grand Duchess, enjoying themselves. Louis approves and then turns to Finn for her part. Finn reports the Grand Duke's strict daily routine, including early rising, late bedtime, and frequent contact with the Grand Duchess. She finishes her report, and Louis praises her thoroughness. One twin tries to speak but is shushed for calling Louis captain too loudly. The twins complain they followed orders but still do not understand what they are doing or how it relates to making a child. Louis sighs that this is why he cannot deal with kids, since they are even younger than he is. He bluntly explains that having a child requires an intimate relationship between the couple, and their grief has made them emotionally distant. Louis argues that if they spend time laughing and enjoying themselves with the twins, it will lift their spirits. He adds that as their grief fades, they will gradually become comfortable with each other again. Louis concludes that naturally this will lead to closeness at night, setting up the outcome he wants. The twins ask why it has to happen at night, and Louis refuses to explain further to children. Louis announces it is time to begin the real work, while the twins groan in the background. He produces a book titled Alchemical Formulas for Elixirs, 8,000 Variations, revealing his next tool. Louis smirks and says they will finally start for real. He repeats the commitment, signaling there is no turning back now. Finn asks what the Alchemical Formulas book is and why Louis has it. Louis explains he found it in his father's library while researching ways to enhance elixirs. He recalls being caught experimenting by his father, who scolded him and sealed the book away. Louis marvels that his research to overcome his time-limited life is now useful in this situation. He finds an entry for an elixir meant to reignite love between bored couples. He discovers a one-shot, supposedly perfect success elixir designed for couples who want a child. A wardrobe door swings open as Louis prepares to act in secret. Louis tells the twins to claim they do not know where he is if anyone asks, and they agree. Purple magic circles flare around Louis as he begins casting a spell. Louis activates a spell called Expansion, intensifying the magic. A glowing barrier-like formation spreads as the spell takes effect. Louis steps into an empty wooden room and decides the space is sufficient for what he plans to do next. Louis proposes they begin making elixirs in earnest to set their plan in motion. The castle kitchen is quiet and stocked, providing the perfect place to tamper with ingredients unnoticed. More supplies and tools are laid out, showing the scale of what could be contaminated. Finn hides among the kitchenware, trying not to be discovered while she works. Finn cautiously checks if anyone is around before acting. She grabs a large bottle of pink potion, ready to carry out Louis's scheme. Holding 2 potion bottles, Finn calls Louis over to clarify the instructions. Louis orders Finn to sprinkle the potions onto the ingredients the Grand Duke and Grand Duchess will eat the next day. He stresses she must apply it only to what they will actually consume. Finn panics because she has no way to know which ingredients will be used for their meal. She hesitates, thinking hard but coming up blank. Frustrated, Finn decides to solve the uncertainty by dosing everything in sight. She slips deeper into the storage areas to spread the potion widely. Noticing grains meant for bread, Finn decides those must be included and starts dosing them too. The potion is poured into a large container, contaminating a major batch at once. Finn watches the mixture react, confirming the potion is taking effect. The liquid swells and churns as the elixir disperses through the stored supplies. Finn uses magic to force the potion to spread even further, maximizing exposure. Multiple sacks of provisions end up tainted, implying the contamination is extensive. Satisfied, Finn declares the mission complete. She slips away to report back, giggling at how smoothly it went. By the next evening, the stage is set for the elixir's effects to appear. Louis lurks near a doorway, watching for signs that the plan worked. He reasons that if Finn followed orders, the couple's food should already have contained the elixir. Louis nearly gets caught when nearby maids chat loudly, forcing him to stay hidden. The maids gossip about a sudden love confession, oblivious to Louis's spying. Their romantic chatter continues down the corridor, keeping Louis tense until they pass. Once the hallway quiets, Louis waits in silence to be sure the danger is gone. He exhales in relief, realizing he narrowly avoided exposure. Louis listens at the door, anticipating what the elixir has triggered inside. Inside, the Grand Duke and Grand Duchess sit together by the fire in an unusually intimate mood. The Grand Duke clears his throat, gathering courage to speak tenderly. He steels himself, visibly nervous but determined to express affection. The Grand Duchess sits quietly, receptive yet uncertain about her own feelings. She senses something strange as her heart races more than usual. A sudden touch startles her, intensifying the flustered feeling. The Grand Duke draws close, and the atmosphere turns openly romantic. He compliments her beauty with sincere warmth, deepening the moment. She responds shyly, overwhelmed by the unexpected tenderness. They clasp hands, sharing a mutual, affectionate gaze that confirms the elixir's effect. Outside the door, Louis smugly celebrates the romantic success he engineered. 2 children catch Louis loitering and ask what he means, startling him into a cough. The kids press for details, eager to be included in the secret. Louis shuts them down harshly and physically ushers them away, insisting they do not need to know. He reassures himself that the necessary work is done, and the outcome is secured. Morning comes over the duchy's castle, signaling consequences will now unfold publicly. The Grand Duchess enjoys the rare sunny weather, her mood noticeably lighter. She notices the household staff rushing about unusually early and wonders why. A maid, alarmed, tries to explain the commotion to her. The Grand Duchess rushes to the children's room, pushing the door open in fear. She discovers the children are missing and demands an explanation. A maid reports the children vanished overnight, and the staff is searching among the people. Another maid finds a sealed letter on the desk and urgently presents it. The letter is handed over, its seal suggesting it was left deliberately. Reading it, the Grand Duchess is shocked by what it contains. The letter opens by acknowledging their disappearance will surprise the couple. It explains they are leaving to follow their own path, framing it as a farewell. They thank the couple for kindness and oddly wish them to overcome the sorrow of losing their son quickly. A postscript hints that a new fate will soon come to the Grand Duke and Grand Duchess. It urges them to pour love onto the new life as they once showed the children. The letter is signed from Louis and the others, confirming the children left by choice. The Grand Duchess realizes the children understood everything and blames herself for burdening them with her desires. She fixates on the phrase new life, confused about what it could mean. Weeks pass, and the castle settles into a new routine without the children. Sudden news arrives, framed as something unquestionably positive. A priest announces the Grand Duchess is expecting a child, stunning everyone. The Grand Duchess repeats the words new life in disbelief as the letter's meaning clicks into place. The Grand Duke grabs her hands, overjoyed and calling her honey as he celebrates. She struggles to process the revelation, caught between shock and dawning hope. The sealed letter lingers in her mind as the source of the eerie foreknowledge. She suddenly remembers the letter's warning and realizes it predicted this exact outcome. The Grand Duke concludes the children knew she would conceive, confirming their departure was planned. The Grand Duchess interprets the children as divine fairies sent to guide them. Determined not to waste this miracle, the Grand Duke orders the warehouses open to distribute bread to the commoners. The storehouse doors are thrown open, beginning a large-scale release of provisions. Bakers work at full speed, pulling fresh loaves from blazing ovens to meet demand. Bread is handed out to cheering townspeople, spreading relief and gratitude. A woman hugs a loaf close, showing how meaningful the aid is to ordinary lives. Narration notes the duchy records its highest birth rate that year, implying widespread effects. The Grand Duchess cradles a baby as narration hints Finn's mistake created a far-reaching butterfly effect. The story pauses, noting the full consequences will only be understood in the distant future. Meanwhile, Louis and his companions continue their journey after leaving the duchy behind. The two cheerful children gush to Louis about how much they love traveling and want to keep doing it. Louis, less enthusiastic, insists they should travel for at least another 10 years. The kids escalate the demand to 100 years, leaving Louis exasperated while Finn urges him to endure. Louis privately regrets wasting so much time in the duchy, irritated by delays. He reasons that if unexpected events keep happening, their journey will only grow longer. To shorten travel time, Louis decides they need information to cross the continent quickly, but admits there is no easy solution yet. One child asks why there are no monsters around, breaking Louis's train of thought. The boy boasts he could catch monsters, eager for excitement. Finn warns Louis that 3 dragons are roaming nearby and drawn by a strong smell, making her wonder what monster would approach them. The kids worry they might smell, but Finn realizes the scent is something else entirely. The boy suggests bandits instead, wondering if there are none either. Louis points out the open snowy landscape makes ambushes unlikely, since bandits would have nowhere to hide. He jokes that bandits would have to sprout from the ground for that to happen. Immediately, 3 bandits burst into view, proving Louis's joke disastrously accurate. The bandits threaten the children and demand they hand over everything. The kids excitedly announce that bandits really did spring up from the ground. Louis is stunned that his offhand remark became reality. The bandit leader hesitates, confused by the children's odd calm. He snaps at his men for hesitating and orders them to seize the kids at once. Annoyed and cold, the leader complains about the day's misery and demands a plan now that they have targets. One bandit suggests the children look well off, so they should be taken hostage for ransom. The leader considers the suggestion, weighing profit over risk. He agrees it beats returning empty-handed and orders the others to tie the children up. A bandit moves to comply, but the group is interrupted before they can act. Louis addresses them calmly, implying something about the situation feels off. The bandits falter, unsure what Louis is getting at. Louis points out how strange it is to find 3 unguarded children in the middle of nowhere, hinting it should make them uneasy. The bandits insist no adults are nearby and demand why he would suggest otherwise. Louis tells them to think for a moment, letting suspicion build in their minds. Finn whispers for Louis's orders, while he silently decides what to do. Louis's greed takes over as he decides the bandits must have looted treasure, and he resolves to plunder them completely. The children urge Louis to go play again and suggest visiting the bandits' place, treating the kidnapping like an outing. Louis scoffs at the idea, calling it nonsense even as he listens. He realizes raiding the bandits' base would be more profitable than robbing them on the spot and starts to like the plan. The leader grows impatient and yells at his men for standing around instead of capturing the kids. He notices something odd, as if the situation is slipping out of his control. Louis raises his hands and signals surrender, presenting himself as compliant bait. He promises they will follow quietly, pretending to submit to being taken away. The bandits are thrown off by the easy surrender and hesitate in confusion. Louis pleads theatrically for them not to hurt them, reinforcing the deception. The bandits lead the children through the snow toward their hideout, leaving tracks behind. The two kids hum happily as they walk, acting like they are on a carefree stroll. One bandit watches them uneasily, unsettled by their lack of fear. The leader asks what seems suspicious, sensing his men's doubts. A bandit points out that kidnapped children should not look this relaxed, as if nothing can harm them. The leader dismisses the worry, insisting profit matters and they can ransom the kids or sell them into slavery. They arrive at the hideout, and the bandit announces it proudly while Louis reacts with interest. A massive sealed stone entrance reveals the hideout is far more elaborate than expected. The children marvel at the impressive base, thrilled by the spectacle. Louis examines the craftsmanship and doubts ordinary bandits could build something this refined. A bandit boasts the hideout was made by their boss, prompting Louis to ask who that boss is. The bandit begins to explain the boss's identity, building anticipation. Before he can finish, the leader strikes him hard to shut him up. Furious, the leader berates him for talking too freely and worries the kids might spread the information. He orders the children thrown into a prison cell, and his subordinate hurriedly agrees. The cell door slams shut, sealing the children inside. From behind the bars, Louis watches a guard walk away, confirming they are temporarily alone. The three children sit together in the cell, their expressions turning serious. Louis tells Finn she can come out now that they are safely confined. Finn emerges from hiding with a relieved sigh, ready to act. Louis orders Finn to thoroughly search the hideout for anything worth plundering, and she eagerly accepts. Finn darts off through the hideout's corridors, moving fast to scout and steal. The two kids complain they want to go out because the cell is boring. Louis tells them to wait quietly until Finn returns, promising they can have fun later. Alone with his thoughts, Louis grins at the prospect of hidden treasure and finds the danger thrilling. Elsewhere in the hideout, a powerful figure works in a forge-like chamber, suggesting the bandit's boss is no ordinary criminal. A heavy hammer slams down with force, sending sparks flying and emphasizing the boss's strength and industry. The hammering continues as the mysterious boss toils, foreshadowing a looming confrontation. The bandits return to their hideout and announce they are back to report in. Their leader is revealed as Pablo, boss of the Blood Axe bandits. Pablo praises the job and immediately asks how much loot they brought. The underling admits there was little profit because monsters have scared off travelers lately. He quickly adds they still gained something valuable from the outing. They explain they kidnapped 3 well-off kids and can profit by ransom or selling them. Pablo decides to inspect the captives himself, expecting their families to pay. In a cell, 2 of the children lie unconscious while a white-haired boy sits awake and calm. The white-haired boy notices someone approaching and stays composed. The underling presents the captives, and Pablo judges them decent targets. The white-haired boy sizes Pablo up and senses he is strong. Pablo also senses something off, thinking the boy seems powerful and out of place for a bandit den. Pablo pauses, unsettled by a strange feeling he cannot explain. A menacing pressure seems to loom over the cell as the boy's presence turns ominous. Pablo jolts in alarm, suddenly frightened by the atmosphere. The boy tilts his head, as if puzzled by Pablo's reaction. The boy realizes something about Pablo and smiles knowingly. He taunts Pablo by calling him a chunky uncle, throwing the boss off balance. The boy doubles down, implying Pablo is obviously the one being mocked, leaving Pablo speechless. The boy casually asks Pablo's name, taking control of the exchange. The underling tries to defend Pablo's status, but Pablo can barely say his own name under pressure. Pablo's men notice he is acting strangely and ask what is wrong. Pablo claims he has chills like he is catching a cold, while the underling is baffled to see the boss shaken. The boy is delighted that Pablo reacted exactly as he hoped. Pablo abruptly retreats, ordering his underling to handle the kids while he rests. As Pablo leaves, he is surprised to be addressed from behind. The boy waves from inside the cell, cheerfully telling Pablo to take care. The boy calmly says they will meet again, confident and unafraid. Pablo hurries away down the corridor, and his underling scrambles after him. A fairy maid flits into view, noticing the commotion in the hideout. The fairy returns to the white-haired boy, calling him Master Louis, and asks how the scouting went. She reports the warehouse was empty and the bandits seemed close to starving rather than hoarding treasure. Louis concludes the bandits are broke and that their plan hit a dead end. Louis reflects that people themselves are the real wealth, hinting at a new angle. The fairy is confused, but Louis brushes it off and praises her work. Louis says he will step out briefly and orders the fairy to watch the kidnapped kids. He insists she must stay because the captives will cause trouble when they wake, promising to return soon. The fairy reluctantly agrees, unhappy to be left behind. Louis grips the cell bars, preparing to leave on his own. With ease, Louis bends the iron bars apart and breaks out of the cell. He steps out as if nothing happened, unhurried and confident. Louis decides it is time to go catch some new suckers for his scheme. A door slams somewhere in the hideout, signaling movement and tension. Pablo collapses onto a couch, claiming he feels a bit better after resting. Still unsettled, Pablo wonders who that strange kid really is and admits he has never felt fear like this. He describes the sensation as facing an unbeatable monster and being completely paralyzed. Pablo sits in silence, trying to steady himself. He forces himself to deny it, insisting he could not be scared by a mere child. Pablo blames his weakness on having rested too long and losing his edge. Louis suddenly appears behind him, amused, and asks what Pablo finds so funny. Pablo whirls around in shock as Louis greets him like an old acquaintance. Pablo demands to know how Louis escaped, and Louis casually says he simply walked out. Pablo looms over Louis, stunned by the boy's audacity and calm. Pablo grabs his massive hammer, preparing to use force. He warns Louis not to come any closer, raising the weapon threateningly. Louis comments on the nice place, while Pablo tightens his grip, ready to strike. Pablo admits he does not understand the escape but offers to look away once if Louis leaves immediately. Louis refuses, asking what happens if he does not leave. Cornered, Pablo says he will beat Louis until he goes away. Louis taunts him to try, confident Pablo cannot make him leave. Enraged, Pablo swings his hammer with full strength at the boy. Mid-swing, Pablo panics, realizing he attacked in blind anger and cannot take it back. Louis stands unflinching as Pablo rages that Louis brought this on himself. Pablo freezes in disbelief as his hammer stops short, as if his body will not obey. He wonders why his hand suddenly stopped moving on its own, terrified by the loss of control. Louis calmly asks what is wrong and reminds Pablo he was supposed to hit him. Louis calls Pablo a big softer despite his size, stinging his pride. Pablo tries again with another powerful swing, desperate to regain dominance. Louis smirks, unfazed, as the hammer passes harmlessly by him. Pablo continues a furious barrage, swinging wildly in frustration. The hammer slams into the floor and nearby objects, causing damage but not touching Louis. Pablo ends up sprawled on the ground exhausted, while Louis yawns, bored by the effort. Louis asks if Pablo is already done, treating the fight as trivial. Pablo, shaken, asks again who Louis really is. Louis repeats the question back with a sly smile, enjoying Pablo's confusion. Louis tells Pablo he already knows the answer, pushing him to confront his fear. A shout interrupts as the fairy calls for Master Louis from elsewhere in the hideout. The fairy reports the twins are causing havoc out of boredom, and she cannot stop them alone. Pablo hears the fairy and is shocked that such a creature is involved. He stares as the fairy appears, unable to process what he is seeing. The fairy studies Pablo thoughtfully while he groans in confusion. She says something feels odd about him, prompting Pablo to ask what she means. The fairy notes Pablo smells like a dwarf but has the size of an orc. She concludes he is likely a half-dwarf born of a human and a dwarf, which confuses Louis given Pablo's huge build. The fairy admits she cannot explain the size discrepancy but finds the situation interesting. Louis repeats the idea aloud, questioning how Pablo could be half-dwarf. Louis tells Pablo again that he already knows who Louis is and urges him to remember. Pablo stares, sweating, struggling to connect the dots. A sudden realization hits Pablo, and he blurts out in shock that it might be true. A flashback begins with a glowing ingot being struck in a forge. Young Pablo watches a dwarf blacksmith hammer metal by the fire. The dwarf addresses his son and says there is something dwarves must always remember. He warns that if Pablo meets someone who makes his legs tremble and compels obedience, it is a dangerous sign. The forging continues as the warning hangs heavy in the air. The father orders that in such a case Pablo must run away without looking back. Young Pablo is confused and asks what his father is talking about. The father explains Pablo is not a pure dwarf and might be able to resist bloodline bonds. But he adds that inheriting his blood means Pablo can never be completely free, so he must run if it happens. Young Pablo asks what to do if he cannot run away. The father begins to answer, describing a situation where escape is impossible. He snaps that if Pablo cannot run, then he must do as the being says. The father repeats the rule. If Pablo encounters such a being, he must run, reminding him he has half human blood and should understand. Young Pablo tries to ask what those beings are doing, seeking clarity. The father clamps a hand over his mouth, warning that their ears are always open and careless speech is dangerous. The father starts to explain who they are, but the memory cuts before he can finish. Back in the present, Pablo trembles, thinking the answer might be a dragon. He blurts out the word dragon in disbelief as he looks at Louis. Louis confirms it with smug certainty. Louis says he suspected it from Pablo's size and is satisfied his intuition was right. Louis recalls feeling déjà vu, like when he saw dwarves repairing the lair with his father. He notes dwarves are intelligent, and admits he asked his father if it was fine to exploit them for free. Louis remembers his father dismissing the concern, calling it their comeuppance for generations of wrongs. The concept is named as the bonds of blood, a binding fear and obedience tied to lineage. Pablo clenches his fists, horrified as the implications of the bonds of blood sink in. Louis says records are scarce, but one account claims dwarves nearly wiped out the dragon race. He adds that if dwarves almost exterminated dragons once, he does not need to sympathize with them. Pablo recalls and again warns Louis not to come any closer, fear overriding pride. Louis points out that dwarves supposedly implanted fear of dragons into Pablo's blood, confirming why Pablo cannot resist. Louis declares that from now on Pablo will be his lackey, breaking Pablo emotionally. The fairy observes that Louis is blatantly calling Pablo a lackey, unimpressed by his tact. Pablo drops to his knees before Louis, defeated and submissive. He sniffles and cries, humiliated by how completely he has been broken. Louis comforts him casually and asks how old Pablo is this year, treating him like a new subordinate. Louis calls him young and mentions another elder is around 250 years old, reframing age by dragon standards. Pablo protests at being called a hatchling, insisting he is a mighty, dignified dragon. Louis accepts the explanation with a flat acknowledgement that it is so. Louis says he will get to the point and lays out terms without preamble. He orders Pablo to work under him for 10 years. Pablo is shocked, but Louis says it is at most 10 years and he will be free once the job is done. Pablo asks what kind of work Louis expects from him. Louis declares Pablo's job is to bring them home for world peace. Pablo is confused how world peace relates to bringing them home. Louis clarifies that by us he means the dragons, and Pablo confirms Louis is a dragon hatchling. Louis agrees and asks if Pablo has heard the story of a naive knight who kills a hatchling and calls himself a dragon slayer. He continues the tale of the enraged father dragon who lost his child and was blinded by anger. In the story, the furious dragon destroys an entire kingdom in retaliation. Pablo asks if that story was real, now understanding the danger. Louis says even monsters rage when their babies are hurt, and dragons will not stay still. Louis warns the threat is worse when the parents are especially powerful. Pablo realizes the parents could be two zero-class dragons who have reached ascension and is stunned. Louis implies such beings would bring an unprecedented catastrophe upon the world. Louis asks if Pablo finally understands, and Pablo agrees but wonders why Louis chose him for such a task. Louis pauses, considering how to answer Pablo's question. Louis admits he picked Pablo because he caught his eye and seemed easy to handle. He quickly changes the explanation, claiming Pablo is the chosen one, leaving Pablo confused. Louis flatters Pablo's strong shoulders and sturdy physique as proof of his suitability. He praises Pablo's fearless spirit, and claims anyone who challenges him will vanish on their own. Louis adds that Pablo's loyalty is obvious, and that with dwarf blood there is no need to fear betrayal. Louis declares Pablo truly worthy of being chosen by the dragon as the ultimate servant. Louis frames the arrangement as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Pablo, who can only echo the word opportunity in disbelief. Louis pressures the dwarf by pointing out the task involves safely escorting 3 deer-like hatchlings, not just one, making the payoff far greater. The fairy maid is startled by the mention of deer hatchlings as Louis hints their parents will surely reward any success. Tempted by the promise of unimaginable rewards, the dwarf's resolve surges as he convinces himself he's been chosen. Louis coolly reinforces the dwarf's confidence while the fairy maid marvels at how effortlessly Louis manipulates him. Louis asks if the dwarf will come along, and the dwarf eagerly agrees. The dwarf double-checks he won't regret it, and Louis firmly insists he won't. Louis hides a smug grin, clearly satisfied the dwarf has taken the bait. A strange force flares around the dwarf, and he freezes, sensing something wrong. The dwarf panics as the sensation intensifies, demanding to know what's happening to him. Louis bluntly explains the dwarf has effectively put a leash on himself. Confused and sweating, the dwarf asks what Louis means by that. Louis reveals it's the bonds of blood. Any promise made before a dragon must be kept unconditionally. When asked what happens if the promise is broken, Louis dismisses it as nothing serious. Louis draws out the suspense with a calm, ominous smile. The mood turns grim as the implication of imprisonment and control hangs in the air. The dwarf collapses in despair, realizing he's trapped and can't continue his lineage if he's bound like this. Louis snaps at him to get up and claims there's no problem as long as the promise is kept. The dwarf doubts Louis's reassurance and presses for certainty. Louis introduces the twins to their temporary guardian, Pablo, treating him like a servant, while Pablo awkwardly greets them. The twins excitedly gush over Pablo's unusual height for a dwarf, leaving him flustered. Louis questions how a mixed-blood dwarf became so tall, and Pablo explains he was small until he ate a strange fruit and fell ill. Pablo finishes that after recovering he became stronger and taller, shocking Louis. Louis urgently asks what the fruit looked like, and Pablo recalls it was odd. Louis jolts when Pablo describes it as bone-shaped, recognizing the clue. Louis abruptly pulls out a book to confirm his suspicion, startling Pablo. The book identifies the grow fruit, a rare water-based elixir fruit that promotes growth without side effects. Louis demands confirmation, and Pablo admits the fruit he ate looked exactly like the grow fruit illustration. Louis's excitement turns predatory as he realizes the grow fruit is real and within reach. He fantasizes that eating it will let him surpass the twins who tease him for being slightly smaller. As Pablo prepares to leave, Louis stops him, refusing to go home until he gets the grow fruit. Louis declares their new top priority, leaving Pablo confused. Louis announces the target outright, the grow fruit. The twins ask what grow fruit is, but Louis snaps that it's his and he won't explain. Pablo hesitantly warns there's a problem, and Louis demands details. Pablo explains the grow fruit tree's location has been occupied by a large group of snow orcs, making it hard to approach. Louis dismisses the warning and orders Pablo to guide them to the tree anyway. Louis claims he'll handle the rest, while Pablo quietly admits he's scared. The group reaches a snowy cliffside overlooking the target area. They step onto the ridge, preparing to scout the camp below. From the cliff, Pablo and Louis look down as the twins peer over eagerly. Louis asks if that's the place, and Pablo confirms it's the snow orc campsite. Pablo notes the camp has grown from a small settlement to hundreds over time. Louis presses for the exact location of the grow fruit, and Pablo hesitates. Under pressure, Pablo starts to answer where Louis's grow fruit is. Pablo admits it's probably in the middle of the orc camp, and Louis is stunned. Pablo quickly reassures Louis the tree wasn't destroyed because it's hidden in an underground cave. He insists the cave is hard to notice and was found by chance, so the orcs won't discover it. Louis calls to the twins, and they respond enthusiastically. Before anyone can object, the twins gleefully charge down toward the camp, treating it like a game. Pablo panics, warning snow orcs are far stronger than regular orcs and they need a plan. The fairy maid tells Pablo not to worry, leaving him baffled. She scolds him for underestimating them just because they look like children. As the hatchlings sprint in, she emphasizes dragons are feared as the strongest beings alive. The snow orcs notice something approaching and react in confusion. Louis advances with the twins, his confidence rising as the orcs sense danger. The orcs recognize the presence as dragon-like and begin to panic. The twins leap into the orcs' midst with crackling power, shocking the camp. One twin slashes an orc brutally, sending it flying and drawing screams. More orcs rush in, shouting their alarm as they try to surround the intruders. The girl twin taunts them to come closer, daring them into her attack range. The hatchlings dart away and the orcs chase, while the fairy maid points out this is exactly how dragons operate. Pablo realizes something is off because snow orcs don't flee so easily, even from strong foes. The fairy maid compares them to rats before a snake, driven to submit by instinct. She explains that even violent snow orcs can't withstand a dragon's noble aura and will crumble just by facing it. Pablo finally understands the terror effect at work. The concept is named Dragon Fear, an aura that strips willpower and overwhelms opponents. The fairy maid notes, humans call it that, adding the hatchlings are still young and will only grow more terrifying. Pablo worries the aura alone could cause the orcs to be massacred by the stampede of their own panicked crowd. A subordinate runs up calling for Pablo, alarmed by the shaking canyon. The fairy maid is irritated by the interruption as Pablo's attention is pulled away. The subordinate reports the entire canyon is trembling, asking if Pablo is alright. From the ridge, they see the orc camp erupting into chaos and destruction. The subordinate blurts out that the snow orc campsite is being wiped out, stunned by the spectacle. Pablo points toward the devastation, trying to make sense of what he's seeing. He recognizes the source as the children they brought, now tearing through the camp. Louis joins the fight, gathering crackling energy with a focused expression. Louis unleashes an explosive lightning blast that detonates among the orcs. The twins coordinate a spinning lightning technique, using momentum and electricity to shred enemies. Their combined assault carves through multiple orcs at once, leaving bodies and blood in their wake. Pablo's subordinate is horrified that the kids are slaughtering snow orcs so casually. He asks Pablo if he already knew they were this dangerous, and Pablo is caught off guard. The subordinate insists Pablo must have realized it the moment he saw them. Pablo awkwardly admits they look young but possess tremendous power, struggling to explain. The fairy maid whispers instructions to Pablo, and he agrees to follow her lead. Pablo loudly plays along, and his subordinate praises him as if he masterminded everything. Pablo claims he ordered the twins to deal with the snow orcs, trying to save face. The subordinate applauds, then asks what kind of kids could be such monsters. Pablo explodes at the insult, refusing to let anyone call them monsters. The fairy maid smacks Pablo for copying her outburst, and he immediately apologizes. Pablo clears his throat and orders his subordinate to treat the twins properly because they're not to be handled carelessly. The subordinate repeats the phrase in confusion, realizing how far above them the twins are. A massive snow orc chieftain roars into view, signaling a far more dangerous opponent. The chieftain charges Louis with overwhelming force, swinging a huge weapon and kicking up a storm. The impact blasts debris and dust as the chieftain's attack tears through the ground. The chieftain snarls, furious and ready to crush Louis. Louis casually catches the chieftain's strike and asks if he's finished, unfazed. With a smug smile, Louis declares it's his turn now. Louis surges forward and smashes the chieftain with a concentrated blow of blue energy. The chieftain is hurled backward, electricity ripping through his body as Louis advances. The chieftain crashes hard, stunned and broken by the counterattack. He lies sprawled in the snow, defeated, while Louis stands over him. Louis scoffs that the fight is boring, already done with the chieftain. Pablo and his subordinates stare in stunned silence, unable to process the carnage. A dying scream echoes across the blood-stained snow as the last resistance collapses. The twins finish off remaining orcs with confident, practiced strikes. After the slaughter, the twins finally pant and admit it was tougher than expected. Louis praises them and tells them to rest while he goes off briefly, and they cheerfully agree. Louis notices Pablo lingering on the ridge instead of returning, and he's confused. Annoyed, Louis wonders why Pablo is just standing there instead of rushing back. Louis spots Pablo at a distance, and realizes he's still waiting. Pablo tells his subordinate to stay put while he goes to check on Louis, and the subordinate offers to come. Pablo refuses and insists on going alone, muttering angrily about Louis. Back near Louis, Pablo forces a nervous laugh and asks if Louis called him. Louis cuts to the point and asks where the grow fruit is, leaving Pablo confused by the sudden demand. Luis's aura turns menacing as he repeats the question about his grow fruit, terrifying Pablo into a squeak. They move through the ruined camp toward the rocky center where the hidden entrance should be. Luis asks if the cave entrance is here, and Pablo confirms it is. Pablo explains that going through the entrance, and deeper inside leads to the tree. Pablo pauses, sensing something off about the entrance. Pablo admits it's strange because it used to be easy to enter, but now something seems to block it. Luis orders Pablo to stay outside since the target is just ahead, and Pablo reluctantly agrees. Luis slips into the cave alone, moving cautiously through the narrow passage. He continues deeper, alert to any traps or changes in the tunnel. Seeing a glow ahead, Luis wonders if the tree is there. Luis is dazzled by the radiant light spilling through the cavern. He finds the luminous grow fruit tree and celebrates his discovery. Two pale, bone-shaped fruits hang among the glowing leaves, confirming the prize is real. Luis rushes forward, ecstatic, calling it his grow fruit and imagining his future height. He suddenly stops short, sensing something isn't right. Luis notices the fruit is much smaller than the book described and questions why. He concludes the grow fruit's growth is incomplete and would need at least 200 more years to fully mature. Luis realizes an immature fruit would have a diminished effect and wonders what to do with it now. Luis returns to the entrance where Pablo waits and asks if he found what he wanted. Luis admits the tree was there as promised, but the fruit hasn't fully ripened yet. Pablo asks what Luis will do, and Luis says he has no choice but to wait until it fully ripens before eating it. Pablo worries that if Luis leaves it, someone might steal it. The idea of theft ignites Luis's rage, and Pablo recoils in fear. Luis coldly says he welcomes anyone who tries, frightening Pablo further. A shimmering purple barrier forms over the cave entrance, sealing it off with magical force. A warning sign appears at the barrier, implying the area is now claimed and protected. The sign threatens extreme bad luck for anyone who enters or touches Luis's belongings, daring intruders to try. Luis reminds Pablo he has subordinates and proposes using them to guard the grow fruit. When Pablo hesitates, Luis intimidates him into immediate obedience, and Pablo offers his underlings for any purpose. Luis explains he has already set traps but still feels uneasy and needs someone to watch the grow fruit until it ripens. A massive stone doorway stands nearby, suggesting a fortified base or storage site for the plan. Luis thinks it over, arms crossed, calculating his next move. A crowd of Pablo's men gathers in the snow, awaiting orders as potential guards. The underlings react with dread and reluctance, clearly terrified of the assignment. Pablo complains that none of his men seem decent enough for the job, while Luis looks impatient. Luis decides it's still worth investing time for future height growth and resolves to rely on short-term measures to secure the grow fruit. Bandits gather in confusion, whispering about why they were summoned and fearing a fight. A one-eyed bandit notices a terrifying presence and wonders what their captor is planning. A booming greeting confirms the crowd are the Blood Axe bandits, heightening their dread. Luis, a smug white-haired boy, announces he has important news for the gang. He declares the Blood Axe bandits disbanded, stunning everyone into silence. A furious protest erupts, demanding who gave Luis authority to do this. The one-eyed bandit confronts their red-bearded boss, suspecting he agreed to this, while the boss stays grimly quiet. Luis calls in his twin assistants and signals that the real lesson is about to start. The cheerful twins ready their clubs, eager to follow Luis's orders. The bandits panic as the twins approach, begging them not to come closer. One bandit is struck down hard, collapsing from the sudden blow. More bandits are smashed aside in rapid succession, overwhelmed by the twins' speed. Luis praises the twins and coldly instructs them to target lethal spots to terrify the men. The boss hears screams and apologizes to his men, realizing this is beyond a simple scare. The fortress-like mountain entrance looms, underscoring that escape is not an option. Bandits lie bloodied in the snow, begging for help and fearing they will die. Luis affectionately congratulates the twins, treating the brutality like a game. He mocks the bandits' weakness, insisting the twins are far more than ordinary children. The surviving bandits, battered and confused, hear Luis claim there's no need to worry. Luis promises he will thoroughly reshape them, revealing this is forced reform through pain. The snowy mountains stand quiet as the training regime settles in. A squirrel calmly eats, a brief contrast to the violence below. A sudden shock startles the squirrel, hinting at danger intruding even here. Luis scolds someone for not avoiding obvious hazards, showing his harsh, impatient teaching style. He berates them for failing to dodge what they can plainly see, demanding basic competence. Bandits groan and plead for mercy as Luis judges them too slow and too fragile. Luis dismisses them as weak and orders a short break, as if their suffering is routine. The bandits lament that fainting would be easier, but realize even that won't spare them much. They consider running, but remember escapees were punished with even worse training. A bandit protests that they aren't soldiers and shouldn't endure military-style torment. The one-eyed bandit bleakly questions whether life is worth it if they keep thinking like victims. He admits he stopped thinking and now just endures, implying resignation is their survival tactic. Another bandit wonders why their bodies recover overnight despite daily beatings, sensing something unnatural. Luis, amused, notes they're improving quickly, pleased with their forced growth. He reveals he mixes his father's potent recovery potions into their meals so they heal fast after sleep. He adds mental conditioning to instill willpower and prevent laziness, turning pain into discipline. He also teaches them martial law from books taken from his father's study to ensure steady progress. Lewis reflects that the knowledge is basic but from the dragon's library, and teaching these men feels wasteful yet necessary. He decides the effort is unavoidable if he wants to develop them quickly into the tools he wants. Lewis tells himself the bandits are lucky to receive this training and knowledge at all. The boss approaches Lewis to report on assigned tasks, and Lewis casually asks how it went. The boss says he finished the work but hesitates, uneasy about what comes next. Lewis praises him and orders him to prepare while Lewis personally takes the others along. Lewis compares his method to a lion throwing cubs off cliffs to make them stronger, revealing his ruthless philosophy. The boss watches Lewis's ominous confidence and wonders what he plans to use this new scheme for. The mountains stretch out, foreshadowing a dangerous field exercise. The bandits march with heavy packs, exhausted but forced onward. They complain about being gathered again and question the strange bags they were ordered to carry. A sharp command forces the group to clear the way, signaling something big is being unveiled. A catapult is revealed, and the bandits are horrified at the implication. The siege engine stands ready, confirming this is not a bluff. The boss wipes sweat, already sensing disaster. The one-eyed bandit asks if they're about to siege somewhere, still not grasping the real purpose. The boss calls everyone to attention, bracing them for an announcement. Lewis says explanations are pointless and insists they learn by witnessing it firsthand. Lewis summons his experienced assistant, and the girl eagerly volunteers. She runs toward the catapult with a huge pack, treating it like play. She climbs into the sling and cheerfully settles in, ready to be launched. The bandits panic, unable to believe a child is about to be fired from a catapult. Lewis orders his assistant to prepare, and she announces she's ready. Lewis gives the firing command without hesitation. The catapult launches the girl high into the sky, shocking the onlookers. Mid-flight, she laughs wildly, thrilled by the danger. The bandits scream that this is insane as they watch her soar. The boss realizes Lewis literally meant the lion cub cliff lesson and is horrified. Everyone watches the tiny figure arc through the sky, holding their breath. As she begins to fall, the bandits panic at the thought she'll crash. A parachute deploys, revealing the pack was a safety device and slowing her descent. The bandits are stunned into speechless disbelief at the sudden rescue. Lewis proudly declares the catapult and parachute worked perfectly and acts like it's obvious. When the crowd stays frozen, Lewis offers to demonstrate again as if they simply missed the lesson. He calls for the second assistant, and the boy eagerly steps forward. The boy is launched and whoops with excitement, enjoying the flight. Lewis notes the lighter kids overshot the intended landing area but deems it acceptable. He concludes the range is fine and that this method lets him mobilize them quickly before his potion is stolen. Lewis smugly explains it's easy, while the bandits react in disbelief at his casual tone. The bandits tremble, realizing they're expected to do the same terrifying stunt. One bandit breaks down screaming for help, terrified of dying in this training. Lewis considers their panic with a cool, calculating look. A purple barrier-like force appears as the terrified bandit tries to bolt, suggesting Lewis prevents escape. The fleeing bandit slams into the barrier and is violently knocked back. He crashes to the ground as the others stare, realizing resistance is futile. Lewis tells them fear is natural but insists a little courage is all they need to do it too. The one-eyed bandit and others demand to hear from those thrown and call the whole idea madness. Lewis complains they still don't get it and hints someone else should demonstrate for them. With a sly smile, Lewis suggests a different demonstrator will make the lesson sink in. The boss recoils as everyone's attention turns toward him, sensing he's the target. Lewis pressures the boss to prove he can do it, while the boss admits he lacks the courage. Lewis loudly announces the boss's cowardice and proposes using the catapult to train him, and the crowd agrees. The boss rants that their suffering is his fault and that he brought the catapult, fueling the mob's anger. The bandit sees the boss and blame him, while he struggles and demands to be released. The mob surges forward chanting that it's the boss's fault, and the boss sees at their betrayal. Dragged toward the catapult, the boss's protests collapse into desperate pleading. Despite his screams, the catapult is fired and the boss is launched into the air. Lewis watches the boss fly and notes the big man actually travels better than expected. Lewis asks who wants to try next, turning the stunt into mandatory participation. The bandits, resigned and tearful, accept they must do it too, mourning their fate. Screams echo as more bodies are launched, the training escalating into mass terror. For weeks later, Lewis studies alone, still planning his next steps. He doubts whether his current approach will be enough to protect what he cares about. Lewis concludes basic techniques aren't sufficient, and worries skilled enemies could easily steal his grow fruit. He decides he must teach the bandits advanced techniques, but realizes his only advanced book is problematic. He identifies it as the Hero King's Book of Martial Arts, a powerful but daunting text. Lewis admits the theory is far too complex for him to teach quickly. With time running out, he resolves to find a more suitable advanced martial book and panics over how. The twins interrupt, asking what Lewis is doing and thinking about, startling him. The boy twin notices the martial book and asks if Lewis is learning it, complaining martial books are boring. Louis asks if they've seen books like this, and they boast their father's study has many. Louis realizes the solution and asks if they've memorized any martial books. The twins compete, bragging about how many books each has memorized. They escalate into a childish rivalry, and Louis notes that despite immaturity, they're dragons with immense capacity. Louis decides there must be useful advanced books among what they've memorized. To settle their argument, Louis proposes writing the memorized techniques down and comparing them, though the twins complain. He reframes it as a bet on who can write the best techniques, motivating them to participate. The twins excitedly accept the bet and vow to win. They immediately start writing furiously while Louis watches, satisfied they're easy to steer. A candle burns as time passes in intense, focused work. The candle shortens, showing the writing marathon continues for hours. Louis announces the writing is finished, ready to judge the results. Both twins rush in claiming they finished first, each carrying a huge stack of pages. Louis is shocked they're already done, realizing they produced an enormous amount. He wonders if they wrote sloppily, suspicious of such volume. Reading the pages, Louis is stunned to find unexpected quality and precision. He rapidly flips through stacks, confirming the content is consistent and complete. Louis checks the writing closely, verifying it matches the original texts. He realizes they perfectly transcribed more than 11 martial books, far beyond his expectations. The twins ask who won, each insisting their own victory. They argue loudly, claiming one wrote more, while Louis considers how to judge fairly. Louis declares the round a tie, stunning both of them. He explains that although Connie wrote more books, Khan's written techniques are superior in quality. Connie sulks at the verdict, unhappy despite her higher output. Khan accepts that his techniques were judged better, reinforcing the tie. A fairy messenger arrives, reporting Louis's tasks are complete and Pablo's work is nearly done, meaning the schedule is on track. Louis decides he has the advanced material he needs and announces it's time to prepare for the grand finale. Another 2 weeks later, the scene shifts to a grim training ground marked by skulls and stakes. A hardened voice calls for attention, signaling a formal gathering of the trainees. The bandits now stand tougher and more disciplined, showing the brutal weeks changed them. The one-eyed bandit leads a command for everyone to salute, acting like a drilled soldier. The crowd roars in unison toward Louis and the twins on the rise, showing fierce loyalty or fear. Louis smiles calmly, satisfied that his harsh program has forged obedience and strength. The former weaklings glare with grim resolve, their expressions hardened by constant training. More bandits stare forward with cold intensity, no longer the panicked men from before. Louis praises their instructor and commends the group for enduring 6 weeks without dropouts, applauding their effort. The bandits continue roaring their response, energized like a trained unit. Louis says they must be curious why they endured such hellish training, preparing to reveal the reason. With a confident smile, Louis begins to explain what it all was for. A sudden blinding golden light erupts nearby, interrupting Louis's explanation and shocking the bandits. The bandits recoil in terror as the radiant phenomenon intensifies, realizing something powerful has appeared. They stare upward, shouting in disbelief as the source of the light becomes visible. A majestic, haloed, armored figure manifests in crackling golden energy, announcing an overwhelming new threat or arrival. A one-eyed bandit leader freezes in terror, unable to comprehend the overwhelming presence that just appeared. A radiant armored figure manifests with crackling power, projecting an aura of absolute divinity. The towering being looms over the bandits, instantly dominating them with sheer pressure. The apparition commands the humans to listen, establishing itself as an authority beyond question. It declares that it is the god of war Kalos and that these humans have been chosen by it. The bandits panic at the name, stunned that a legendary war god would address them. One bandit nervously confirms they are truly being selected by the god of war Kalos. Narration frames Kalos as an ancient legendary being, lending credibility to the spectacle. The legend escalates, describing Kalos slaughtering demons and shaping mountains from their corpses. With such a being before them choosing them, the Blood Axe bandits are shaken to their core. The story cuts to Louis at the same moment, hinting the miracle is being orchestrated. Inside the operation, Louis strains while maintaining the god of war Kalos' illusion and insists he is busy. Louis reveals the god is a light refraction illusion combined with spatial technique, and it is working so far. The illusion begins to destabilize, and Louis curses as he struggles to keep it intact. The twins report the illusion is pierced on one side and promise to cover the flaw with lightning effects. One twin unleashes lightning with confidence, reinforcing the deception with spectacle. The lightning patches the illusion's weak point, restoring the god's convincing presence. Louis praises the twins for the quick fix, keeping the con running smoothly. Louis plans the next step: expand the space and use attribute power to affect the atmosphere for realism. Louis, speaking as the god, confirms again that the bandits have indeed been chosen. The illusion repeats the affirmation with divine gravitas, deepening the bandits' belief. Kalos warns them to prepare for a future disaster and to become the light against coming darkness. The god charges them to become a sword that condemns evil, giving them a heroic mission. Louis decides the display is enough to fool them and prepares to seal the belief with mental technique. He activates the mental engraving, making the illusion's words sink into their minds as truth. Runes swirl around the bandits as the mental imprint takes hold, leaving them dazed and receptive. The bandits fall into fervent worship, proclaiming faith in the god of war Kalos. Lewis orders Finn to move immediately, and the fairy maid acknowledges his command. Finn rushes across the snow toward a small sapling, acting on Lewis's plan. She pours Lewis's specially made plant growth accelerator onto the sapling, using every last drop. Energy surges at the roots as the sapling begins to transform unnaturally fast. The trunk thickens and shoots upward in an instant, and Finn confirms the concoction works. A massive tree fully forms, shocking anyone watching with its sudden impossible growth. The bandits gape at the giant tree and interpret it as a holy miracle. Kalos claims the tree is proof of its promise, cementing the miracle as divine evidence. The god declares a trial is coming, setting the next step for the newly chosen warriors. The bandits look around in confusion, waiting for instructions on what the trial entails. Lewis orders Pablo to act now, initiating the prepared stage for the trial. Pablo acknowledges the order with grim focus, ready to execute the setup. Pablo swings his massive hammer with a roar, beginning the construction of the trial site. His blow detonates rock, blasting debris outward as the mountainside fractures. He continues smashing, carving deeper until the stone gives way. The cliff face collapses further, revealing a newly opened passage. A cavern entrance is exposed with the words Cave of Trial carved into the stone. Kalos promises blessings and rewards to those who pass the Cave of Trial. The bandits erupt into zeal, shouting praise and pledging themselves to the war god. Lewis privately notes the cave contains martial books by the twins and selected spiritual books he chose. He adds that Pablo's traps will make taking the books difficult, since he will not give them away for free. Kalos addresses the chosen warriors and vows to return as long as the Tree of Promise thrives. The god's final command is to believe and wait, completing the indoctrination. The divine presence vanishes, leaving the bandits staring into the empty sky in stunned silence. One bandit slowly accepts what happened, while another remains confused by the sudden disappearance. The one-eyed leader convinces himself they truly are chosen and that their hardships were a test. The rest join in, fully embracing the chosen narrative and praising Kalos with renewed fervor. Lewis watches from above with a satisfied, detached calm as their worship continues. He congratulates himself on a perfect finale, pleased with how cleanly the con concluded. The twins and Finn celebrate the successful performance, and want to do it again for fun. Pablo, however, looks uneasy and silent, not sharing their playful mood. He realizes the bandits now firmly believe they were chosen by the god of war. Pablo predicts the Tree of Promise, and the area will become holy ground the bandits will die to protect. He pities them, recognizing they have been turned into loyal guard dogs for Lewis's scheme. The implication hits Pablo personally, and he panics that he is the one holding the leash. Overwhelmed, Pablo collapses in despair until Lewis snaps at him to stop and leave immediately. Pablo forces himself up and trudges after Lewis, resigned to his role. As they depart, the twins ask where they are going next, and Lewis promises somewhere more fun. The scene shifts to the Silverflower Castle, floating in the void like a celestial fortress. Inside, a dark-haired noble stands alone by a vast window, staring out at the world below. He worries whether Lewis is eating properly, his concern breaking through his formal composure. He sighs and decides that even during the important succession, he should not leave Lewis alone. Frustration boils over as he resents his absent father for not handling this responsibility. He hesitates at the doorway, still torn between duty and worry. He steels himself and decides to go anyway, choosing Lewis over protocol. Despite the mountain of tasks, he convinces himself he can sneak away for just one day. A silver-haired man appears and questions why he is in such a hurry, catching him mid-escape. The newcomer needles him, implying he is trying to run from his sacred duty. The dark-haired noble bristles while the silver-haired man lounges smugly, clearly enjoying the confrontation. Trying to play it off, the noble denies running away and demands to know why the man is here. The silver-haired man is identified as Carlos, a lightning attribute dragon and father of Khan and Connie. Carlos casually admits he was just watching, treating the situation like entertainment. Annoyed, the noble tells Carlos to stop bothering him and leave. Carlos refuses to go, humming as if he has all the time in the world. Carlos's amused smile makes it clear he intends to keep pressing the issue. A crystal ball sits nearby, hinting Carlos has been observing events remotely. Carlos claims he only tried to entertain the noble, who retorts that Carlos is the bored one. Carlos lifts the crystal ball, preparing to show what he has been watching. The crystal reveals Lewis, and Carlos asks if the noble is worried about him again. The noble's silence betrays his feelings, even as he tries to hide them. Carlos bluntly states the noble was planning to sneak off to see Lewis, cornering him. Flustered, the noble stammers denial while Carlos laughs at the obvious lie. Carlos warns that leaving without permission during the succession is forbidden and asks what happens if he is caught. The noble admits the elders would notice and that he has no solution if he gets caught. Carlos mocks him as hopeless and asks if he is truly that worried about Lewis, then points out his own children too. Carlos says he is not worried about Khan and Connie at all, baffling the noble. He explains his kids adore Lewis, and he even told them to visit Lewis whenever they are bored. Carlos teases that Lewis is not an ordinary dragon and boasts Lewis cares for his kids better than he does, angering the noble. Carlos calls out the noble's overprotectiveness and suggests Louis is no ordinary hatchling. He describes Louis as extraordinary, born with 4 attributes and almost like a holy dragon, praising the noble's parenting. Carlos snaps that the noble is blessed and should admit it, leaving the noble conflicted. Carlos urges him to stop worrying about Louis and focus on the elder's succession, suggesting Louis might enjoy freedom without him. Carlos adds that the twins will not bother Louis too much because he already told them to listen to Louis. He jokes the twins' personalities resemble the noble's and will be a handful, provoking the noble's irritation. Carlos predicts the twins will cause an accident and insists they should leave problems to Louis instead of handling them themselves. He laughs that Louis will handle everything smoothly, while the noble fumes at the smug reassurance. Carlos proposes that this chaos is perfect training for Louis, when a sudden disturbance interrupts him. An explosion rocks the castle, shattering stone and cutting the conversation short. A furious voice threatens violence, and someone screams for Carlos to conserve his attribute power. The shock leaves a moment of stunned silence amid drifting debris. The story returns to the surface with Louis's party, where someone calls out for Louis. Louis snaps at the twins to stop calling him, clearly exhausted by their constant attention. The twins worry he will ignore them if they stop, and Louis reluctantly agrees as long as they quiet down. The twins cling to Louis affectionately, and he begs them for personal space. They refuse, loudly declaring they like Louis, while he wonders what he did to deserve this. Louis finally clamps a hand over one twin's mouth, forcing a moment of silence. A horse suddenly whinnies loudly, drawing attention to their travel preparations. The horse rears and Pablo struggles to control it, trying to steady the carriage. Pablo reports he prepared the carriage exactly as Louis requested. Louis praises Pablo and notes they can now travel more comfortably. Louis asks Pablo for the closest western port from their current location. Pablo answers that it is Lufthagen, a busy trade port where finding a ship should be easy. Louis asks how long it will take to reach Lufthagen. Pablo estimates half a year by carriage, but with snowstorms it could take about a year. Louis is displeased by the long timeline and worries unforeseen delays could make it even longer. He asks if there is any way to get there faster. Pablo explains that in the winter continent, horse-drawn carriages are already the fastest option, with no better shortcut. Louis concludes that being stuck for a year is troublesome and starts searching for alternatives. Pablo hesitantly addresses Louis, sensing where his thoughts are going. He asks whether Louis can contact other dragons, hoping for a faster solution. Louis turns sharply, and Pablo backpedals, insisting Louis must have already considered it. Pablo suggests that if Louis knows any dragons on this continent, they might carry him home. Louis stares in disbelief at Pablo's assumption, as if hearing something impossible. Louis reasons that if dragons were hiding on the winter continent, asking one for a ride would solve everything. He pauses, the idea collapsing as he confronts a hard truth. Pablo bluntly states there are no dragons here, prompting Louis to demand clarification. Pablo nervously amends that there are no dragons he knows of, still leaving Louis unsatisfied. Louis calls for Finn, demanding whether she knows anyone who could help. Finn admits she does not know much about other dragons either. The twins also admit ignorance, and Louis dismisses them as expectedly unhelpful. Louis thinks that finding another dragon would drastically shorten their return schedule. He admits the real problem is simply where to find a dragon at all in this land. Louis pivots back to Pablo and asks whether he knows any legends about dragons. Pablo says he knows a few legends and suggests stopping by a city on the way west to gather information. Louis agrees enthusiastically and orders them to leave immediately, while the twins cheer. The carriage sets off through the snow, their new objective clear: search for dragons. As the day fades, the wagon rolls onward through the winter forest under an orange sky. The horse grows restless again, and Pablo struggles to keep it steady as they push forward. With darkness approaching and the next city far away, Pablo recommends camping for the night, and Louis agrees. Night settles over the mountains, marking a pause in their journey. A campfire is lit, its warmth and crackle cutting through the cold. They gather around the fire to cook, with the twins perched nearby while Louis sits quietly and Pablo watches over them. Meat sizzles over the flames, signaling a brief moment of rest before the dragon hunt continues. Two eager children stare at the roasting meat, already convinced it will be delicious. They impatiently ask the dwarf cook when it will be done, and he tells them to wait a little longer. The dwarf finishes seasoning the roast with practiced confidence. When the dwarf announces it is ready, the kids explode with excitement. The kids happily dig in while the dwarf urges Master Louis to try some too, and Louis agrees. Louis takes a bite and pauses, surprised by the taste. Louis compliments the perfect seasoning, and the dwarf bashfully accepts the praise. Louis steers the conversation back to the earlier topic, pressing the dwarf about a dragon at Cash Tower. The dwarf explains he heard it from a hunter in a city they passed, about a dragon-like monster appearing around 20 years ago. The dwarf is abruptly smacked mid-story, jolted into panic. Louis erupts at the mention of a dragon, accusing the dwarf of making them sound like dragon allies, and the dwarf tries to backpedal. Louis escalates, demanding the dwarf continue and threatening him into compliance, leaving the dwarf apologizing. Louis berates the dwarf for getting cocky from a single compliment, and orders him to speak properly. Terrified, the dwarf restarts the tale, saying a noble dragon-like creature was sighted in a village about 20 years ago. He describes the beast as house-sized with a roar so terrifying the whole village panicked. Lewis doubts the credibility, noting it sounds like the same rumors circulating recently. The dwarf adds that a nearby lord sent a large force and hired mercenaries to investigate, prompting Lewis to ask what happened. The dwarf hesitates, saying there has been no news of the dispatched troops returning. The implication lands that the entire force was wiped out. The dwarf says disappearances continued around Cash Tower Mountain until people largely stopped going there. Lewis reflects that after a supposed dragon sighting, even a major investigation force vanished. Rather than fear, Lewis finds the situation intriguing. He decides a detour is feasible since they are heading west anyway, and believes Fabro's intel suggests something real is there. Lewis reasons it is likely not a dragon but still a powerful monster, making the mountain a dangerous gamble. Lewis senses something and turns alert. When asked what is wrong, Lewis warns that someone is approaching. The dwarf readies his weapon, but Lewis says it is a lone person, not a monster. The dwarf insists he will handle the intruder himself. He shouts into the dark for whoever is there to reveal themselves immediately. Only silence answers at first, heightening tension. A calm voice tells them they do not need to be so guarded, startling them. A cloaked traveler steps out of the snowy woods toward the camp. The dwarf blocks him with his hammer while Lewis watches closely. The traveler introduces himself as Jacob Truegun and says he came over after seeing their firelight. Lewis fixates on the surname Truegun, feeling it is familiar and trying to place it. Jacob politely asks to share their warmth, but the dwarf refuses because children are present. Jacob accepts the suspicion, acknowledging they might be uneasy around outsiders. He apologizes for disturbing them so late and prepares to leave. The dwarf boasts to Lewis that he chased Jacob away, while Lewis keeps mulling over the name. Lewis suddenly recognizes Truegun and reacts in shock. He orders the dwarf to bring Jacob back immediately, alarming the dwarf. Lewis hurries the dwarf, and the dwarf reluctantly runs off to comply. Lewis resolves that if Jacob is the Truegun he suspects, he must secure him now. Lewis recalls a future enemy of his father, the druid Ravina, whose last name is Truegun. Concluding Jacob may be Ravina's ancestor, Lewis decides he cannot let Jacob slip away, even as the dwarf invites Jacob to stay after all. Lewis approaches Jacob, and Jacob asks why Lewis is staring as if something is on his face. Lewis flatters Jacob's apparent skill for traveling alone in such a remote place. Jacob laughs that he is alone, but hints he is not truly alone. Lewis and the children are confused by Jacob's cryptic remark. Jacob teases Lewis, asking if he is curious. A strange musical, mind-tinged force ripples outward, signaling something being summoned. Lewis detects faint but definite mind attribute mana and realizes magic is at work. The dwarf hears the odd sound and looks around in confusion. The dwarf finally notices what is happening and freezes in shock. A massive six-winged blood bird appears, and the dwarf recognizes it with horror. The creature's talons slam into the snow, confirming its physical presence and size. The enormous bird looms over the group, dwarfing the adults and children alike. It screeches loudly, asserting dominance and stirring panic. The dwarf recoils, shaken by the sudden threat. A hand lands on the dwarf's shoulder, stopping his reflex to attack. Jacob calmly tells the dwarf it is alright, disarming the moment. Jacob explains the bird is his controlled summon named Minky, stunning Lewis at the name. The dwarf, still wary, asks how Jacob could tame such a fearsome beast that could rival wyverns when grown. Jacob says he has raised Minky since it was a hatchling and insists it is safe because it obeys him well. The dwarf realizes Jacob is a druid, and Jacob admits it while downplaying his experience. Lewis privately weighs the implication of a druid bearing the Truegun surname. He wonders if Jacob truly could be Ravina's ancestor. Lewis abruptly asks Jacob whether he is married, catching Jacob off guard. Lewis presses further, asking if Jacob has siblings or relatives with the Truegun name. Jacob says he is an only child and that only he and his father carry the Truegun surname. Lewis internally confirms Jacob is the right target, calling him his father's enemy in the making. Jacob asks why Lewis is suddenly so interested, and Lewis plays it off as simple curiosity. Lewis considers a darker alternative to killing Jacob by ensuring Jacob never has descendants. Jacob shivers as if sensing danger, suddenly feeling cold for no clear reason. The dwarf invites Jacob to warm himself by the fire, and Jacob gratefully accepts. Jacob notices something and looks up, puzzled. The children rush toward Minky in awe, marveling at the huge bird, and Jacob is startled. Jacob urgently warns them not to get too close because the summon could be dangerous to others. Ignoring the warning, the kids gleefully cling to Minky's feathers, calling it fluffy and treating it like a blanket. Jacob can only stare, unsure how to react to their fearless affection. Lewis scolds the children for touching someone else's pet without permission, and they sulk. Minky reacts in surprise as Lewis steps close, sensing something different about him. A menacing aura swells behind Lewis, implying pressure or intimidation that even the summoned can feel. Minky shrieks and flaps violently, startled into a defensive outburst. Jacob shouts a warning as the sudden movement threatens to cause chaos near the wagon. Minky tumbles awkwardly, thrown off balance by the commotion. Lewis casually pets the fallen bird and praises it like a good boy, leaving Jacob speechless. Jacob repeats Minky's name in disbelief, realizing the summon is acting cute in a way he has never seen. The children happily sprawl on Minky's soft body and declare they want to sleep with it tonight. Watching the kids treat the terrifying summon as a toy, Jacob and the dwarf are left bewildered. Jacob awkwardly claims the children are his nephews to explain their presence. Night passes into dawn over the snowy mountains. The dwarf begins preparing the wagon for departure. Jacob thanks the dwarf for the night's hospitality and for offering to travel together, unsure how to repay them. Lewis silently insists Jacob must join them, and the dwarf agrees since they are headed the same way. Lewis asks about Minky, and Jacob says not to worry because the summon will follow him on its own. Lewis calls for his uncle to depart, and the dwarf eagerly gets them moving. Minky screeches as it takes off, keeping pace from above. The wagon sets out, the dwarf urging the horse onward. They travel through the snowy forest, the wagon rolling steadily west. Inside the wagon, Lewis, Jacob, and the children ride together in tense, watchful silence. Lewis asks Jacob where he is going, and Jacob answers he is headed to Cash Tower Mountain in the west. Lewis reacts sharply to the destination, instantly more alert. The dwarf demands to know why Jacob would go to such a mountain. Jacob smirks and begins to explain his motivation. He declares that something on that mountain can fulfill his dream. Lewis repeats the idea of a dream being fulfilled at Cash Tower and grows suspicious of Jacob's ambitions. Jacob says if Lewis wants to know his dream, he will tell him. Jacob proudly reveals his dream is to tame a dragon. The revelation stuns the wagon, and Lewis bristles with irritation. Jacob gushes that dragons are legendary and the ultimate goal of every druid. He insists that taming a dragon would make him fearless and fills him with awe at dragon magic, while Lewis seethes behind him. The dwarf nervously warns Jacob that dreaming of taming a dragon is impossible and could get him killed. Jacob cheerfully answers that is why it is called a dream and tells them to wait and see. Jacob vows he will tame a dragon with his own hands, while Lewis thinks he could kill Jacob right now. Lewis reasons he does not know what is on Cash Tower, but he is sure it is not a dragon. He concludes that if it were a dragon, Jacob would never survive trying to tame it, and Ravina's line would not exist. Lewis narrows it down further, deciding the creature on Cash Tower is probably something else. Lewis identifies it as the Thunder Tiger. He recalls that if Jacob tames a Thunder Tiger there, it will evolve through generations into the blazing tiger Ravina commands. Determined to prevent that future, Lewis resolves to take the lead and stop it. Lewis loudly praises Jacob's dream as amazing, masking his true intent, and Jacob happily accepts the compliment. Lewis wishes Jacob's dream comes true, while the dwarf awkwardly promises a future ride and stays uneasy. The dwarf privately pities Jacob, convinced the dream will end badly. As the wagon continues, Lewis internally offers condolences in advance for Jacob's likely fate. The mountains loom closer as birds circle in the cold sky. Jacob stretches and steels himself, brimming with anticipation. They arrive at Cash Tower Mountain, and Jacob exclaims it is a perfect morning to meet a dragon. Someone agrees, and Jacob turns, confused by the response. Lewis stretches and remarks that the morning is so lovely even dragons would wake refreshed. Jacob greets Lewis warmly and asks if he slept well, and Lewis immediately asks if Jacob has seen the twins. Jacob says he has not seen them and thought they were sleeping in the carriage. Lewis asks the dwarf too, but the dwarf has not seen the twins either. The dwarf admits he has not seen them and looks baffled. Lewis worries about what trouble the twins could be causing at dawn. A small winged maid rushes in, announcing she found the twins, and Lewis demands to know where. The maid nervously laughs, struggling to explain what she discovered. A sudden loud noise draws Lewis's attention, making him snap toward it. The twins proudly drag in an enormous striped beast, insisting they found a cat or puppy, while it roars in distress. Lewis yells that it is neither a cat nor a puppy. Jacob stares in horror, realizing what the creature is. He identifies it as a thunder tiger, stunned to see it here and alive. The tiger flops and thrashes near the wagon as Lewis jumps back to avoid it. The twins beg to keep the cute animal and promise to care for it, while Lewis struggles to stay composed. Lewis demands to know where they found it before anything else. They cheerfully say they found it on the mountain and it came to play, so they played with it. Lewis admits he was looking for the thunder tiger but never expected it to fall into their hands like this. Jacob kneels by the unconscious cub, marveling that it is a living thunder tiger cub. The twins block Jacob from touching it, insisting it is theirs and revealing they already named it Nabi. Lewis deadpans at the absurdity that the twins have already given the thunder tiger cub a name. A white-haired boy notices something off in the snowy forest and turns to investigate. He finds a thunder tiger cub collapsed in the snow beside the traveler's path. The cub's eyes snap open, signaling it was only pretending to be unconscious. The boy studies the cub warily, sensing its sudden shift in intent. He tests it by speaking gently, pointing out the signs that it is awake. As he presses the issue, the cub's breathing grows hostile and tense. The cub springs up with a feral roar, startling everyone as it rises to attack. The boy braces himself, irritated that the cub is acting like a thug. He snaps back and strikes, demanding to know if the cub is really challenging him. The cub is instantly subdued and ends up flailing helplessly on the ground, defeated. A blonde adventurer gawks in disbelief that the boy dropped a thunder tiger with one punch. A burly red-bearded man laughs it off, claiming his nephews are simply fearless. Two children rush in, worried about the cub, and one offers to heal Nabi. The blond man mutters that the cub looks more scared of the kids than of anything else. The white-haired boy finds it strange that a lone cub is here without its mother. A sudden ominous presence makes him stiffen as something powerful approaches. He senses overwhelming energy and realizes it may be the Thunder Tiger's mother nearby. The adults whip around in alarm, reacting to the same looming threat. A distant, unfamiliar sound echoes over the mountains, raising dread. A massive claw smashes through wood, announcing a monster's arrival. A drake reveals itself, towering over the trees and asserting dominance. The blond man panics as he recognizes the creature and struggles to speak. He blurts out that it is a drake, but the white-haired boy clamps his mouth shut to keep quiet. The boy warns that moving now will draw attention, and they must hide their presence. He casts spatial concealment invisibility, cloaking the whole group at once. Maintaining the barrier, he focuses hard while the concealment settles over them. The snowy clearing appears empty, as if no one is there at all. The blond man is stunned that such a wide area concealment was cast instantly. He cannot believe a child could perform magic of that scale and speed. Still hidden, the blond man watches in shock, struggling to process what he's seeing. The drake prowls near the concealed group, sniffing and searching for prey. It hesitates, uncertain, as if it senses something but cannot confirm it. The blond man spirals, realizing they've encountered both a rare thunder tiger and a long unseen drake. He wonders if this is the rumored dragon of Cash Tower Mountain made real. He suspects the drake has been the true danger all along, not the cub. Then he forces himself to accept the grim truth that there are no helpful legends here, only a real monster. Sweating under the concealment, he steels himself while watching the drake's movements. He fixates on how the boy detected the drake first and immediately used high-level spells. The blond man wonders what kind of child could possess such extraordinary ability. He decides it goes beyond mere genius and hints at something deeper and unsettling. Suspicion grows in him as he tries to place what the boy might truly be. The group suddenly tenses as the drake's behavior shifts, threatening to expose them. The drake roars and surges, its aggression spiking as if it has found a clue. The boy curses the situation, furious that a drake is here at all. He asks Finn if there is any way to deal with the drake, desperate for options. A tiny fairy explains that drakes are cultivated by the demon-dragon rivalry using blood. She adds that drakes carry dragon blood and are immune to dragon fear. She warns that defeating one would normally require several top-tier fighters, meaning they are outmatched. The boy reasons that fighting now would be suicide and wonders why it came down from the mountains. He suspects the drake may be hunting the thunder tiger cub they encountered. The drake turns away, seeming to abandon the search and retreat for the moment. It lumbers off through the snow, leaving tracks as it withdraws into the forest. The boy notes with relief that it appears to be giving up and going back. A sudden flash in the clouds signals danger returning in a new form. The boy senses something wrong and snaps his attention upward. Lightning begins to crackle violently, building into a strike. The drake is engulfed in electric energy, roaring as lightning courses around it. A bolt slams down near the concealed area, threatening to expose or shatter the spell. The boy strains to hold on as the shockwave and energy batter his concealment. The lightning detonates in a blinding burst, overwhelming the area. The boy's bracelet gem flares, reacting to the surge of power. He exhales shakily, thinking they barely endured the blast. But the drake suddenly looms close again, meaning the concealment has failed. The boy grimly realizes the spell broke and that they are in immediate trouble. The red-bearded man orders everyone to run as the drake charges after them. The children scream that it is chasing them, and the boy barks for them to focus and sprint. The adults push the pace, shouting for the kids to run faster before the drake catches them. Finn struggles to keep up, shocked at how fast the children are moving. He concludes the kids are anything but ordinary as they flee through the snow. Finn hears a warning and whips around, sensing the drake closing in. The drake lunges from behind, jaws wide, nearly swallowing Finn as he runs. Finn panics, realizing he is about to be caught and killed. The drake snaps at the air, confused as something intercepts its attack. A huge bird dives in with a piercing cry, attacking the drake mid-lunge. The bird slams into the drake's head, forcing it to recoil and roar. The white-haired boy sees the opening and decides the distraction buys them time. The fairy advises zigzagging and heading into dense trees to exploit the drake's stiff joints. The boy relays the plan, ordering everyone to run in a zigzag toward the mountain. The group follows the new route, weaving through the forest toward higher ground. The drake swipes and snaps at the bird, furious at the interference. Enraged, the drake's eyes burn as it prepares to retaliate brutally. The drake unleashes a violent shockwave, blasting the bird out of the air. The bird shrieks as it is struck hard and sent spiraling away. Finn watches the bird fall and realizes their only help is being destroyed. He screams in horror, unable to accept what is happening. The red-bearded man calls after Finn, trying to keep him moving and alive. The white-haired boy is baffled that Finn would run toward a drake when even the powerful bird failed. He insists their best chance is to reach the mountain, but hesitates as the situation worsens. He pauses, weighing a risky decision as the danger closes in. Frustration boils over and he forces himself back into motion. Finn, still running, vows bitterly to blame the boy for dragging them into this if they survive. The two uniformed children call out to their master Lewis and refuse to abandon him. They sprint after the adults, while the thunder tiger cub lingers behind, watching. The cub calls weakly, torn between fear and attachment as the group flees. It suddenly bolts after them, choosing to follow despite the danger. Finn notices and yells at Minky to get up and keep moving. The injured bird struggles on the ground, barely conscious and trembling. The drake mauls the bird savagely, blood spraying as it crushes its prey. Finn snaps into rage and hurls an insult while gathering a swirling purple spell. He fires the magic into the drake, striking it while it is distracted with the bird. The blast detonates against the drake's body, forcing it to flinch. Smoke and scorch marks spread as the drake absorbs the hit and steadies itself. Its eye narrows, locking onto Finn with renewed murderous focus. The drake whips its massive tail in a sweeping counterattack. Finn recoils as the tail swing threatens to smash him. The white-haired boy grabs Finn's cloak and yanks him out of the strike zone. He shouts at Finn to stop being reckless and move, saving him by force. The drake's tail slams through where they were, missing by a narrow margin. The boy conjures a spatial crystal, preparing a new tactic under pressure. A jagged purple crystal forms, ready to be used as a weapon or trap. He spins up rotation, generating a violent vortex of purple energy. He adds fire, compressing power into the rotating core for a devastating strike. The combined spell slams into the drake's torso, making it roar in pain. Finn rushes to the fallen bird again, desperately trying to wake Minky. The drake bites down and chews through the purple construct, shredding the spell with brute force. The boy is stunned that the drake can physically destroy magic by biting it apart. Realizing brute spells are failing, he pivots to a different approach. He casts a mental spell to force the drake to fall over, attempting to topple it. The drake staggers under the mental interference but fights through it with raw instinct. The boy declares he has landed the effect and commands the drake to collapse. The drake roars in confusion and refuses to go down, resisting the command. The boy panics as he realizes even mental magic is not working. The fairy explains the drake lacks intelligence, so mental spells cannot take hold. The boy curses himself for underestimating how mindless it is. The drake charges straight at him, mouth gaping to devour him. Lewis and Khan and Connie rush back into the fight, refusing to let the boy face it alone. The twins unleash lightning charge strikes while Lewis slashes in support, staggering the drake. Khan winces as the impact hurts his hands, shocked by the drake's toughness. Connie complains her hands ache too, struggling to keep gripping her weapons. The drake thrashes under the lightning, roaring as electricity courses through it. The boy realizes the twins' lightning is actually effective against the drake. He orders Khan and Connie to keep attacking without stopping. He explains the drake is vulnerable to lightning and tells them to increase output and continue. The twins agree and brace themselves to pour in more power. They hammer the drake with intensified lightning strikes, forcing it to howl and recoil. The boy concludes its magic resistance does not protect its internal organs from lightning damage. He admits they underestimated themselves and reveals their true nature as young dragons. With confidence rising, he proposes finishing the drake by roasting it with lightning. Finn and the red-bearded man watch in stunned awe as the children turn the tide. Finn, shaken, wonders who these children really are after seeing them fight a drake. The red-bearded man awkwardly repeats that his nephews are simply strong, trying to downplay it. Finn presses whether they are truly nephews, but the man warns him not to dig deeper if he values his safety. The boy launches another volley of purple spatial crystals to pin and pressure the drake. Lightning and crystal impacts slam into the drake from multiple angles, keeping it staggered. The drake drops low, growling weakly as its strength begins to fail. The boy declares they have it, and urges everyone to push through to the finish. The exhausted twins admit they are running out of stamina and their arms are giving out. The boy steadies them, insisting they only need one more decisive burst. All three snap their attention to a sudden new threat, realizing something else has arrived. A larger, more menacing drake crashes into the clearing with a thunderous roar, escalating the danger again. Lewis fumes at the revelation that there is yet another drake involved in their crisis. Nearby, the wounded green drake lies in the snow, groaning weakly as it struggles to move. The frightened girl asks Lewis what they should do next as the danger escalates. Lewis steels himself, accepting that the situation leaves them no easy options. The blonde man admits he must reveal his true form to evacuate Pablo and Jacob, despite not wanting to expose himself. Lewis urgently orders the twins to act immediately as the threat closes in. All three children jolt in alarm as something powerful approaches. Two adult thunder tigers burst onto the scene, crackling with electricity as they charge. The drake snaps its head up, sensing the new predators and snarling. The thunder tigers pounce onto the drake, mauling it from above and below in a coordinated assault. One tiger cries out sharply as the clash turns brutal. The blonde man is stunned that two adult thunder tigers have appeared at once. Lewis realizes the adults came because their cub was endangered, confirming the tiger's protective instincts. The twins, thrilled and oblivious to the gravity, excitedly cheer at the sight of the huge cats. The drake tries to rise again, growling through pain and refusing to go down quietly. Lewis rushes forward and demands to know where the drake thinks it's going as he moves to stop it. Glowing chains lash out and bind the drake tightly, forcing it to roar in frustration. Lewis orders everyone to keep the restrained drake from escaping as they close in. With grim resolve, Lewis declares they will finish this threat for good. Lewis calls for Pablo to join in, rallying the group to act together. The red-bearded warrior charges in at full speed, answering his master's call without hesitation. The team's combined attack slam into the drake, while the Thunder Tigers continue tearing at it. The blonde man is thrown off by hearing the warrior call Lewis master, contradicting what he was told about being an uncle. A sudden, ominous roar interrupts the confusion and spikes everyone's tension. One Thunder Tiger roars and launches itself back into the fight with renewed ferocity. The tiger lands hard on the drake's head, forcing a pained cry as the drake reels. The drake retaliates, clamping down and crushing the tiger in its jaws as the tiger screams. The bitten tiger is flung upward, helplessly tossed into the air by the drake's violent motion. It crashes down hard, the impact leaving it stunned and hurt. The injured tiger crouches low, blood on the snow, still growling despite its wounds. The drake roars again, trying to dominate the battlefield even while surrounded. The tiger coughs blood, showing the drake's counterattack has done serious damage. The drake swings its massive body and tail, roaring as it tries to shake off attackers. The wounded tiger forces itself forward, charging back and through pain and blood loss. The other Thunder Tiger roars and surges to support its mate. Both tigers slam into the drake's side, but the drake's bulk and armor-like hide resist the blow. One tiger is smashed aside into a tree, the collision sending debris flying. Electricity erupts as the tiger takes another brutal hit, blood spraying from its mouth. The remaining tiger freezes in shock as its partner collapses motionless in the snow. Rage and grief ignite in the surviving tiger as lightning gathers around it. The enraged tiger leaps onto the drake, electricity arcing as it claws and bites at close range. The drake thrashes and roars, but the tiger's lightning-charged assault pins it down. Locked together, drake and tiger tumble in a violent struggle as the tiger refuses to let go. The tiger snarls through the sparks, pressing the attack with desperate intensity. With a final surge of crackling power, the tiger drives the drake backward, forcing it to stagger away. The tiger pauses, panting and wide-eyed, as if realizing the cost of what just happened. It cries out again, alarmed by what it senses or sees ahead. The drake's head drops heavily, its strength failing as it lies dying in the snow. Exhausted, the children slump and gasp, believing the battle is finally over. The red-bearded warrior warns Lewis that the Thunder Tiger is approaching them. The surviving Thunder Tiger pads forward, battered but purposeful. It roars loudly, asserting itself as it closes the distance. The adult tiger nuzzles and comforts its cub, both trembling from fear and grief. Lewis watches as the adult tiger turns its gaze toward him, assessing him and the cub's situation. The adult tiger's expression hardens, its injuries visible as it weighs whether to attack or retreat. Lewis worries the tiger may have recognized who he truly is and what that could mean. The adult tiger begins to turn away, but the cub protests, confused and unwilling to leave. The cub cries out tearfully, desperate not to be abandoned after losing its parents. Lewis cautiously reaches out and touches the cub, testing whether it will accept him. Lewis looks up, composed, as if deciding on a difficult but necessary course. The adult tiger walks off into the snowy forest, leaving the cub behind. In a softened moment, the adult tiger seems to accept its choice, closing its eyes as it departs. The adult tiger bounds away in a final leap, disappearing toward the mountains. The cub panics and cries after the departing parent, overwhelmed by loss. The fairy maid reflects that the Thunder Tiger parents were ready to die to protect their child, proving their kingly nature. A blinding golden light suddenly blooms in the sky, drawing everyone's attention. The fairy maid stares upward, stunned, trying to understand the source of the light. She is abruptly scooped up, startled, as someone moves her out of the way. Lewis tells the fairy maid to watch the kids while he goes somewhere else, and she anxiously asks where. Lewis states plainly that he is heading to the mountain. The fairy maid protests that it could be dangerous, fearing for him. Lewis reassures her he will return soon, and she reluctantly agrees while urging caution. Lewis pauses, sensing something and reconsidering his next move. The Thunder Tiger cub crouches and whimpers, signaling it wants to stay close to Lewis. Lewis realizes the cub is offering him a ride and asks if it wants him to climb on. Lewis accepts the offer and decides they will go together. Lewis mounts the cub, and the Thunder Tiger sprints through the snow at high speed. Riding the cub, Lewis marvels at its speed and wonders how the twins ever managed to catch it. The cub cries out as they race, its emotions still raw even while it runs. A grim tableau shows the drake and the adult tigers lying bloodied in the snow, the battle's cost made clear. Lewis is shaken, realizing the Thunder Tigers truly fought the drake to the death. The cub continues crying, still frightened and grieving. Lewis watches the cub cling to its fallen parent, the loss now personal and immediate. Lewis recognizes the cub has lost its parents like he once did in a past life, deepening his resolve. He gently pats the cub's head, offering comfort instead of commands. Lewis stands beside the cub and keeps soothing it with steady, reassuring strokes. 2 piles of stones appear in the snow, suggesting a simple memorial or marker nearby. The cub sits facing the stones and whimpers, as if mourning at a grave. Lewis concludes this moment is the origin of the True Gun family's bond with the Thunder Tiger. He reflects that with drakes and Thunder Tigers sharing the same mountain, conflict was inevitable. Lewis acknowledges that even without his interference, the two species were destined to destroy each other. He reasons that in the original course of events, Jacob would have taken in the surviving cub. But since Lewis is here now, he decides he cannot allow that predetermined outcome to stand. Lewis casts a controlling spell and commands the cub to focus on him, drawing its attention. The cub looks around in confusion, sensing something unfamiliar in Lewis's presence. A towering shadowy draconic aura flares behind Lewis, revealing the terrifying power he is suppressing. The cub trembles and whimpers, intimidated by the overwhelming aura. Lewis calms the cub, promising safety and acceptance if it trusts him. He extends an open hand, offering a pact rather than force. Lewis asks the cub to follow him, inviting it into his protection. The cub places its paw into Lewis's hand, sealing its willingness to trust. Lewis smiles warmly and praises the cub, pleased the bond has formed. Lewis turns as someone calls for him, snapping back to the other's presence. The group rushes over, demanding to know why Lewis is standing over there. The blonde man recognizes the spell Lewis used as Lobi, a technique only high-level druids can cast. He notes that even a young thunder tiger is a supreme beast, and that it fully responded to Lewis's Lobi spell. The blonde man excitedly declares he understands now and begins to accuse Lewis of being something special. Lewis worries the blonde man may have figured out his true identity. The blonde man blurts out his conclusion that Lewis must be a high elf. Lewis reacts with blank confusion, caught off guard by the wrong guess. The blonde man gushes with reverence, calling Lewis the forest's guardian and asking if he hides his ears with magic, while Lewis tries to deny a misunderstanding. Lewis suddenly realizes this mistaken identity could actually benefit him. The blonde man's continued misunderstanding would conveniently keep Lewis's real identity hidden. Lewis clears his throat, preparing to lean into the false persona. Lewis boldly claims he is the guardian of the forest and introduces himself as a high elf. The red-bearded warrior looks skeptical, wondering if this is some kind of scam. The blonde man apologizes profusely for his earlier rudeness, and Lewis graciously accepts it. The twins whisper that elves talk strangely, admitting they have no idea since Lewis likely never met one either. The blonde man points at the twins and asks if they are also connected to Lewis's supposed elf status. Lewis lies smoothly that the twins are his elf bodyguards. The red-bearded warrior and the twins bristle at the nonsense, but resign themselves because Lewis has pulled stunts like this before. Lewis addresses the blonde man as a mere human and says he has a request. Lewis asks the blonde man to take care of the thunder tiger cub. The blonde man panics, shocked that he's being asked to raise a thunder tiger. The twins explode in protest, declaring the cub named Nabi belongs to them and not to Lewis's schemes. Lewis glares, unimpressed by their possessiveness and ready to overrule them. The red-bearded warrior narrows his eyes, watching Lewis's manipulation with wary attention. The twins fall silent in confusion as the adult's decision-making steamrolls them. As the red-bearded warrior carries the twins away, they shout that they hate Lewis for taking Nabi from them. The blonde man asks again if he really must take care of Nabi, still uncertain. He hesitates, pointing out that Nabi has already formed a contract with Lewis the High Elf. Lewis claims he took the cub in out of pity but insists his journey will be perilous. Lewis adds that he worries the young cub cannot endure the dangers ahead. The blonde man grows anxious, thinking that if even a high elf calls it perilous, it must be truly deadly. Lewis flatters the blonde man as capable and asks him to care for Nabi until Lewis returns to retrieve it. The blonde man eagerly accepts, promising to raise Nabi as if it were his own child. Lewis thanks him, says he will trust him, and instructs Nabi to follow Jacob from now on. Nabi looks uncertain, processing the sudden change in who it must obey. Lewis gently tells Nabi he cannot take it along now, but promises to come back if it listens to Jacob. Nabi responds with a small, obedient cry, accepting the instruction. Nabi walks up to Jacob, testing him and preparing to follow as ordered. Jacob introduces himself to Nabi by name, and promises to take good care of it, and Nabi answers with a cat-like chirp. Lewis privately notes this outcome is ideal because the Thunder Tiger is now contract-bound to him, and won't become an enemy later. Lewis adds one more instruction: Nabi must be fed light attribute stones, leaving Jacob puzzled. Lewis assures Jacob the cub will grow huge someday, and that he won't regret agreeing. The sun sets over the snowy mountains, signaling the end of the immediate crisis. Jacob and Nabi head off together through the forest, beginning their new caretaker bond. Lewis reflects that despite the trouble, he gained a valuable future asset by bringing the Thunder Tiger to his side. Lewis announces they will head west again as the twins sulk and the red-bearded warrior looks exhausted by the drama. One twin loudly repeats that he hates Lewis, still furious about losing Nabi. A white-haired girl furiously accuses Lewis of sending Nabi away on his own and declares they are done playing with him. Lewis awkwardly tries to placate the anger by offering elixirs, clearly trying to buy peace. The two kids are momentarily stunned by the sight of the valuable elixirs, their outrage wavering. As their wagon continues through the snowy road, the kids immediately start bargaining for more elixirs, escalating their demands. The story shifts to the bustling port city where travelers and locals crowd the streets. The children cheer at the excitement of arrival, while their burly guardian looks unimpressed. They reach Port City Lufthagen at last, rolling through the gate toward the docks and markets. One boy excitedly tells Lewis the city is packed with people, overwhelmed by the crowd. The girl points out beast folk in amazement, thrilled by seeing them for the first time. A tiny fairy maid explains that Lufthagen is far more diverse than the villages they passed, full of every kind of person. Narration explains Lufthagen is a year-round trade hub between the autumn and winter continents. Lewis, exhausted, reflects that it took them half a year to travel from Kashmir Mountain to Lufthagen. He adds grimly that they are only halfway to their true destination and just wants to get home quickly. The two kids keep tugging at Lewis to look around at interesting sights while he stays silent and drained. Lewis finally snaps at them to stop clinging to him, while the kids laugh at how easily he gets mad. When told they have arrived, Lewis pauses in surprise as the kids keep hanging off him. Lewis hops down from the wagon, planting his feet as if bracing himself for the next ordeal. He scans the area with a guarded, calculating look, trying to orient himself. Lewis stops at an inn called the Siren's Shelter, staring up at the sign as if confirming the place. The burly man doubts this shabby inn is the famous spot, but Lewis insists they enter since it has been 10 years. The inn's door opens, letting them inside. A cheerful innkeeper welcomes them warmly to the Siren's Shelter. She asks whether they are staying or eating, and the burly man hesitates, saying they will stay for now. The innkeeper suddenly recognizes something and tells them to wait. She blurts out that the burly man might be Uncle Pablo, while he asks if he knows her. She introduces herself as Moana and asks if he has forgotten her. Pablo jolts in shock, realizing she is the little Moana he once knew. Moana indignantly insists she is not tiny anymore and announces she is now 24. Moana calls for Lucia to come out and see who has arrived. Lucia emerges from behind a curtain, confused about the commotion and the visitor. Lucia recognizes Pablo and he greets her boisterously, teasing that she has grown pretty enough to marry. Moana demands the same praise, and Lewis notes to himself that Pablo must have been a regular here. Pablo asks after Hammond and Julia, expecting them to be around or at the market. Moana and Lucia reveal their parents died 3 years ago after being struck by a runaway carriage. Pablo reels, repeating their names in disbelief. He apologizes, crushed he arrived too late, but Moana reassures him they inherited the inn and are managing fine. Pablo pulls the sisters close, acknowledging they must have suffered greatly. Noticing the children with Pablo, Lucia asks if they are his kids, startling everyone. Pablo shamelessly suggests they could be his children, and the sisters scold him for lacking conscience. Cornered, Pablo hurriedly claims the kids are his nephews. The sisters find it suspicious that such beautiful children would come from Pablo's bloodline, and he insists they are very distant relatives. Moana studies the two kids closely, intrigued by them. The two children pose innocently, looking angelic enough to disarm suspicion. Moana is instantly smitten, overwhelmed by how cute they are. The kids hug and cling to Moana, making her squeal that she cannot handle their cuteness. Lewis mutters that she should try raising them herself, implying she would change her mind fast. Lucia introduces herself to Lewis and gently asks if he is hungry. Lewis admits he is a little hungry, and Lucia smiles kindly at his honesty. Moana excitedly declares she will cook something delicious and rushes Lucia to prepare the meat they bought. Pablo watches them go, exhaling as if relieved yet uneasy. Pablo complains that keeping up the cute act is exhausting, while Lewis remains unimpressed beside him. They are shown to a warm room with a fireplace, finally getting a place to rest. Lewis flops onto the bed, groaning that it has been ages since he ate so much. Pablo asks Lewis what his relationship is with the sisters, noting how close they seemed. Lewis learns the sisters' parents were Pablo's comrades in arms, meaning fellow mercenaries, and Pablo fondly recalls them. Pablo explains they quit mercenary work to open this inn and raise Moana, which is why he became a regular. Lewis abruptly orders Pablo to get out and handle their next steps, leaving Pablo confused by the sudden command. Lewis lays out the plan. Pablo must find a ship to the autumn continent and secure elixirs as well. Pablo tries to stall, saying they just arrived and asking if it must be done immediately. Lewis's pressure makes Pablo panic and promise he will leave right away to do it. Lewis sends the ferry maid Finn to accompany Pablo, and Finn salutes obediently. Left behind, Lewis hears movement at the door and turns toward it. He finds the two kids already asleep together, having collapsed without warning. Lewis notes they are asleep and admits they look like angels when they are quiet. He yawns and decides he should sleep too. Moana peeks in with snacks for the kids, expecting them to be awake. Lucia asks Moana why she is not going inside, sensing her hesitation. They discover all three children are asleep, and Lucia is startled by the sight. Moana and Lucia gush softly over how lovely the children look even while sleeping. They quietly wish the kids good sleep and sweet dreams before closing the door. The room settles into silence with the children sleeping peacefully through the night. Downstairs, the inn continues its lively atmosphere with patrons drinking and chatting. In the morning, Lewis trudges downstairs yawning, still half asleep. Lucia greets Lewis warmly and asks if he slept well, and he answers lazily that he did. Lucia tells Lewis breakfast will be ready soon and points him to sit, while the other kids eagerly call him to eat. Pablo reports he secured tickets for a ship to the autumn continent, departing in 2 weeks. Lewis praises the job and immediately asks about the elixir. Pablo admits elixirs are not easy to obtain and doubts he can find them quickly. Lewis accepts that answer, noting only dragons stockpile such things and ordinary humans rarely even see one. He adds that human food may taste good but does nothing to help hatchlings like them. Lewis calculates the sea route will take 2 months and insists they must stock up before setting sail. Pablo tries to reassure Lewis that they will definitely be able to get what they need in Lufthagen. He emphasizes Lufthagen is where supplies from the winter continent gather, implying the market is their best chance. Louis agrees to search together tomorrow, satisfied with the plan. A massive breakfast platter lands on the table, startling Pablo and Louis with its sheer size. Moana and Lucia announce breakfast is served and encourage everyone to relax and enjoy. Pablo stares at the feast, wondering who could eat so much in the morning. Moana explains it is not all for him and urges him to try it anyway. Pablo grumbles that he never said he would not eat, already giving in. After one bite, Pablo freezes, shocked by the familiar taste. He declares the food tastes exactly like their mother's cooking, and Moana proudly says of course it does since she is her daughter. Moana adds that Lucia helped too, while Lucia modestly downplays her role. Pablo suddenly remembers Lucia's singing talent, and the sisters tense at the topic. He insists no one in Lufthagen could beat Lucia's singing, pressing the point. He recalls that whenever Lucia sang the inn was packed, which is why it was named Siren's Shelter. Louis notices the mood shift as Pablo starts to mention how huge the crowds used to be. Moana and Lucia fall into a heavy silence, their faces shadowed with discomfort. Sensing the tension, Louis abruptly punches Pablo to shut him up. Pablo collapses into embarrassed confusion, asking why he was hit while Louis glares. Moana and Lucia remain stiff and silent, confirming the subject is painful. Moana finally admits Lucia does not sing anymore because she cannot sing. Pablo demands to know why, unable to accept such a waste of talent. Moana struggles to explain, clearly reluctant to reveal the reason. A sudden commotion draws everyone's attention toward the entrance. A group of intimidating men in dark clothes stride into the inn with menacing confidence. Louis asks who these rough-looking men are, wary of trouble. Someone explains they are a recurring nuisance and the inn's so-called attraction, leaving Louis confused. The thugs loom over Moana and Lucia, silently pressuring them with hostile stares. Pablo confronts them, demanding to know if they even understand where they are. The men order the sisters to step aside, asserting dominance in the inn. Footsteps approach with deliberate authority, signaling someone important entering. A blond boy in a luxurious fur-trimmed cloak steps forward, flanked by the thugs. The newcomer's presence is revealed gradually, building tension as he turns into view. He greets Moana politely as Lady Moana, presenting himself with noble composure. He leans in with practiced charm, clearly accustomed to being obeyed. Lucia is suddenly holding a large bouquet of red roses, caught off guard by the gesture. The blond boy kneels and offers the bouquet to Lucia, complimenting her beauty and calling her his lady. Louis reacts with disgust, calling the display unbearably cheesy. Lucia hesitates, trying to respond carefully while clutching the flowers. The boy hushes Lucia by touching her lips, controlling the conversation with intimacy. He says words are unnecessary because seeing her today has already calmed his heart. He bows and takes his leave, wishing Lucia a peaceful rest of the day. Louis sizes up the blond boy as he departs, suspicious of his intentions. The boy's expression hardens slightly, suggesting calculation beneath the charm. Louis watches in silence, weighing what he just witnessed. The blond boy smirks, pleased with himself as if the encounter went as planned. Louis snaps, accusing him of laughing at his height and bristling with irritation. Later, Louis grows sleepy and asks Lucia to hold him, and she indulges him affectionately. Pablo hears someone called Master and looks baffled by the sudden shift in hierarchy. Lucia carries Louis toward his room to put him to bed, and he happily accepts the pampering. The blond boy fumes nearby, clearly jealous as Louis smugly taunts him about it. The blond boy grits his teeth, furious that Louis got under his skin. He orders his men to go back, and they obey him as their young master. Louis sticks out his tongue in childish defiance, signaling he is not intimidated. Lucia continues carrying Louis away to bed, keeping him safe from the tension downstairs. Louis repeats his taunt about jealousy, enjoying the blond boy's frustration. The blond boy sees in silence, unable to retaliate openly. He storms off again, insisting they are leaving, while his men comply. Pablo demands to know who that boy was, unsettled by the sudden noble intrusion. Moana explains he is Carrie, the eldest son of the Bunt family, and Pablo recognizes the name Bunt. Moana confirms it is that Bunt, adding he is now a baron rather than a fighter. Pablo explodes in disbelief, repeating that Bunt actually became a baron. Narration explains Baron Bunt rose from a back-alley organization by unifying Lufthagen's underworld. It continues that his influence stabilized the port, and earned him a title from the local lord. Pablo laughs that Tyrius always bragged he would become a noble, and marvels that he truly did. Pablo notes Carrie seemed genuinely interested in Lucia and suggests encouraging the match. Moana shuts the idea down immediately, exhausted and irritated by the suggestion. Pablo argues Carrie is handsome and noble now, asking why it is a problem. When Moana reveals Carrie is only 14 while Lucia is 22, Pablo is horrified. Pablo blurts that the boy seems manly enough to marry immediately, while Moana glares in disgust at his shamelessness. Louis is caught trying to slip out, but his aunt storms after Pablo, who hurriedly claims he has urgent errands. Back in the room, Louis stays calm with his book while the twins lounge around, bored and restless. Pablo bursts in to report he has tracked down every shop that might sell elixirs, eager to impress Louis. Louis immediately decides they should leave at once to pursue the lead. The twins demand to come along, but Louis insists he is only going with Pablo and orders them to rest quietly. The twins throw a dramatic tantrum on the floor, wailing that they want to go too, while Louis remains unmoved. Louis is interrupted mid-departure when someone questions where he thinks he is going. The women stop Louis at the door and force warm outerwear on the children so they will not go out underdressed again. After a quick change, the mood softens as the household fussing turns into a caring send-off. Louis and the twins appear in matching winter capes, making the outing feel like a proper family excursion. The women beam, delighted that the new clothes suit the children perfectly. They explain they hurriedly prepared the outfits because the children's clothes look too thin, and the kids gratefully accept the kindness. Pablo grumbles that the real issue is not the weather but that the children are dragons anyway, making the worry feel pointless. One of the boys politely thanks the caretaker and promises to wear the clothes well, earning a gentle reassurance. With preparations finished, the group finally heads out through the door. The women and twins wave goodbye, promising to look after things at home as Louis and Pablo set off. On the street, Louis asks Pablo to confirm they will find elixirs, and Pablo confidently tells him to rely on him. Reassured, Louis urges them onward, and Pablo matches his enthusiasm. Time passes as they search through the town under a bright daytime sky. The search drags on until evening, suggesting they have been at it all day. Louis slumps in defeat, realizing not a single place in town sells elixirs. He confronts Pablo for promising results in Lufthagen, and Pablo apologizes, admitting he did not expect this failure either. Louis panics that without elixirs he might literally starve, fearing he will become a hatchling who dies of malnutrition. Pablo snaps Louis out of his spiral, demanding to know what he is doing as Louis looks up in confusion. They notice a crowd gathered ahead and wonder if a fight is breaking out. A blonde young noble recognizes the cheeky kid from earlier and questions why he is mixed up in the commotion. A smug gang leader taunts the noble, telling him to give up on Lucia already. The blonde noble seethes as the gang leader mocks him for thinking Lucia would ever notice someone like him. The gang leader preens that a real man like him would win Lucia's attention, and his men laugh along while belittling the noble. The gang escalates by drawing blades and shouting that the noble has no idea who he is insulting. The leader's attention fixes on a sword, hinting he is reading the situation as a serious challenge. He coldly frames the drawn weapon as a declaration of war against the Damon gang. One of the thugs hesitates, startled by how far their boss is taking it. Damon stands at the center with his armed men, projecting control as they prepare to act. The blonde noble and the thugs recoil, calling the other side insane for turning this into open violence. The noble threatens that his father will make them pay once he learns what happened. Damon answers with chilling indifference, implying the noble's status may not protect him. He feigns humility while demanding the noble teach him directly, twisting the threat into a cruel game. Before the clash can erupt, Pablo steps in and loudly orders everyone to stop. Pablo admits he does not know the full story but warns that swinging swords in broad daylight is going too far. The blonde noble turns to Pablo in surprise, recognizing him as someone from the Siren's shelter. Damon dismisses Pablo as a passerby and tells him to mind his business and leave. Pablo laments that after 10 years away no one seems to recognize him anymore. The thugs suddenly freeze as the name Pablo hits them, realizing who he might be. They blurt out the truth, identifying Pablo as Blood Axe Pablo, and Pablo notes with mild surprise that he is still remembered. The blonde noble asks who that is, and a thug explains Pablo is the man who once saved the Baron's life. A story is recalled from when the Baron was unifying the underworld and fell into a trap set by rival factions. In the Baron's moment of peril, Pablo charged into enemy lines with only an axe and saved him despite being stabbed repeatedly. The blonde noble is stunned to learn this legendary savior is standing right in front of him. Overwhelmed, the noble greets Pablo with deep respect and gratitude on his father's behalf, while Pablo awkwardly downplays it as youthful tales. Pablo laughs and shrugs off the praise, and Louis quietly judges him for showing off. Damon approaches, intrigued to meet the famed figure he has only heard about in rumors. Damon introduces himself as the head of a modest organization in Lufthagen, making his power sound deceptively polite. Louis senses something off and begins to scrutinize Damon more carefully. Louis feels a strange, unsettling aura from Damon that bothers him despite the man's smooth demeanor. With the tension diffused by Pablo's reputation, the armed men decide to withdraw, claiming they will leave since Pablo knows the young master. Damon's group departs with a courteous farewell that feels more like a warning than kindness. Pablo is baffled that Damon simply walked away, calling him anticlimactic. Louis, however, suspects Damon's presence signals serious trouble ahead. Watching Damon disappear, Louis becomes convinced the man will soon cause a major incident. That night, the scene shifts to the Grand Bunt family residence, where the noble household's power is on display. Inside, the Baron warmly welcomes Pablo back like an old comrade, with the blonde noble standing proudly behind him. Pablo and the Baron embrace, laughing about how more than 10 years have passed since they last met. The Baron scolds Pablo for being heartless and not keeping in touch more often. Pablo apologizes and admits life has been hard, which is why he could not stay connected. Pablo marvels at how successful the Baron has become, calling the world full of surprises. The Baron insists his current standing is thanks to Pablo saving him back then. Pablo accepts the flattery with boisterous laughter until Louis's presence forces him to refocus. Pablo finally explains he came because he is searching for an elixir, and the Baron reveals he already heard about it from Carrie. The Baron promises he has sent his men out, and will provide as much elixir as needed within a few days. Louis presses about the earlier street conflict and worries whether trouble with another organization will interfere, prompting the Baron to notice Louis. Pablo introduces Louis as his nephew and jokes that the boy is spoiled, asking for understanding. The Baron accepts it and mentions the Daemon faction has been causing problems lately. Pablo is surprised because even underworld thugs usually avoid provoking nobles, so he asks what changed. The Baron explains that ships protected by the Bunt family's trading company have been suffering frequent unexplained accidents and running aground. Rumors claim monsters attack the grounded ships, leading people to question the Bunt family's ability to protect their interests. The Baron suspects Daemon is exploiting the situation to openly rebel and challenge his authority. Pablo suggests asking the Lord for help since the Lord granted the barony in the first place. The Baron sighs that the Lord is indifferent as long as Lufhagen runs smoothly, leaving him to handle it alone. He adds that because he rose from the underground, the Lord would not care much even if Daemon replaced him, making the threat more dangerous. Refusing to dwell on gloom, the Baron insists they celebrate their reunion properly and proposes an all-night feast. Pablo agrees to party, but he hesitates when he remembers Louis is watching him closely. Louis tells Pablo not to worry about him and to enjoy the free help they are receiving, granting reluctant permission to indulge. Pablo suddenly perks up, fully committing to the night's drinking. The Baron and Pablo head off together to celebrate, leaving Louis behind with the household. The Baron orders the blonde noble, Carrie, to take good care of Louis while the adults go drink. Carrie looks displeased, already resenting the responsibility. Louis stares back with equal annoyance, unimpressed by the forced pairing. Carrie sighs at the idea of having to play with a child so much younger than him. He curtly tells Louis to follow, and Louis asks where they are going. Carrie says his father told him to entertain Louis, so they are going to his room. Louis smugly accepts and challenges Carrie to show how well a noble can entertain him, infuriating Carrie. They arrive at Carrie's lavish room, setting the stage for an awkward evening together. Carrie orders Louis to sit quietly anywhere and warns him not to touch his belongings. Louis immediately picks up a knight figurine, and Carrie panics at the thought of it being damaged. Carrie rushes over and snatches the toy away, scolding Louis not to touch it because he will break it. Louis teases Carrie for acting grown-up while still loving toys, and Carrie snaps that it is none of Louis's business. Carrie fusses over the figurines as collectibles, while Louis watches him with a knowing, unimpressed look. Louis notices a letter and a small box addressed to Lady Lucia, hinting at Carrie's secret romantic plans. Carrie realizes Louis is reading the letter's opening lines and reacts in mortified outrage. He yells at Louis not to read other people's letters, but Louis coolly guesses the box contains a necklace. Ignoring the protest, Louis opens the box as a bright glow spills out. Louis is momentarily dazzled by what he finds inside. A brilliant blue gemstone necklace is revealed, clearly rare and valuable. Carrie demands it back and tries to hide it, but Louis stays focused on the necklace itself. Louis bluntly insults Carrie's terrible letter writing yet praises the necklace as something that would suit Lucia well. Carrie is shocked that Louis approves, unsure if he heard correctly. Relieved, Carrie admits he struggled to obtain it, treating the gift as a major achievement. Louis challenges him, asking why such an expensive necklace would be hard to find, and Carrie insists this one is special. Carrie reveals the necklace's name, calling it the famous Siren's Tear. Louis repeats the name in disbelief, realizing the implications of that artifact. He goes silent, processing the sudden twist. Louis explodes in shock, demanding to know if it is truly the Siren's Tear. Carrie insists it is real, not a fake, and claims he even had it verified by an official appraiser. Louis is horrified, wondering why such a crucial item is sitting here in this room. A legend is recalled about the ruler of the sea who cherished his daughter above all else. The Sea Emperor collected his daughter's final tear and sealed it into a jewel. That jewel became known as the Siren's Tear, a famed treasure of the sea. Most importantly, the Siren's Tear is the key to the Sea Emperor's underwater labyrinth. Louis realizes the labyrinth is a vital leveling opportunity in the original story and resolves to secure the Siren's Tear before others do. Louis slips and calls Carrie Hyun, making Carrie pause in confusion at the unexpected familiarity. Louis immediately switches tactics, turning cute and pleading for Carrie to give him the necklace. Carrie stiffens, unsettled by the sudden clingy behavior, and asks if Louis is hurt somewhere. Louis doubles down on the sweet begging, and Carrie recoils, calling it creepy and demanding he back off. The argument spills into the night as Carrie's rejection echoes outside the mansion. Carrie clutches the box and refuses outright, declaring the necklace is a gift for Lady Lucia and Louis should not even dream of taking it. Louis gives up on begging for now, annoyed that he cannot simply obtain it. He pivots to interrogation, asking what Carrie will do if Lucia refuses the gift. Carrie insists she would never refuse and claims women inevitably fall for expensive gifts, repeating what an escort told him. Louis doubts that logic, saying Lucia does not seem like someone who would accept a gift just because it is costly. Carrie falters, realizing that might be true, and admits his plan may not work. Louis orders Carrie to sit down and declares he will teach him what real romance is. Carrie reluctantly sits with pen and paper while Louis prepares to lecture like an expert. Carrie outlines a basic approach of building closeness first and gradually expressing feelings, trying to sound knowledgeable. Louis agrees but warns him to avoid sudden confessions and extravagant gifts that can backfire. Louis illustrates that overbearing gestures like dramatic flower offerings can have the opposite effect, startling Carrie. Carrie freezes as the advice hits too close to home. He realizes in despair that everything he has been doing is exactly the wrong approach, while Louis smugly claims he should have asked the right person. Louis then asks why Carrie likes Lucia so much and what first triggered his feelings. Carrie begins explaining that he first met Lucia 5 years ago, slipping into a nostalgic memory. He recalls seeing her sing at the Siren Inn and feeling his bleak future suddenly brighten. Carrie remembers being captivated by her gestures, smile, and voice, falling instantly for her. Louis dryly summarizes that Carrie simply fell in love with her singing, unimpressed by the long explanation. Carrie protests that it was not just any singing, insisting Lucia's voice was heavenly. Louis asks a practical question: if she sings that well, why does she not sing anymore? Carrie's expression darkens as he reveals there was a tragic accident that ended it. He rewinds to 4 years ago, when Lucia's favorite singer was scheduled to perform. Lucia begged her parents to let her attend, and they finally agreed to take her while leaving Moana behind. Carrie hints that the tragedy occurred on the way to the venue, setting up the turning point. The memory opens on chaos as horses rear and panic erupts in the street, signaling the accident that changed everything. Lucia is jolted by a shouted warning, turning in alarm as danger rushes toward her. She hits the ground hard, dazed and bleeding, struggling to understand what just happened. Still reeling, Lucia calls out for her mother and father, hoping they will answer. Her shock turns to horror as she sees her parents' bodies sprawled in blood nearby. Realizing the truth, Lucia breaks down screaming in terror and grief. It is revealed that a carriage crash killed both of Lucia's parents in front of her. After the accident, Lucia becomes so traumatized that she can no longer sing. Louis pieces it together, realizing Lucia blames her love of singing for her parents' deaths and has locked her voice away. Sensing an opportunity, Louis thinks that if he plays this right, he can turn the situation to his advantage. He decides he can both help Lucia and obtain the coveted Siren's Tear. Louis confronts the blonde noble, calling him reckless for planning to give Siren's Tear to Lucia given her painful past. The noble is caught off guard, only now grasping the implication. Louis argues that giving Siren's Tear to someone who cannot sing could revive the nightmares she has tried to forget. The noble panics, admitting he never considered that consequence. Louis sighs at how much he has to explain, implying the noble is hopelessly unprepared. He shifts gears and announces he has a proposal. With a sly grin, Louis asks if the noble wants to hear it. The story moves to the tavern where Lucia lives and works. The tavern doors open, signaling someone's arrival. Louis returns alone, and the innkeeper worriously asks why his uncle is not with him. Louis explains his uncle went drinking with Mr. Tyrius, and the innkeeper fumes at the irresponsibility of sending a child home alone so late. Louis brushes it off and asks where Lucia is. The innkeeper cheerfully tells Louis Lucia is in her room and invites him to go up. Louis heads upstairs while the innkeeper offers to bring him food if he gets hungry. Louis steels himself, declaring it is time to begin his plan. He offers the noble a deal. If Louis can get Lucia singing again, the noble must give him the necklace. When the noble balks, Louis presses him by reminding him he wanted Lucia to sing again. The noble hesitates, torn despite agreeing with the goal. Louis needles him, asking if the necklace matters more to him than Lucia does. Louis happily locks in the bargain, insisting the necklace will be his if he succeeds. The noble grimaces, clearly unhappy at being cornered. Louis mocks the noble's grand talk, saying his devotion sounds like childish posturing. Provoked, the noble snaps and finally gives in. He agrees that if Louis succeeds, he will hand over Siren's Tear. Louis knocks on Lucia's door to start his approach. The door opens, letting warm light spill out. Lucia greets Louis with a gentle smile and asks when he got back. Louis announces his return with exaggerated enthusiasm, declaring the operation has begun. He tells Lucia he is bored and begs her to play with him. Lucia indulges him, agreeing and noting he must have been very bored. She invites him inside first, welcoming him into her space. Louis looks around, taking in the room as he steps in. He compliments Lucia's room, trying to build comfort and rapport. Lucia modestly thanks him, saying she has not decorated much but is glad he likes it. Louis notices a stringed instrument tucked away in the room. He points it out and asks what it is, prompting Lucia to explain. Lucia tells him it is an instrument called a bomb, used to play music. Louis excitedly demands to hear it and asks her to play for him. He doubles down with pleading, refusing to drop it. Lucia relents and agrees to play a little despite her hesitation. She sits and begins playing the bomb while Louis listens intently. Lucia exhales, steadying herself as she continues. The bomb's notes ring out clearly as her fingers move across the strings. The music fills the room, leaving Louis transfixed by the sound. Louis is stunned, realizing how beautiful her playing is. Lucia plays with calm confidence, and the moment feels serene and luminous. Louis reflects that Lucia's playing and the pure sound of the instrument are overwhelmingly beautiful. He understands why someone like Kara would be so taken with her. Lucia's melody softens as she brings the piece toward its end. She finishes with a weary breath, as if the performance took more out of her than she admits. Louis erupts into loud praise, applauding with unrestrained excitement. Lucia laughs awkwardly and downplays it, saying she is rusty. Louis rejects her self-criticism, insisting it was an amazing performance, and easing her worry. Energized, Louis asks Lucia to let him try playing the bomb too. Lucia is surprised that he wants to play and confirms what he is asking. Louis eagerly says he wants to learn to make beautiful sounds like hers. Lucia agrees to help and tells him to wait while she looks for something. She searches around the room, trying to remember where she put it. Lucia finds what she was looking for and brings it out. She hands Louis a smaller instrument, and he wonders what it is. Lucia explains it is a gift, a bomb she used when she was little, now the right size for him. Louis gratefully accepts, promising to take good care of it, and Lucia suggests they start practicing tomorrow since it is late. They say goodnight warmly, and Louis runs off with the instrument. Later, Louis sits on his bed with the bomb, preparing to reflect on the plan. A tiny fairy companion confirms his intent. He plans to help Lucia forget her trauma by giving her positive experiences with music, and he agrees. The fairy suggests using mental magic to alter Lucia's memories as a faster solution. Louis refuses, saying shortcuts only offer temporary relief and the wounds would resurface. He states his guiding rule: repay kindness with kindness and malice with malice. Louis insists they should return Lucia's goodwill by helping her in a way that truly lasts. The fairy sighs, realizing Louis is once again deviating from any simple original plan. Louis shuts down her complaint with a firm no. He reassures her confidently that his approach will work, and continues playing. 3 days pass, and the sound of the bomb now carries through the town. Louis's hands move skillfully over the strings, showing rapid improvement. Lucia watches him in stunned silence, unable to process how fast he is advancing. Louis asks if he is getting better, and Lucia, startled, admits he did well. As Louis experiments with technique, Lucia realizes he is a prodigy. It is explained that he mastered the grip in 1 day, memorized chords by the second, and now plays pieces even adults struggle with. Lucia wonders where such a child came from as his talent defies common sense. Louis cheerfully demands she teach him the next song, and Lucia can only agree weakly. Elsewhere, a shadow falls across a wall where a festival notice is posted. The poster announces the Full Catch Festival and calls for participants for the Night of Cain event. A hand tears the notice down, taking it. A scarred man reads it, and notes that Night of Cain is a singing event. His subordinate confirms it is a yearly festival singing contest where applicants compete for a prize. The subordinate adds it is one of the most popular events and people are already practicing hard to win. The scarred man smiles, calling the news perfect. The subordinate is confused by his reaction and asks what he means. The man crushes something in his hands as he muses that the more people gather, the better. He darkly adds that the louder the screams will be, savoring the thought. Back in town, the day is bright and calm, masking the brewing tension. A burly red-bearded man staggers through the street, complaining he feels like he is dying. He groans that he must be getting old if a few days of drinking hit him this hard. He hears music and pauses, recognizing the sound. He realizes someone is playing a bomb, and the melody seems to come from the tavern. Bursting in, he shouts for Lucia and excitedly asks if she has finally decided to sing again. He sees it is Louis playing, not Lucia, and is baffled. Louis wrinkles his nose at the man's stench and accuses him of drinking with Tyrius all night again. The man sheepishly says Tyrius would not let him leave. He then demands to know why Louis is playing an instrument when he has never seen him do so before. Louis casually says Lucia gave him the bomb. Impressed by what he heard, the man asks when Louis started playing, and Louis says he began after arriving here. The man explodes in disbelief that Louis has played less than a week and is already that good. Louis smugly says he tried and it worked out, which only annoys the man further. Louis refocuses the conversation, asking about the task he assigned, and the man claims he has been clearing out every elixir left in Lufthagen. He boasts that thanks to Tyrius spreading the word, he has secured about 20 lower-grade elixirs and calls himself capable. Louis is unimpressed, questioning how that is capable and why he only managed 20. The man complains it was extremely hard because elixirs have become scarce in the city. Louis finds that suspicious, reasoning that in a busy port city elixirs should be more available no matter how rare. He asks if anyone else in the city is raising or researching magical beasts, and the man says not that he knows of. Louis concludes someone must be buying large quantities of elixirs before he can. He explains elixirs are used to enhance human attributes or to feed magical beasts. Since humans can only consume so much at once, he reasons bulk purchases point away from ordinary human use. He notes that raising magical beasts would require a steady, large supply of elixirs. The man argues that if such a thing were happening, Tyrius would surely know, echoing the Baron's expectations. Louis agrees that is exactly what is strange, wondering why someone would hide beast raising from the Baron. A sudden realization hits Louis, and he mutters that it cannot be. Louis asks Pablo to find out who has been buying elixirs recently, and Pablo says it may take time but asking Tyrius should help. Louis instructs him to track the final destination of the elixirs. He clarifies that he wants to know where all those elixirs are ultimately ending up. Once the location is found, Louis orders Pablo to take Finn and search the place thoroughly. Pablo agrees but asks why Louis is doing this, suspecting he plans to steal the elixirs. Louis says he is not sure yet, but he suspects the man named Damon they saw is far more dangerous than he first thought. Pablo says he understands and tries to go get some sleep, but Louis stops him. Louis orders Pablo to go out right now, leaving no room for delay. Pablo protests that he just got back and still has a hangover. Louis threatens to make him relive old memories if he keeps slacking, startling Pablo into fear. Panicking, Pablo immediately agrees and rushes out. He throws the door open and bolts into the street. Outside, the town is already lively with people celebrating as the festival atmosphere builds. Pablo is overwhelmed by the crowd, and Louis notes the Full Catch Festival is starting soon. Pablo asks about the festival, and Louis explains the city is now a trade hub though it began as a small fishing village. Louis recounts that the festival began as prayers for fishermen's safety and a bountiful catch, and the tradition continued into the modern celebration. He adds that the festival's highlight is the Night of Cain event. When Pablo asks what Night of Cain is, Louis explains it is a singing contest where the city's best singers compete for a prize. Louis notes Lucia used to win first place every time she participated, before her trauma silenced her. Louis's eyes sharpen as he considers this new angle, intrigued by what it implies. Since Pablo is heading out anyway, Louis says there's one more thing he wants him to do. Louis orders Pablo to sign him up for the Night of Cain. Unaware of Louis's decision, Lucia sits alone with the bomb nearby, as if sensing the past and the coming contest closing in. Lucia lies awake in tense silence, troubled by her thoughts. A child excitedly calls for Lucia, snapping her out of it. Lucia warmly checks in with Louis and asks if he has been practicing the song she taught him, and he proudly confirms. Louis hesitantly asks Lucia for a favor, and she invites him to say what he wants. He shyly asks Lucia to take him to the festival he heard about. Other children immediately beg to come too, while Louis grumbles at the interruption. Lucia laughs and acknowledges their curiosity about the festival amid all the recent commotion. She explains the inn is packed with tourists for festival season, making it hard to leave it unattended. Before she can refuse, the kids declare they are going anyway, leaving Lucia stunned. Their energetic orange-haired caretaker barges in and announces everyone is going to the festival. She insists they must go because the little princes and princess want it, doting on the kids. Lucia worries about closing the inn, but the caretaker argues it is only one day and they will not go bankrupt. She adds the real crowds have not even arrived yet, so they should enjoy today and work hard tomorrow. Lucia relents and agrees to get ready and head out. The caretaker rallies the children, and they cheer as they rush to leave. On the way out, the kids ask about festival food, and Lucia promises to buy them plenty of treats. Louis watches with a satisfied smile, thinking everything is proceeding according to his plan. As they enter town, Lucia happily suggests moving on to the next step. Night settles over the port city as the festival atmosphere fills the streets. Elsewhere, a disguised winged fairy-like servant in sunglasses scouts alone with a serious expression. She slips into the shadows and sneaks toward a warehouse area under the cover of night. She dives into a large barrel to hide, leaving only a faint trail of motion. From inside the barrel, she listens carefully and gauges the situation. She confirms she has found the warehouse Pablo mentioned. Recalling the tip that merchants trade elixirs at this western port warehouse, she resolves to investigate for Master Louis. She steels herself, vowing to uncover whatever is hidden there for Louis. She flies up toward a lit window to infiltrate the building. Inside, two rough men kill time playing cards among stacked crates. A spider drops on a thread near the ceiling, startling the infiltrator mid-sneak. One guard complains about boredom, and how long they must stay in the damp warehouse. The other snaps at him to stop whining and says the boss will contact them before the festival ends. A sudden noise makes the guards freeze and look around in alarm. Hearing it too, the infiltrator worries it might be a beast and braces herself. The guards hear the sound again and argue over whose turn it is to deal with it. The annoyed guard grumbles about how much the mysterious thing has to eat before it is satisfied. The infiltrator commands her trained mice to move immediately. A guard stomps at the scurrying mice, trying to crush them. He lunges and crashes into a crate, spilling green produce everywhere. The other guard insults him for being useless, and the first snaps back angrily. Hidden nearby, the infiltrator realizes the crates contain elixirs and is shocked by the discovery. She suspects all the stacked crates might be filled with elixirs too. Knowing this is serious, she decides she must learn what the smugglers plan to do with them. The guards blame the mess on poor cleaning and the mice, while the infiltrator stays concealed among the spilled fruit. Buried under the produce, she struggles to stay hidden and keep quiet. The guards continue bickering, one protesting that the rats are not his fault and mocking the idea he should clean too. Still complaining, the clumsy guard hauls a crate away, unknowingly carrying the hidden infiltrator with it. From inside the pile, she notices he is heading downstairs and wonders where they lead. He emerges onto a waterside dock beneath an archway, carrying the crate toward the dark harbor. He sets the crate down near the water, and a strange greenish vapor leaks out. He turns back suspiciously, sensing something off about the crate. A looming shadow rises nearby, suggesting something large is approaching in the darkness. The guard panics and screams as he realizes the danger. He bolts away down the corridor, abandoning the crate and whatever he saw. The infiltrator remains motionless inside the crate, waiting for the threat to pass. She peeks out cautiously and checks whether the guard has gone. She listens again, confused by the sudden silence. Her eyes widen in terror as she recognizes the returning presence of that thing. A monstrous blue creature with glowing red eyes appears near the crate, confirming the warehouse is guarded by a beast. At the festival above, a cute mascot-like monster roars, drawing attention. The crowd panics and runs as the mascot shouts for someone to stop, turning the street into chaos. Unaware of the danger elsewhere, the children celebrate and declare it the best festival ever. The caretaker boasts that the Full Catch Festival is famous across the winter continent. Lewis notes how enormous the festival is, comparing it to a massive parade from his past life. Lucia offers Lewis a skewer of frozen fruit, and he reacts with curiosity. She explains it is a festival-only treat and encourages him to try it. Lewis tastes it and is startled by the familiar flavor from his previous life. Lucia asks if he likes it, and he admits it is delicious despite his surprise. Music drifts through the festival, and Lewis perks up at the sound. He recognizes the music as Bomb, and Lucia explains it is for the Night of Cain preliminaries. Lewis eagerly drags Lucia toward the event, and she follows uncertainly. They arrive at a stage where a performer plays to a large crowd. A burly contestant struggles through his performance, underscoring how rough the preliminaries are. Lewis complains the performances are painfully bad, and Lucia explains the real talent appears in the finals. Lewis flatters Lucia, insisting she plays far better than these contestants. Lucia grows uneasy, sensing where Lewis is steering the conversation. Overwhelmed by the noise, Lewis insists they go up together, shocking Lucia. He pulls her along before she can protest, and she calls after him to wait. An official stops them, saying participants must sign up in advance. Lewis calmly claims he already registered both their names, Lewis and Lucia, and tells the official to check the list. The official recoils in alarm, realizing the name Lucia refers to the famed siren Lucia. The crowd recognizes her presence and murmurs that the real Lucia is here. People whisper that she no longer sings after an accident, and Lucia stiffens under the attention. Lucia falters, visibly shaken by the rumors and pressure. She turns pale, struggling to breathe as panic rises. Lewis holds her hand firmly, anchoring her as he leads her forward with his instrument nearby. He reassures her he will sing while she only plays the instrument, removing the burden of singing. Lucia is stunned, not understanding why he is doing this. In front of the watching crowd, Lewis gestures for Lucia to take her place. Lewis repeats his plan that he will sing and Lucia will accompany, trying to steady her resolve. Lucia remains frozen, still processing the situation. She tries to object, but Lewis's confident smile leaves her wavering. The official asks if they are ready or need more time, and Lucia hesitates. Lewis steps up and introduces himself as Lewis from the Siren's Shelter, charming the audience. He thanks the crowd for enduring the earlier mediocre acts, setting up his performance with playful confidence. Lewis dramatically announces his accompanist, Miss Lucia, forcing her into the spotlight. Lucia walks onto the stage with her instrument, still tense but committed to support him. Facing the roaring crowd, Lucia feels the weight of their expectations pressing in. She fights a surge of anxiety, trying to keep herself together. Lucia admits to Lewis that she does not think she can do this. Lewis asks her to give him her hand, insisting on direct reassurance. Holding her hand, Lewis uses a calming mind technique to tell her she will be okay and do great. Lucia jolts at the sudden warmth of his confidence taking hold. She realizes that holding Lewis's hand makes her feel strangely calm. Lewis gently promises everything will be fine and asks her to trust him. Lucia exhales, accepts his support, and thanks him for what his words mean to her. Lewis asks what song she wants, promising to match the accompaniment, and she agrees. Lewis addresses the crowd and begins, declaring he will sing for them. Spectators are confused that the child is singing instead of Lucia, doubting what they will hear. Lewis starts singing, his voice carrying clearly into the night. He sings out confidently to the crowd, filling the square with sound. Listeners are stunned by the purity and clarity of his voice, amazed by what they are hearing. Lewis continues with sparkling showmanship, his performance growing more assured. He sings boldly about living for centuries, turning the song into a grand, dramatic statement. The crowd is moved to tears, overwhelmed by a sadness that also feels cleansing. Lucia, accompanying quietly, watches in stunned silence as the song's emotion spreads. Lewis signals Lucia sharply to come in at the right moment, snapping her focus back to the music. Lucia begins playing in time, her fingers steadying as the melody takes shape. With Lucia's accompaniment, Lewis sings about living and laughing like everyone else, the performance becoming complete. Lewis belts the refrain with full force, pushing the emotion to its peak. The audience reacts intensely, choking up as the song's message hits them. On stage, Lucia keeps playing while Lewis holds his final pose, the moment hanging in the air. The official is left speechless, stunned by the unexpected quality of the act. The crowd murmurs in disbelief, trying to process what they just witnessed. People jolt and look around, the shock turning into excited commotion. Lewis smirks, satisfied that his plan has worked and the crowd is hooked. Cheers erupt as the audience demands another song, praising the performance. Lewis thanks everyone and proudly declares this is the power of K-pop in this world. Behind him, Lucia slumps with exhaustion and lingering nerves after holding it together. As the event ends, Lucia quietly thanks the crowd, her expression subdued and reflective. The night sky over the town returns to calm as the festival continues beyond the stage. Louis collapses onto a chair afterward, exhausted and admitting singing is harder than it looks. The caretaker praises Louis enthusiastically while the other kids cheer him on. Lucia apologizes and goes upstairs to rest, leaving the caretaker worried but accepting. The caretaker whispers Lucia's name, sensing something is wrong. Lucia lies on her bed in the dim room, drained and emotionally spent. The caretaker enters gently, calling out that she is coming in, and finds Lucia silent. She looks down with concern, realizing Lucia is struggling. Sitting beside her, the caretaker asks how Lucia's day was. The caretaker tries to lighten the mood, saying it was great, seeking reassurance. Lucia answers softly that it was good, but her tone remains heavy. The caretaker admits she was truly happy to see Lucia on stage again after so long. Lucia asks if the caretaker hates her, and the caretaker is shocked by the question. Lucia begins to blame herself for what happened to her parents, her guilt spilling out. The caretaker and Lucia both shout over her self-blame, refusing to let her continue. The caretaker firmly insists it was never Lucia's fault, and that her parents chose to protect the person they loved most. Lucia breaks down as the caretaker declares she cares about Lucia more than anything and forbids her from saying such things again. The caretaker pulls Lucia into a tight embrace, holding her as she cries. Still hugging her, the caretaker promises Lucia does not need to sing immediately, but if she keeps stepping onto the stage, she will sing again someday. Lucia, in tears, agrees as the caretaker reminds her that sirens are most beautiful when they sing. Outside the room, Louis pauses in silence, listening to their emotional exchange from the doorway. Louis smugly notes that things are going exactly as he expected. Confident the first phase of his operation succeeded, Louis heads deeper into the building. He opens a door and pauses, sensing something is wrong. Louis finds Finn collapsed and badly hurt, barely able to call him master. Shocked, Louis demands to know what happened and why Finn is so injured. Finn, bleeding, manages to point Louis toward the West End port warehouse and mentions a man responsible. Finn's condition worsens as Louis desperately tries to rouse him. Louis panics and screams Finn's name in alarm. Outside, the quiet night surrounds the warehouse where trouble is unfolding. A massive red-haired enforcer storms in, ready to use force. Inside, two men with weapons demand to know who the intruder is. The red-haired man bluntly reveals he's traced Luftagen's missing elixirs to this stash, stunning them. He seizes one man by the throat, cutting off his protests. Threatening violence, he insists they confess what they are hiding while he is still being polite. Damon arrives and coolly asks the red-haired man to release his subordinate. Damon addresses him as Mr. Pablo, and proposes talking to clear up misunderstandings. Pablo rejects the offer, saying people who want to talk usually have something to hide. Pablo agrees to hear Damon out, and demands an explanation for the elixirs hidden in the warehouse. Pablo presses that Damon may be plotting something shady, while Damon feigns innocence about the accusation. Damon claims the elixirs were legally purchased for export to the Autumn continent, and says Pablo's intel is wrong. Pablo insists on checking the warehouse himself, and Damon allows it with a calm smile. Pablo leads them onward, and the others follow tensely. He smashes through into a hidden passage, forcing the search underground. In a dim tunnel by water, Pablo wonders what this place is. Pablo explains it used to be a boat-building area back when Luftagen was only a fishing village. He adds it is now used to move goods and remarks it would be a perfect place to hide contraband. Pablo tightens his grip on his weapon, preparing to expose whatever is concealed. He calls out for a magical beast to reveal itself, expecting a reaction. A dark, swirling disturbance forms in the tunnel, hinting at something dangerous. Pablo's confidence falters as he senses something is off. He's confused when nothing responds to his provocation. Damon smugly points out that there is nothing there, and Pablo is shaken by the possibility. Refusing to accept it, Pablo pushes forward to verify with his own eyes. Damon follows, noting Pablo is more persistent than expected. Pablo searches the dead end and demands to know if there truly is nothing, while Damon repeats that it's empty. Damon's tone hardens as he warns Pablo not to push him any further. Pablo exhales in frustration, unsettled by the lack of evidence. They emerge back above ground, the tension still unresolved. Louis suddenly appears and greets Pablo as his uncle, surprising everyone. Louis says Moana sent him to find Pablo and check whether he's drinking again. Pablo says he already searched the underground waterway and found nothing, but Louis suggests the goods may have been moved and offers to handle it. Louis turns to Damon, saying he remembers him and confirming his name. Louis introduces himself and mentions he is staying at the Siren's shelter with Uncle Pablo. Damon's subordinate recognizes Louis as the kid from the Kane's night preliminaries, alarming Damon. Damon warmly confirms Louis is the one who sang with Lucia and compliments his singing. Damon praises Louis for managing to get Lucia on stage, calling it impressive. Damon asks Louis to persuade Pablo as well, and Louis asks what he means. Damon darkly warns that baseless accusations can lead to tragedy like what happened to Lucia's parents. Pablo explodes in rage at the cruel reference, and lunges to attack, but is restrained. Louis calmly says Pablo acts without thinking and promises to talk him down. Damon accepts Louis's offer, satisfied that the boy understands. As Damon shifts, someone notices something ominous about him. Lewis casually brings up a curiosity and asks Damon about the horn flute he carries. The question makes Damon visibly tense and alert. Damon demands to know why Lewis is interested in the flute. Lewis lies smoothly, saying it just looks nice and he thought of getting one. Damon warns such an item is rare and hard to obtain, then turns as if deciding something. A sudden sound draws attention toward a nearby door, heightening unease. Pablo asks Lewis whether they should report this to Tirius, and Lewis immediately refuses. Lewis argues that involving Tirius could spark a war in the city and get innocents killed. He adds they cannot ruin Lucia's return to the stage over this, leaving Pablo confused. Damon privately decides he must accelerate his own plan to bring Lucia back sooner than intended. Lewis, with chilling confidence, declares the coming festival will be the most spectacular yet. Damon abruptly grabs his subordinate and attacks, silencing loose ends. Furious about the operation unraveling, Damon berates his man for the warehouse mess and Pablo's snooping. Damon coldly calls the failure unfortunate, his intent turning murderous. He stabs the subordinate, blood spraying as the man collapses. Damon stands over the dying man, weapon in hand, leaving no doubt of his ruthlessness. Damon says they must move the plan forward, while another accomplice panics that the beast isn't fully tamed. Damon insists there's no time, since Pablo has caught their scent and exposure is imminent. He orders the sea beast released during tomorrow's Kane's night finals. Stepping away from the corpse, Damon promises it will make for a grand festival. The night sky hangs calm, masking the danger being set in motion. At the port, Lewis and Pablo patrol together near the ships. Pablo reports he still can't find the sea beast, but Lewis is sure Damon will act tonight now that he's been discovered. Lewis explains Damon will create chaos during the festival and then pose as the hero to impress the Lord and undermine Tirius. Pablo wonders if Damon is a druid like Jacob, but Lewis says no because he sensed no mental magic. Lewis hints Damon possesses a rare item that changes everything. Lewis identifies it as the Sea King's horn, a legendary flute carved from a sea dragon's horn. He explains the horn can tame sea beasts and bend them to the user's will. Lewis admits he doesn't know how Damon obtained it, but with it Damon can control the sea beast without druid powers. Lewis muses that stealing the horn would let them shorten their own plans to reach the Autumn continent, and Pablo realizes that is Lewis's true aim. Lewis orders Pablo to keep watch on the port because Damon will act tonight, leaving Pablo bewildered that he's being left behind. Lewis says he has another matter to handle first, and slips away. Lewis moves through the festive streets as townspeople gather and celebrate. He suddenly notices someone familiar in the crowd. Lewis spots a blonde noble lingering suspiciously near a window under guard. Lewis confronts the blonde man, startling him into a panic yelp. The blonde man awkwardly claims he only wanted to tell Lucia he's happy to see her back on stage. Lewis concedes he has some sense, then abruptly shifts the conversation to business, shocking him. Lewis assigns him a task: pack the plaza with people for tonight's event. When the blonde asks why, Lewis orders him to obey without questions and mocks him for thinking it's hard. The blonde boasts he could fill the plaza with just his family, and Lewis accepts and dismisses him. As Lewis turns to go, the blonde is left confused about what just happened. Lewis adds one more instruction: bring a flower bouquet to win favor at the right moment. The blonde repeats the phrase right moment, still not understanding the implication. Confetti drifts under the stars as the festival atmosphere swells. The plaza becomes crowded and lively, exactly as Lewis demanded. Lucia and Lewis arrive to find the crowd far larger than expected, and Lewis notes the blonde actually delivered. The roar of the crowd rises as the event begins in earnest. A performer on stage thanks the audience, feeding the excitement. Lucia watches in disbelief, realizing she never expected to see a day like this again. She silently credits Lewis for making this return possible. The announcer calls for the next act, building anticipation. He introduces the much-talked-about contestants, Lewis and Lucia, to thunderous welcome. Lucia is overwhelmed and anxious, struggling to breathe under the pressure. Lewis calls her Nuna, snapping her attention. He takes her hand gently, grounding her in the moment. Lewis tells Lucia she has done enough running from painful memories. Lucia is startled, unsure what he means. Lewis asks what her late parents would think of her avoiding singing out of guilt. Lucia, shaken, asks how Lewis could know about her parents. Instead of answering, Lewis heads toward the stage, leaving Lucia stunned. Lewis tells her to listen carefully and consider what her parents truly wanted for her. Lucia repeats the question to herself, caught between fear and longing. Lewis steps onto the stage alone with an instrument, facing the crowd. The audience murmurs in confusion, wondering why Lucia isn't up there with him. Lewis begins to play, his fingers striking the strings to start the performance. He sings a gentle story of falling asleep warm on a cold winter night and dreaming of a sparkling snowy field. As he continues about snowflakes falling in gray slush, the crowd listens, surprised by the familiar imagery. People recognize it as a childhood song many sang with their parents. Amazed, Lewis chose something everyone knows. The audience feels enchanted by Lewis's beautiful voice, as if under a spell. Lewis sings of being chased in a dark forest and crying for his mother and father in fear. The lyrics hit Lucia hard, and she realizes the plea mirrors her own buried pain. Lucia flashes to a warm memory of her parents playing music as children laughed around them. She trembles, understanding the question of what her parents wanted is not about punishment but love. Driven by emotion, Lucia steps forward toward the stage. Louis plays on and looks to her with quiet encouragement, inviting her to join. Lucia recalls the lyric about looking down at a child asleep under a blanket, her voice catching. Tears well as she remembers the child whimpering from a bad dream, and she feels her own fear finally being seen. A comforting lullaby is sung to a frightened child, promising that Dad will drive off any monster with his axe. The song continues, assuring the child that Mom will hold them tight and keep them safe. Lucia is jolted by the memory as her name is called, leaving her shaken and clasping her hands. In the tavern, someone asks Lucia if she remembers that childhood lullaby and why it matters now. Louis admits he asked because he wants someone to hear the lullaby again, as if reclaiming it. Lucia realizes Louis's earlier question came from that longing, and she tearfully whispers his name. A musician plays and the lullaby's promise is voiced again, vowing to stay by the listener's side until warmth returns. A hand lifts as the performance reaches its end, signaling the crowd's response. On a festival stage, the performers face a cheering town square under the night sky. Someone in the audience hesitates, breath catching before joining the applause. The crowd erupts into loud praise, and the noble boy basks in the ovation. The celebration turns frantic as people recognize the siren's return and panic spreads through the crowd. The singer smiles through tears, overwhelmed by the moment and the audience's reaction. She bows and thanks everyone sincerely as the crowd continues to roar. Away from the stage, the white-haired boy smugly notes that one part of his plan is complete. He decides it's time to proceed with the rest of his scheme without letting the festival mood be ruined. At the harbor, a small boat cuts through the dark water toward the docks. A cloaked man arrives by boat and steps toward the waterfront under the stars. He confronts someone at the docks, accusing them of sneaking around like a rat. A burly red-bearded man taunts back, suggesting the man is hiding something valuable on offshore rocks. The cloaked man coldly compares the Redbeard's behavior to Lucia's parents, implying a repeating pattern. The Redbeard bristles, demanding why his friends are being brought up now. The cloaked man reveals Lucia's parents once hounded him too, until a tragic accident killed them. The Redbeard suspects the cloaked man caused that accident, but the man dodges responsibility with a shrug. The cloaked man threatens that anyone who interferes with his work will not be allowed to live in peace. Enraged, the Redbeard charges with his massive hammer, intent on killing him. The hammer strike crashes forward with explosive force, aimed to crush the cloaked man. The cloaked man blocks the blow with a sword, sparks flying from the impact. He sneers that he wouldn't go after Tyrius without power to back him up. A surge of force ripples out as he unleashes that hidden power. The Redbeard realizes the situation has shifted as armed men surround them, tightening the trap. The cloaked man calmly says not to worry about the two daughters from the Siren's shelter. He promises he will handle those girls personally, with chilling intent. The Redbeard tries to break through the surrounding men, roaring that he'll kill the cloaked man. Frustrated, the Redbeard demands everyone get out of his way as he pushes forward. The cloaked man turns away toward the sea, casually suggesting they resume the festival as if nothing happened. A voice interrupts, telling the cloaked man he's in the wrong place. The white-haired boy appears, mocking that the festival is at the plaza and calling the man a lost puppy. The cloaked man warns the boy that kids shouldn't be out so late and he'll get in trouble. The boy shrugs off the warning, saying his household is laid back so it's fine. He adds he wasn't planning to go easy on the man anyway. The boy vows harsh punishment, especially for making Lucia cry. The cloaked man welcomes the challenge, saying he won't hold back against the child and the boy won't hold back either. The cloaked man lunges to strike, trying to overwhelm the boy with speed and reach. A purple barrier flares as the boy's spatial magic triggers, halting the attack mid-swing. The cloaked man is stunned by spatial magic and wonders if the boy is a mage, but the boy tells him to stop talking and attack. The boy taunts him to choose who goes first, pressing him into action. The cloaked man slams down with a crushing blow, forcing a violent clash. The impact drives the cloaked man back into a wall, leaving him rattled and injured. From a distance, the boy coolly notes the man managed to block that hit. The boy needles the Redbeard by comparing him to someone named Pablo, infuriating him mid-fight. The boy senses something and turns, alerted by a new presence. A massive sea serpent suddenly looms behind the boy, its jaws and glowing eyes promising death. The sea serpent snaps forward, its bite crashing down with terrifying force. The boy is nearly crushed as the serpent's head slams into the dockside area. He retreats, admitting the surprise almost killed him as the beast presses in. The boy's expression hardens as he realizes the threat has escalated beyond the man alone. The sea serpent thrashes and surges, tearing up stone and sending debris flying. The serpent coils across the harbor district, dwarfing the boy and the cloaked man as destruction spreads. The cloaked man praises the boy's skill but declares the boy's little act ends here. The boy decides it's earlier than planned, but he'll deal with the cloaked man first. The cloaked man powers up, gathering strength for a decisive move. The boy channels blue energy, preparing his own counterattack. The sea serpent hesitates, confused as the boy's magic builds and the situation shifts again. The cloaked man kicks the serpent, and orders it to attack the brat immediately. The serpent's eye narrows as it focuses on the boy, readying to strike. The boy realizes the cloaked man hasn't fully tamed the beast yet, revealing a weakness to exploit. He decides to take control himself, confident he can override the serpent's will. The boy casts mental magic domination, forcing his will into the sea serpent. The sea serpent convulses and resists, snarling as the domination takes hold imperfectly. The boy commands the serpent to catch and eat the cloaked man, turning the monster against its handler. The cloaked man panics as the serpent swings toward him, no longer obeying his orders. Desperate, the cloaked man raises the Sea King's horn to his lips to regain control. A violent, ominous sound erupts as the horn's power surges through the sea serpent. The serpent lashes out with renewed force, breaking free of the boy's control. The boy is thrown back by the backlash, forced to retreat from the serpent's rampage. He admits his mental magic isn't strong enough to overpower the Sea King's horn. Unable to fight the sea beast head-on in the middle of the city, the boy searches for another plan. He notices the nearby boats and the open water, an idea forming. The boy snaps to a decision, convinced his new idea could work. He taunts the sea serpent to get its attention and draw it where he wants it. Grinning, he challenges the beast to a proper fight on his terms. He launches himself off the dock toward the sea, deliberately diving away from the city. The boy hits the water with a splash, disappearing beneath the surface. The Redbeard's subordinate cries out for his master as the fight shifts toward the water. The sea serpent plunges after the boy, churning the sea into a violent wake. The cloaked man laughs, claiming the boy is a fool for challenging a sea serpent in its own domain. Underwater, the serpent descends toward the boy, confident in its advantage. The boy calmly beckons the monster closer, unfazed by the depths. He continues sinking and repositioning, luring the serpent into pursuit. The water roils as the chase accelerates beneath the surface. The sea serpent roars and surges, closing the distance with predatory certainty. It dives deeper after the boy, intent on swallowing him whole. The boy steels himself, holding his breath and committing to the gamble. The serpent opens its enormous jaws and tries to engulf him. The jaws snap shut with crushing force, aiming to end the fight instantly. A burst of purple energy flares as the boy triggers spatial magic at the critical moment. A small dragon-like familiar appears and clamps onto the serpent, disrupting the bite. The familiar fully manifests underwater, bracing itself against the monster's maw. The familiar declares that underwater it can stop holding back and will unleash full dragon transformation. It gathers power, preparing to strike decisively. The transformed familiar attacks while insulting the serpent, turning the fight into a brutal brawl. The serpent thrashes and coughs as the familiar's blows land repeatedly. The familiar taunts the serpent for enjoying itself earlier, now forced onto the defensive. It declares the serpent has met its match today and presses the assault. The familiar dives straight down into the serpent's face with a heavy impact. The serpent screams as the familiar continues pounding it underwater. Wounded, the serpent tries to pull away, its roar weakening as it retreats. The familiar grabs hold and refuses to let the serpent escape, dragging it back into the fight. It insists the fun is just starting and won't allow the battle to end yet. The familiar whips the serpent around in a spiraling underwater struggle, keeping it trapped. Back on the docks, the exhausted Redbeard wonders if the chaos is finally over. He worries about his master's safety, realizing even dragons face danger underwater. He notices the sea beginning to churn strangely near the harbor. A massive whirlpool forms, signaling something enormous is rising from below. The vortex erupts upward in a towering column of water, blasting toward the sky. The Redbeard stares in shock, unable to comprehend what he's seeing. The sea serpent is flung up into the air, water streaming from its body as it's launched out of the sea. The cloaked man is horrified that the sea serpent is somehow in the sky. The airborne serpent begins to fall, its huge body casting doom over the dockside. The cloaked man scrambles in panic, realizing the falling monster could crush him. He braces as debris and impact shockwaves threaten to bury him. He is slammed and dragged across rubble, struggling to stay conscious. He screams in terror as the danger closes in and he loses control of the situation. The sea serpent crashes down into the city with a catastrophic impact, shattering stone and sending dust everywhere. The Sea King's horn is flung free in the chaos, tumbling through the air. The horn hits the ground and bounces, skittering across broken cobblestones. It lands hard amid dust and rubble, momentarily still. Nearby, the sea serpent lies battered and coiled, stunned by the violent landing. The Redbeard emerges from the dust, realizing something has gone terribly wrong. A sudden splash of water and movement draws his attention upward. The dragon familiar hovers dramatically before the full moon, water spiraling around it like a crown. The white-haired boy reappears with a satisfied smile, purple energy flickering around him. The Redbeard complains that all this destruction was just the boy blowing off steam, while the boy admits he hasn't transformed in ages. The cloaked man groans from the rubble, barely able to move after the crash. He crawls weakly, battered and desperate, trying to recover. Spotting it, he reaches for the Sea King's horn, clinging to it as his last hope. The boy snatches the horn away before the man can grab it, cutting off his control. Holding the horn, the boy mocks the cloaked man for still relying on the Sea King's horn. He promises to put the horn to very good use from now on, claiming it as his prize. The boy tries to blow the horn, but the notes come out awkwardly and wrong. The Redbeard teases that the boy is good at violin but not flute, and the boy protests defensively. The horn suddenly cracks under strain, splintering as its power destabilizes. Both the boy and the Redbeard freeze as they realize the horn is breaking in the boy's hands. The Redbeard desperately asks if it can be fixed, begging to just glue it back together. The boy stares in stunned silence, realizing he just ruined the artifact. He collapses in despair over the shattered pieces, lamenting the loss of his fast ferry ride. A rumble from the dust makes the boy look up, sensing the danger isn't finished. The sea serpent rises again, bleeding and furious, glaring with renewed murderous intent. The boy gulps and admits he's in trouble now that the enraged monster is back on its feet. A sea serpent suddenly surges back into a frenzy, forcing Lewis and the red-bearded warrior to brace for another violent charge. Lewis realizes the Sea King's horn control has been broken, so the beast is rampaging on pure instinct. As Lewis tries to assess the danger, he senses the situation worsening before he can finish his thought. The serpent barrels through the street toward the town's lights, and Lewis panics at where it is headed. Lewis curses as he deduces the monster is being drawn to the bright festival lights and will plow straight into the crowd. The red-bearded warrior is horrified at the number of people outside, and both realize they must stop it immediately. Lewis orders Finn to find the twins and bring them, and Finn darts off at once. Lewis tells Pablo to stay with him to stop the monster, and Pablo accepts the command. With the serpent still charging, Lewis and the warrior commit to intercepting it head-on. Elsewhere in a dark alley, a man and a blonde woman stroll together, laughing and unaware of the looming danger. The man flirts and warns that wandering dark alleys at night is dangerous, but the woman feels safe with him. As he boasts that he can handle danger, they both pause, hearing an ominous noise approaching. The sea serpent erupts into view with a terrifying roar, closing in on them. The couple screams in shock and scrambles to run, urging each other to get up and flee. The serpent's gaping jaws descend on them, and they are caught in its path. A heavy object is hurled through the air toward the monster as a desperate intervention. The thrown object slams into the serpent's mouth, momentarily disrupting its bite. The red-bearded warrior taunts the serpent and draws its attention away from the civilians. The monster locks onto the provocation, its eye narrowing with predatory focus. It lunges after the warrior, and he is nearly overwhelmed by the sudden rush. Pablo urgently calls for Lewis to act now, pleading for help as the danger peaks. Lewis casts a spatial spell, forming a barrier-like spatial veil to contain the beast. The serpent crashes into the shimmering spatial field and is forced back by the containment. It thrashes and snarls inside the veil, struggling against the invisible confinement. Lewis notes they have managed to lock it up, and prepares to calm it with a mental technique. He begins a mental spell, focusing his power to pacify the creature. The serpent's rage spikes again, roaring as it resists the attempt. A violent surge shakes the spatial field, threatening to destabilize the containment. Lewis realizes the spatial veil is shaking too much to safely cast a mental spell under these conditions. The red-bearded warrior hears someone calling him and turns, confused by the sudden shout. Armed men led by a stern blonde officer rush in, arriving as reinforcements. The officer is stunned by the monster's appearance, and Lewis identifies it as one of Damon's creations meant to cause festival chaos. Furious, the officer demands to know where Damon is, but Lewis says Damon likely escaped in the confusion, and they must handle the beast first. Lewis snaps at Pablo to stop chatting and focus, drawing everyone back to the immediate fight. Lewis orders them to coordinate and hold the monster down with teamwork. The officer and his men agree, and the red-bearded warrior moves to assist as instructed. Finn returns with the twins, and Lewis tells the two children to distract the serpent, while Pablo prepares a stronger move. The twins eagerly volunteer and leap into action, confident they can help. The twins strike the serpent with coordinated attacks, buying Lewis precious time. Lewis judges the distraction successful and hopes it will give them enough time to finish the plan. Pablo signals that they are ready, and Lewis turns to execute the next step. The serpent shifts within the veil, still dangerous but momentarily exposed to a decisive counter. It lashes out with its tail, trying to break free and scatter the attackers. The monster surges forward in a burst of speed, forcing everyone to react quickly. The red-bearded warrior shouts for the team to pull, initiating a restraint maneuver. Ropes cinch tight around the serpent's head, and it jolts in surprise as it is bound. The restrained serpent thrashes against the ropes while the men strain to keep it from escaping. The officer orders everyone to hold on and not let go, committing to the risky restraint. One of the twins is flung into the air amid the chaos, showing how dangerous the struggle remains. Lewis gathers power for a multi-spell, preparing a more forceful spatial technique. He compresses the spell's energy in his hands, concentrating it into a single crushing effect. Lewis unleashes spatial compression, slamming the serpent down and cracking the ground under the impact. The serpent groans in pain, its resistance weakening under the overwhelming force. Lewis approaches and places a steadying hand on the monster, shifting from force to control. He praises the restraint effort and promises to ease the creature's mind now that it is pinned. Lewis casts mental spell pacification, flooding the serpent with calming influence. The serpent's eye clears, signaling it is regaining awareness and no longer purely enraged. The monster relaxes under the spell, and Lewis gently reassures it as it settles. Lewis's calm demeanor surprises the officer, who watches warily as the threat seems to fade. The officer raises his sword to finish the monster, intent on killing it despite the change. Lewis blocks the officer's strike with magic, stopping the execution at the last moment. The officer is baffled, but Lewis insists there is no need to kill it. Lewis explains the creature was controlled by Damon against its will and should not be blamed. The twins bounce around happily, while the officer protests that a monster cannot be allowed to roam free. Lewis assures them he will take responsibility for the creature and handle it safely. The pacified serpent withdraws toward the sea, leaving the town behind under the night sky. Lewis gives the serpent firm instructions to stay away from human cities and return to where it belongs to live quietly. As the serpent swims off, the children wave goodbye and warn it not to follow bad people again. Lewis declares their work here done and tells the group it is time to get ready to depart, confusing the twins. Lewis clarifies they will head out now that their mission is complete. Far out on the water, a lone man rows a small boat under the stars, moving with grim purpose. The rower sees that Damon will not go down like this, vowing continued resistance. He swears revenge on those who wronged him, even if it means burning Luftigen to the ground. A wooden oar drifts in the water as someone notices something strange happening nearby. The sea serpent surfaces near the small boat, startling the rower as it looms over him. The man is jolted and thrown off balance by the sudden encounter. He tumbles helplessly toward the serpent's open maw, realizing too late what is happening. He screams in terror as the serpent closes in, unable to escape. The serpent dives back into the sea with a splash, ending the threat to the town but not to the would-be arsonist. Underwater, the serpent swims away into the depths, carrying the consequence of Lewis's mercy off-screen. The man sinks beneath the surface, struggling as the water closes over him. He continues to fall deeper into the blue, disappearing into the darkness below. Back at the festival, Lucia steps down from the stage as confetti drifts through the air. Exhausted, Lucia admits that singing 4 extra songs drained all her energy. She worries because Lewis has been missing since the first song, and she cannot find him. Someone calls out to Lucia, making her turn in surprise. Carrie rushes in and hugs Lucia, praising her performance and calling her amazing. Carrie tells Lucia their parents would have been proud to see her sing again, and Lucia is moved. Nearby, a blonde nobleman clears his throat, trying to get their attention. He awkwardly asks what Carrie is doing over there, flustered by the situation. A large bouquet appears in his hands, signaling he has brought a formal gift. Carrie smirks mischievously, clearly enjoying how nervous he is. Carrie announces to Lucia that the blonde noble has something for her, and he braces himself. Carrie encourages him to give the flowers now, insisting gifts matter most at moments like this. The noble stammers through a formal congratulation for Lucia's successful return to the stage. He addresses her as their siren, making Lucia freeze at the unexpected intimacy of the title. Lucia accepts the bouquet and thanks Carrie sincerely for arranging it. The noble laughs nervously as Lucia stands with the flowers, the moment turning gentle. Away from them, Lewis watches the happy crowd from the shadows, quietly observing their joy. Lewis concludes they will be fine without him from now on, and he prepares to leave. A few days later, a ship sails under a bright sky, marking the group's departure. A sailor announces that the Half-Sunny is about to set sail for the autumn continent, and urges passengers to board promptly. Carrie runs up shouting for them not to go, trying to stop the departure at the last second. She begs the twins to stay and be like little siblings to her, but they only laugh and tickle her as they cling close. The red-bearded warrior says he is leaving too, while Carrie pretends she does not care even as she clearly does. As the group gathers, Lucia spots Lewis and calls his name, realizing he is truly going. Lucia asks Lewis if he will come back, and he hesitates, searching for the right answer. Carrie tearfully grabs Lewis's hands and demands he promise to return, overwhelming him with emotion. Lewis awkwardly says he will drop by if he gets the chance, trying to soften the goodbye. Lucia wraps Lewis in a tight hug from behind, holding him as if to anchor him in place. Through tears, Lucia asks him to come back and make a real promise. Lewis finally promises he will return, calling her Lucia Nuna as he seals the vow. The blonde noble watches the exchange, startled by what it reveals about Lewis's closeness to Lucia. Lewis smugly remarks that Lucia Nuna's hug was warm, provoking the noble's anger. Lewis opens a box and notices something inside glowing with significance. The noble recognizes the item as the Siren's Tear, a precious jewel kept as a treasure. He says he is giving it because Lewis kept his promise and helped Lucia sing again. Lewis examines the ring included with the gift, unsure what it is meant for. The noble explains the ring bears his family crest and will let Lewis receive help anywhere in Luftigen. Lewis calls it a free pass, while the noble admits he would rather Lewis never come back despite the gift. Lewis cheerfully calls him Carrie Hyung and teases him, while the noble snaps that he will handle things himself and tells Lewis to stop meddling. Lewis notices the noble's clenched fist and the tension beneath his words as the farewell turns prickly. The noble, blushing, thanks Lewis for everything, his sincerity breaking through the irritation. Lewis mutters that the noble is a brat as he watches him storm off in frustration. Lewis reflects that even the noble has a cute side for his age, amused by the contradiction. The officer approaches the red-bearded warrior, asking if he is leaving already and checking on port restoration. The officer reports there was significant damage, but no lives were lost, and they are fortunate overall. He then remarks that Lewis does not seem like an ordinary child, watching him with new suspicion. Recalling how Lewis subdued the sea serpent instantly, the officer admits it was beyond any human's capability. The red-bearded warrior plays it off as Lewis being just his nephew, and the officer accepts the cover as a distant relative. The officer promises to keep everything about Lewis secret and shakes the warrior's hand, earning his thanks. The ship pulls away from the dock, its hull cutting through the water as the journey begins. From the pier, the group watches the ship depart and calls farewell as it heads out to sea. Lucia waves and shouts after Lewis to come back, repeating the promise she needs to believe in. On deck, Lewis and the twins wave goodbye to Moana and Lucia, saying they had a great time. The sails catch the wind and the ship accelerates, committing them to the voyage. Waves slap against the bow as the vessel surges forward into open water. A twin asks Lewis where they are going now, surprised he never explained the destination. Lewis answers they are heading to Dortmund port on the autumn continent, and will cross the continent by land afterward. The red-bearded warrior asks Pablo how long it will take to reach Dortmund, already uneasy about the trip. Lewis notices the warrior acting strangely and asks what he is doing and why he is behaving like that. The warrior looks deathly pale and unwell, suddenly overwhelmed by nausea. Lewis realizes he is seasick as the warrior weakly claims he might die and calls for his master. The warrior vomits dramatically over the side, confirming the severity of his seasickness. Lewis mocks him for being a big guy who cannot handle a little seasickness. The warrior groans miserably while Lewis complains that he is truly annoying. Lewis places a hand on the warrior's back, deciding to end the suffering rather than keep teasing. Lewis casts a mental spell of drowsiness, forcing the warrior into sleep to stabilize him. The warrior's eyes glaze as he drifts off, finally quiet and no longer retching. Lewis says the warrior will sleep for a few hours and feel better after waking, then tells the twins to go check out their cabin. On the ship's deck, a red-haired captive lies unconscious and drooling as three white-haired youths walk away, leaving him behind. The captive stirs slightly but remains slumped on the planks, still out cold under the open sky. A hooded elder inspects the downed man and judges him to be at least tier 3, surprised that someone that strong was put to sleep so easily. Nearby, the white-haired pair chat smugly while the hooded elder lingers by the fallen body, quietly weighing what this means. The elder's expression sharpens with interest as he concludes the long voyage may turn out far more entertaining than he expected.